the Better Brakes 300. The marathon brings together the Peter Jackson Nissan Skylines against the JPS BMWs of Jim Richards and Tony Longhurst. There's Colin Bond's nifty Ignis Alpha and a horde of Commodores led by Peter McLeod, Mike Bergman and Brian Callahan. We'll also be taking you to Charlotte, North Carolina for the Coca-Cola World 600 as Richard Petty, Jeff Bodine, Tim Richmond and the good old boys strut their stuff before 140,000 spectators. If you're into bikes, then don't go away because we've got the handlebar set covered with the continuing World 500 Championships from Europe and all the lumps, bumps and jumps of the International Supercross at Daytona as Ricky Johnson and the Jet Jocks cut loose on this human demolition course. It's a big weekend overseas with Brocky, Moffat, Lowe, Harvey and Grice turning on the fireworks in the Spa 24-hour Enduro in Belgium. We'll keep you posted how they're doing against the BMWs, Rovers, Ford Sierras and Volvos in Europe's most prestigious race around the clock. First up, let's go to Charlotte Super Speedway as Jeff Bodine and Tim Richmond lead the field in for the start of the Coca-Cola World 600.
And we're ready to drop the green flag. The Coca-Cola 600 is underway. And it's Jeff Bodine and Tim Richmond side by side heading down into turn one. As this car will try to just feel things out here on the first lap, and Richmond and Bodine breaking open just a little bit over Dale Earnhardt in car number 3, who is running third. Fourth is Sterling Marlin, driving in the Haas Ellington prepared car, and now they drive single file as they head into the turn 3 on lap number 1. Jeff Bodine out in front, Tim Richmond right behind, and Dale Earnhardt looks like he wants to make a charge and a move to the front real early in this race.
Looks like Earnhardt's already starting to do a little bit of headhunting back there as he works over the rear deck of Tim Richmond. But Sterling Marlin, the youngster from Columbia, Tennessee, making a move. Marlin is a young driver who would like to make his plates here in Winston Cup competition. He ran awfully strong at Daytona and Talladega, only had the engine come unglued. He had a 9th place finish at Daytona. Would have had a better one, but Gant's making a move.
Harry Gant is coming out on the inside. He is now running in third position behind Bodine and Richmond. Then it is Harry Gant and Dale Earnhardt and Sterling Marlin. So very exciting racing here on the first couple of laps in the Coca-Cola 600. There's a long way to go today, but these drivers want to get to the front and get there in a hurry.
Harry Gant, no stranger to this racetrack. He led over 140 laps here back in October. He would have won the race, but the engine came apart just a few laps from the end. Gant likes this track. His home, Taylorsville, North Carolina, only about an hour from Charlotte. As Tim Richmond now riding very high in turn 2. Richmond gets the car gathered back in, but Gant still on the chart.
Harry Gant is flying as they head into turn 3, and Gant is going to take the lead away from Jeff Bodine. It is Harry Gant who started 8th position today, and on the 3rd lap is now leading this Coca-Cola 600. Harry Gant in car number 33, the Skull Bandit, across the start-finish line, and Gant is the lead, followed by Bodine and Tim Richmond. Earnhardt and Sterling Marlin having quite a battle for 4th place, but they are now car lengths behind the leaders as Harry Gant is beginning to break away a bit, and he is really dialed in early in this race. Down on pit road, that is David Pearson. Will this be a scheduled pit stop for the 21 team?
I would think it'd be a little bit early for Pearson's car to come in. It may be scheduled. He would probably be in about 8 or 10 laps from now on a regular stop. They are changing the right side tires, making a pretty significant chassis adjustment on the car. They add fuel to it, and they brought the car down off the jacks. They have not made a driver change.
David Pearson is moving down pit road. Also coming down pit road is Greg Sachs in car number 10 as he has the sheet metal damage on his car repaired, and he is back out in the race.
You know, Greg Sachs was the subject of probably the biggest upset in Winston Cup stock car racing history. Last year at Daytona in July, the Firecracker 400 won by Greg Sachs with Gary Nelson as the crew chief. Sachs took that car down there and won the victory in the Dyegard car, and that put him in the ride full time for Dyegard. And Gary Nelson, of course, has left and gone with the Rick Hendrick team. But
now they're bringing Bill Elliott down on pit road, and the leaders are starting to pit now. We are going to have a rash of pit stops down on pit road. Elliott is in, and I understand that the leader, Tim Richmond, is getting ready to come on pit road in just a moment.
Well, Bill Elliott in for his routine pit stop in the Coors Ford. They will change right side tires. Probably only see a 2-tire change, I would expect, under green.
Let's go down now to pit road. Our GM Goodrich pit reporter, Steve Martin.
It's a 19-second pit stop for Bill Elliott of the number 9 Coors machine as the Ford rolls off pit road and lumbers down into turn 1. Bill Elliott now running right, or before that pit stop was running second and running very well here at Charlotte Motor Speedway, where he won in the fall of '85.
There is trouble in turn 4. It's Eddie Bierschwale, car number 32, involved in one of it. Jeff Bodine did a fine piece of driving to get out of that mess. It's Connie Saylor also in car 51. You see it now from the in-car smoke over there, and several cars hit the wall, and now caution comes out on the racetrack.
Well, caution on the speedway, and by our calculations, Darrell Waltrip had not made a pit stop yet, so this will be a break for Waltrip. He'll get to make his stop under caution. So Darrell Waltrip had not been in. Neil Bonnet had just made a pit stop as the caution came out, as the Connie Saylor car now moving, it's refired and moving down toward pit road. The right side tires on that car are flat. The car is...
Let's take a look at it again. You see Eddie Bishwell in the number 32 car, and Jeff Bodine. What a piece of driving to just get by, along with Terry Labonte, several other drivers, to get by the Eddie Bishwell car. It looked like Eddie might be sliding up that racetrack a bit. And you see Connie Saylor's car coming to rest. Here's another angle from it, Jerry.
Well, we see, look at Bodine on the bottom of the racetrack playing bob and weave. He cranks the steering wheel hard to the right. I tell you, that's a timely move. I've seen one. Bodine could have been involved. It could have ended his day prematurely. He got the car through there.
Harry Gant stuck in the pits right now as the hood is still up on the 33 car here. We'll try to talk to Travis Carter as soon as we can. Travis is kind of smiling right now at what's going on under the hood as one of the crew members tries to make an adjustment. Now they've got the hood down, and the Skull Bandit 33 car is underway.
Well, Harry Gant's down and away, but anytime they have to take the hood up on these cars, it is not a good sign, Jerry.
Well, it's not, but they don't seem to be overly concerned down there right now. Travis Carter and Wayne Bumgarner and Hickey Eames and the guys in that Skull crew were basically looking under the hood. They didn't make any significant adjustments on that car, but in Gant moving back on the racetrack doesn't seem to be having a problem. He didn't look like he had a problem before because the car was performing flawlessly. He was running awfully strong up toward the front of the pack, so you know, that car was hopefully nothing's wrong.
Pace car is down on pit road. We're back to green. And here comes Neil Bonnet, car number 12, leading across the start-finish line. Morgan Shepherd right behind him. Neil Bonnet has not driven up front much this season. He's had some problems in that number 12 car, and there's been a lot of speculation about Neil Bonnet as to what his plans might be a year from now, that he might not be with Junior Johnson. But for right now, he's at the front of the pack.
Well, a lot of folks are concerned that he may not be there. Of course, the deal, the sponsorship with Junior Johnson is up after this year, and it's up for renegotiation. So a lot of people are concerned that what Neil may do and what Darrell Waltrip may do. But right now, I'm sure Junior Johnson's got to be proud of the fact that Neil Bonnet's leading the World 600.
Our good Richmond reporter, Steve Martin, is standing down now in the Harry Gant pit.
All right, I've got crew chief Travis Carter here. Travis, what happened? Why'd the hood have to go up?
Well, we weren't handling good as we're going to have to be to win the race, and Harry felt if he had a shock absorber change on the left front that it would tighten back into the parts, and that's been a problem for us all day, so we're going to give this a shot and see what happens, and if that doesn't work, we're going to have to resort to some other changes.
Travis Carter, crew chief for the Harry Gant car, the number 33, having some problems just a moment ago.
And before you David Pearson fans get all excited, his name was posted on the leaderboard. A lot of people cheered, but it was an error from NASCAR, and he is indeed a couple laps down. It is Tim Richmond, who is now running second, Vinnie Parsons third, and Neil Bonnet has dropped back a bit. 153 laps complete. Tim Richmond, Cale Yarborough are 1 and 2. Here's the 150 lap summary. 225 miles of 600 complete. We've had 5 caution flags for 18 laps. There have been 20 lead changes among 18 drivers. Our average speed, 133.421 miles an hour. It's been a pretty quick Coca-Cola 600 today.
Might be able to tell some of the folks the caution flags. Ken Reagan spun early on. Brad Teague was involved in a spin and damaged his car. Joe Rutland's car was damaged and had to go to the garage for a lengthy stay. His car, the Quaker State Buick, now back on the speedway. Connie Saylor and Eddie Bierswell got together up in turn 4. They tagged each other for a little bit, and Phil Parsons produced a spin, and Chet Phillips spun over in turn 2. That's the 5 cautions we've had thus far. No major incidents thus far, and not that much attrition.
Let's talk strategy for a minute between Tim Richmond and Cale Yarborough. Cale's up where he wants to be, near the front. He's a charger, an aggressive race driver. Is he going to try to make a move now and go ahead and extend the car and take the leader away from Tim, or do you think he's going to be content to ride in second place for a while?
Well, they're paying some pretty good lap leader bonus awards, but Cale also realizes that he and Tim Richmond have been able to pull away from the rest of the field. They no longer have to worry about Rusty Wallace and Bill Elliott and Darrell Waltrip and the like back in the field. So as long as they can stay together with nose to tail, they can continue to pull away. You know, you notice the groove that Yarborough runs up on the high part of the racetrack. The Ford seems to run better when you keep the RPMs up. They don't really have the torque whenever you grind it down on the bottom of the racetrack and have to get back in the gas. The Chevrolet or the General Motors cars can get down on the bottom of the racetrack, get in the brakes and get back on the gas, and seem to come off pretty well. But Cale needs to keep the car wound up pretty tight and run the high groove.
Richmond and Yarborough now working on some slower traffic. Rookie driver Mike Waltrip will be passed in just a moment, and they do get by him. Tim Richmond in car number 25 out of Ashland, Ohio. He's 30 years old. He won yesterday. You see them going by Michael Waltrip, Darrell Waltrip's younger brother, number 23. Waltrip, by the way, leads the rookie points race in car number 23. As we said, Richmond from Ashland, Ohio. It's his first year with the Rick Hendrick team, and Harry Hyde is his crew chief, and it does take a little bit of time. As you see, Richmond get a little squirrely, and Cale Yarborough is going to take that advantage to get by him. As they cross the start-finish line, now headed to turn 1. The lead has swapped hands for a moment. Cale Yarborough is now out in front of Tim Richmond. And Richmond might be content to just duck in behind him and settle for second place, as Tim Richmond seemed to get a little bit loose on the racetrack, and his car got squirrely just for a moment, and that was just the break that Yarborough needed to sail on by.
That's all it takes coming out of turn 4, going by some lap traffic, and Richmond's car bobbled just a little bit. It looked like the tail on a dog wagging back there as the rear of the car bounced back and forth, and Yarborough took the advantage. Now, Cale Yarborough running closely to the wall, running very close to the wall out of turn 4, but his Ford is handling quite well. He won here back in October. He made up 5 different times. He made up a 1-lap deficit, so he knows what it takes to come from behind. He has never won this World 600. He's won 3 times here at Charlotte, Mike, but never in this event.
You know, they call some racetracks a handling racetrack, other racetracks a horsepower racetrack. What would you classify Charlotte?
Well, Charlotte is definitely a handling racetrack. I mean, you have to have a motor out there to pull the car around, but you got to have the car dialed in. A lot of these cars, we've seen the race change so much already. Harry Gant was a dominant factor early on, but now his car really isn't handling that well. Neither is Earnhardt. But one car that has been dialed in is Cale Yarborough. The car running awfully well on the racetrack. You know, and Waddell Wilson, who is a veteran crew chief on that car, you know, he is responsible for making that car work. And, you know, last October they were here, and I said they lost a lap 5 different times. Well, Waddell and Cale got together and said, we can't give up. We just got to keep plugging. And not only did they come back for a good finish, they came back and won that National 500.
Well, they did, and he got a lap down today. We might add Cale Yarborough did and fought. And here's the attrition board today. David Pearson, as you see, out with engine failure. Chet Phillip, former IndyCar driver, out with an accident on lap 129. Richard Petty out in that number 6 car. Greg Sachs had a wreck, got severe sheet damage to the car. They're still working on that car in the garage, by the way. Brad Teague out with an accident. He came back in for a few moments. Kenny Reagan out with an accident on lap 5. Reagan was the first car to depart from this Coca-Cola 600 today. And there's the leader, Cale Yarborough, in car number 28. And right behind him will be Tim Richmond in car number 25. Yarborough out of Timminsville, South Carolina. No longer runs full-time here on the Winston Cup circuit, but he's still around long enough and is quite a competitor at the age of 46. He's proven that 46 is definitely not over the hill. Cale can still get out there and run with the best of them.
You know, they had a pretty tough start this year. They went to Daytona with a brand new race car that Harry Ranier and JT Lundy had put together the car order for that car, and the car qualified really well, but it was destroyed in a practice crash with Bobby Hillen down there, and they ran the 125-mile qualifiers, and in the race they destroyed another car. So they certainly had a rough start, rough beginning for 86.
There's Rusty Wallace, car number 27, Bill Elliott, car number 9. Right behind him, Darrell Waltrip, defending champion, in car number 11. Those 3 cars running 3rd, 4th, and 5th, and they have been battling it out now for, a good 20 laps or so. There's Cale Yarborough. Again, he's the leader right now, and our Goodrich pit reporter Glenn Jarrett is standing behind the Cale Yarborough pits.
Standing alongside of Waddell Wilson, crew chief on the Hardee's Ford. Well, you know,
one of the best crew chiefs, one of the best engine builders in the business. 166 laps are complete here at Charlotte. Bill Elliott is the leader. He has a 2.36 second advantage over car 47, Morgan Shepherd. One interesting story is Cale Yarborough, who is not running nearly as strong now as he did before that caution flag.
Well, you got to consider that a lot of the drivers have had a chance to come in and make some chassis adjustments to that last caution flag. And, you know, it's very important that stagger is important. It's the difference between the left side and the right side tires. They may have not gotten a good a matched set of tires on the Cale Yarborough car. He's not running that badly, but the car is pushing up in the corners on him over in turns 3 and 4. But he's nowhere near as tight on the racetrack. You see Cale coming down the back end of the car, bobbing and weaving a little bit as he bobbled there in front of Sterling Marlin, and his car not handling nothing like it was, or anything like it was early on.
Well, every lap by, Bill Elliott seems to put some distance on the rest of the field on Morgan Shepherd, who is in second place, and on back. Some changes down in the top 5. Jeff Bodine is still running third. Tim Richmond has moved up to fourth, and Dale Earnhardt is starting to hook things up a little bit. He's now running fifth. There you see Cale Yarborough, who is trying to chase down Darrell Waltrip. That would be for the 6th spot out there. Waltrip, of course, the defending champion of this race. You see Dale Earnhardt just in front of them. He's in 5th. And now Yarborough, up high on the racetrack, is going to try to take 6th place away from Darrell Waltrip. And again, you got a glimpse of the Wrangler car of Dale Earnhardt, still running 5th, just a few feet ahead of them. Our Goodwrench pit reporter Steve Martin is standing by, and
looks like the rotation of the pit stops is just right, or maybe not just right. Could be somebody could be biting their fingernails on gas mileage by the time this is through. If you figure they get 65 to 70 laps per pit stop or per tank of gas, 22 gallons, they'll stop again between laps 332 and 340. Now, will they have enough to make it all 400 laps? They feel in the Elliott pit that they're in the right situation and they're getting good mileage at this point in time to finish, provided there are no cautions from here on out.
Thank you, Steve. At the pits of Bill Elliott. 295 laps on the board now, and Elliott is the leader. Morgan Shepherd running second. And there you get a glimpse of Awesome Bill from Dawsonville.
Boy, shades of last year, 1985, on the circuit when Elliott was able to pull away at will and just simply dominate the circuit with 11 pole wins and 11 victories, picking up $2.4 million in earnings. But Elliott has certainly had a rough season this year. And we might mention, Mike, for some folks who had not heard, that Ernie Elliott, the oldest of the Elliott brothers, 38-year-old Ernie, is back in the pits today. He has returned to the pits after being ill all year long. He was sick in Daytona. He has missed a number of races. He flew in here yesterday afternoon, and he is behind pit wall. He, along with the middle brother Dan, and of course Bill is the youngest of those three. He's only 30 years old in the car. They are back as a team again, and it's pretty well evidence that that has changed things for Bill Elliott as he is leading here in Charlotte.
Ernie Elliott, I saw him with his head inside that engine all weekend, and indeed it's made a difference. It's Ernie Elliott who is in pit road, who is on communications with your leader.
And one car having a lot of trouble in turn 4, rolling on the bottom of the racetrack. That is Jeff Bodine.
Jeff Bodine has blown an engine.
Apparently an engine problem on the Bodine car as the Levi Garrett Chevrolet makes its way down pit road, and Bodine certainly has had a long afternoon, and his hopes of winning the Winston Million go up in smoke here at Charlotte Motor Speedway.
Well, Mike Joy has made his way now into the Jeff Bodine pit, and let's go down now to our Goodwrench pit reporter.
The problem is under the hood. It's the MSD. That's part of the electronic ignition system. It's kind of a black box. And once that has a problem, it's like most electronic equipment. The only way to fix it is replace it. It has come loose from its mounting on top of the roll bar underneath the hood. So Gary Nelson right now is tightening it down and checking the connections. If they can't get that fixed, they're going to have to replace it. Right now, they're working with it, but the car will not fire. Bodine looks like he's going to be here a long time.
323 laps are complete, and 334 laps, that's the 500-mile mark. That's how far they run on most of these races. Jeff Bodine and the crew are walking his number 5 car, by the way. Now, looks like they're going to go behind the pit wall and try to make some repairs on that car. And again, boy, it's a dejected-looking crew down there with Jeff Bodine as they go behind the wall now. You can see the separation between Earnhardt and Bill Elliott in car number 9. Dale Earnhardt would love to become the first 3-time winner this season. He is the Winston Cup points leader and makes no bones about it. Thinks his team has the best shot at winning the Winston Cup championship in 1986. It is now 0.86 seconds. And we'd like to welcome KUSA in Denver, Colorado now, who has joined us for the Coca-Cola 600, 325 laps complete. And you'll see Bill Elliott in the lead. And right behind him, Dale Earnhardt in car number 3. Tim Richmond is third, car 25. Cale Yarborough in car 28 is running fourth. The 5th place car is Morgan Shepherd in car number 47.
We should be seeing routine pit stops here in just a moment or two. We would expect the pit stop from at least for the leader, Bill Elliott, to come possibly this lap or next lap as we see the Coors crew on the pits are getting ready to signal Bill Elliott to bring him in, as he is slowed down dramatically, and Dale Earnhardt is making a move around him.
And Dale Earnhardt is just going to fly by Bill Elliott as Elliott's car has slowed. Could it be that the car may be coughing or sputtering a bit? It may be out of gas. But it is really slowing, and Dale Earnhardt is going to take over first place as Elliott tries to tuck in behind him and run now off of Earnhardt's draft to get back around this racetrack. But Dale Earnhardt, for the first time today, is now in the lead of the Coca-Cola 600, and that'll move Tim Richmond and Cale Yarborough up into second and third. And here comes Elliott, headed down pit road, and he will get full service on that car, some fresh tires, and of course a full tank of gasoline.
Here's Elliott and the Coors Ford. They will come down and make a routine pit stop under the green flag. 327 laps in the book, 73 laps to go. Right side tire change, a time in the right lower part of the screen. You see Ernie and Dan changing the right side tires. The Elliott crew working on the car as they are continuing to get there. They have a little trouble with the right rear tire. The car still on the jacks, 16.1 seconds.
We have word on Earnhardt's radio that he thinks that Elliott has lost a cylinder. We'll have to see, but Dale Earnhardt radioed into his crew when he went by him that it sounded like to him that that Elliott had lost a cylinder. We'll have to wait and see. Is this the final pit stop of the day? It looks like this might be it. They might be able to go the distance after they put fuel in this time.
I think if Earnhardt can take it easy coming in and getting out, he may be able to make it the rest of the way. You know, last year Walter won this race by going 73 laps at the end, but Earnhardt would only have to go 69 laps if he came in and pitted this time by.
There are 4.8 seconds difference between Dale Earnhardt and Tim Richmond. You see they're getting ready to put some fuel in that Elliott car. They have the fuel cans raised high. We'll keep an eye out to see if Bill Elliott comes in. 383 laps are on the board. Is this early to bring him in? I guess they'd wait till the last second that they possibly could, but he definitely doesn't want to run out. And here comes Bill Elliott down pit road for a splash of gas to be able to finish this race.
I expect his fuel pressure began to drop, and he called and said, I got to come in now. So here's Elliott, a quick stop. They put that one fuel can in. They're just going to quickly brisk off the windshield. Time in the lower part of the segment, 4.1 seconds. Just probably got enough, 2 gallons in the car. Hopefully that'll be enough to finish for the Coors Ford.
But he did lose the lead, and it will be tough for him to catch up now with Dale Earnhardt. He has to hope for a caution flag still to have any chance at the race. And there's your new leader. He's struggled all day long, but Dale Earnhardt has dogged it and just fought and fought and fought. And lo and behold, here we are, 15 laps from the end, and Dale Earnhardt's in the lead.
You know, sometimes you just have those years, and this seems to be Earnhardt's year. He has been dominant on a lot of racetracks. He had some trouble. He ran out of gas at Daytona with 3 laps to go. He and Jeff Bodine were fighting for the victory there at Daytona 500, and he ran out of fuel, came down pit road. They had to try to restart the car. They put ether in the motor to try to restart the car to prime the carburetor. It blew the bottom of the engine out, and therefore he had to park it at Daytona. He has had a lot of tough luck, but he has won twice so far this year.
Those 2 wins were back-to-back at Darlington and North Wilkesboro. Mike Joy is standing down now in the Dale Earnhardt pit. Let's have a Goodwrench pit report from Mike.
Well, there were a lot of relieved faces on the Richard Childress crew when Bill Elliott made that pit stop, and it put Earnhardt #1 on the leaderboard. They can go the distance on tires. But if the caution flag comes out and makes it a 3 or 4 car race again, well, you see what they got on this tire? You resort to plan B.
I like it. Well, let's hope. I know Dale Earnhardt's hoping he doesn't have to resort to plan B and put new tires on and come down pit road. 386 laps are complete. Again, we run 400 here in Charlotte. The difference between Dale Earnhardt and Tim Richmond, 3.1 seconds. That's the lead that Dale Earnhardt has on Tim Richmond and the rest of the field, and the difference between winning and second place here so far in the Coca-Cola 600.
And Dale Earnhardt's going to be awfully careful now. He moves up around Rusty Wallace. He's got to make sure he stays away from groups of cars that can slip and slide. The drivers are getting tired. They've been here for 4 hours, 4.5 hours, almost 600 miles. One bobble by a slower driver or anybody in front of him could end his day. And he needs to be very careful. You see him back away a little bit and get a running start against Rusty Wallace there. Rusty, a young driver, and he's respected a lot by Dale Earnhardt, but he wants to make sure he catches him when there's only 1 car there and he can slide by him on the inside.
5 laps to go in the Coca-Cola 600. The battle for second place is between Tim Richmond and Cale Yarborough. And and it has been a strong run for Cale today.
And Cale has been able to run Richmond down. Now they're in turns 3 and 4 as the laps wind down. We're showing 5 laps, and Cale will try to make a move on Richmond. Mike, as Cale really is filling that rearview mirror on the Folger Chevrolet.
Now, won't this racing between Richmond and Yarborough really help Dale Earnhardt as he tries to run away for victory?
Well, I think it'll help him quite a bit. Earnhardt realizing that unless he makes a major mistake or unless there would be a problem with his fuel, he's going to be okay. He's got about a 4.5 or 5 second advantage now over Richmond, but Richmond's got his hands full with Cale Yarborough. And with Cale's experience, and Cale would like to finish second. He'd like to win it, but he right now has the best shot at finishing second.
Dale Earnhardt just passing the lap car of Mark Martin, the 02 car, and Earnhardt again will come by, and this will put 397 laps on the board. 3 laps remain. 3 laps to go here in the Coca-Cola 600 as Richmond and Yarborough continue to battle for that second place spot. They see Neil Bonnet, who is not running up to speed, down low on the racetrack in car number 12 and flying by Richmond and Yarborough. Cale Yarborough, even though he may not win today, you have to talk about him in a very positive light because he was a lap down, and his Cale Yarborough's style, he just fought and battled, got back on that lead lap, and now he's fighting Tim Richmond for second place.
Well, Cale never gives up. He never says die, and that's what makes him the competitor he is. And right now, though, he's got a young driver who's an extremely aggressive young driver in the name of Tim Richmond in front of him, and Richmond's not going to give anything away. He's trying to pull away from Cale Yarborough now as Dale Earnhardt still hanging up front. There's a separation between Richmond and Cale Yarborough, some car length and a half, and now Cale's going to make a move down the back straightaway. He's going to try to reel him in.
Well, we'll see if Yarborough can reel down Tim Richmond. Meanwhile, coming out of turn 4 and heading down the front straightaway will be Dale Earnhardt. He will get the white flag this time by from Harold Kinder. 1 lap to go for Dale Earnhardt to win the Coca-Cola 600. And Dale Earnhardt takes his Wrangler machine into turn 1. He's in the middle of turn 1 now, heading into turn 2. He has no traffic around him. No chance really to get into trouble as he slides by a lapped car there. Dale Earnhardt alone on the racetrack in the middle of the back straightaway. Our battle for second place again is Richmond and Yarborough. It's Yarborough still running third. Heading into turn 3, it's Dale Earnhardt. Earnhardt looks like he can coast home now to the Coca-Cola 600 victory. Earnhardt, the crowd is on its feet and waving as Earnhardt now on the front straightaway. The checkered flag is out. Dale Earnhardt wins this race, and it's going to be Tim Richmond who takes second from Cale Yarborough. Yarborough will finish third. An exciting finish for second place. Harry Gann is fourth. Darrell Waltrip is fifth. And congratulations to Dale Earnhardt. You see the excitement in the pits down there as Dale Earnhardt has just won the Coca-Cola 600.
It was a tough one. I'd like to thank the good Lord for a good, safe day and no rain, and for letting this Wrangler Goodrich Chevrolet run so good. Kurt and all the guys did a heck of a job. We were off at the first of the race. Pulled a little higher again than what I thought we should have pulled. But after the track came to us, we were just right.
There you have it. Victory in the Coca-Cola World 600 to Dale Earnhardt over Tim Richmond with Cale Yarborough third. So much for the NASCAR Super Stock Cars. After this break, we'll take you to Florida where the spokesblokes are on their own high. And welcome back to our special 5-hour edition of Motorsports International. Don't forget, we'll be taking you shortly to Amaroo Park Raceway, the venue for the opening round of the Australian Endurance Championship, the Better Brakes 300. You know, one category of motorsport that really deserves the tag spectacular with a capital S is stadium motocross. We saw recently in Sydney with the Sydney Entertainment Centre packed on 2 consecutive nights just how popular the sport is. And in the United States, they build the tracks even tougher than most. Former motocross ace and racer, track designer extraordinaire Gary Bailey saw to it this year at Daytona.
Well, I thought it was time for a big change. You know, about the last 3 or 4 years, it's been running in the same direction, so I decided to turn the track around for starters. I decided to turn the starting line and go right directly toward the grandstands. I thought that was a much better idea to really give those people a good show.
The good show does not end with a start. Being an ex-racer, Gary knows what riders can do, and being a fan, he knows what looks spectacular.
I try and look at all the obstacles, not only last year, but the beginning of this year. We've had 6 races already before this, and it gives me an opportunity to look at all the jumps that work, and I try and incorporate all the good jumps that work and put them into my racetrack.
Spectacular starts and jumps are not the only considerations. Bailey knows that as the day wears on, the track wears out. A new sprinkling system was added to control dust and to keep corners and whoops from falling apart. Eye appeal is another consideration. If you didn't know better, you'd think you were watching Supercross on the 18th fairway of a country club. But the looks and spectacular jumps are nothing if there is no room to pass.
All the corners, I think you're going to see better passing this year than ever before. We worked them really hard in practice and tried to create 2 lines everywhere, and I think that's really going to make the racing good.
The track was tested early in the week when over 500 amateur Supercross riders invaded Daytona. I did say amateur, but that's a little misleading. For example, 13-year-old Hank Murray Jr. from Society Hill, South Carolina. He's been racing a mere 6 years, but in that period of time, he's racked up over 15 national titles, including 2 in World Mini Competition. And in 1985, he was the overall winner of Europe's Youth International Invitational. At Daytona, Marie, number 37, was the winner of the tough 85cc Expert Division. On the other end of the scale was 52-year-old, 2-time Camel Pro champion and Daytona veteran Dick Mann from California. Mann has twice won the Daytona 200, and both of his wins were historic occasions. In 1970, on a Honda, he became the first rider to win Daytona on a Japanese cycle. In 1971, on a BSA, he was the last rider to win on a non-Japanese cycle. He's seen a lot of changes since then.
When I first started, it was just another race. Paid a little more money. It was just another race. But the whole week and the atmosphere and the whole thing down here now is just it's a big deal. And so much goes on. If you were to miss 3 or 4 of the races, you still couldn't take in the whole week.
Dick Mann's Daytona fame stems from road racing, but it was motocross, make that vintage motocross, that brought him back to the speedway, and for a very good reason.
Besides being just a lot of fun to do it and bringing back good memories, I think it's basically pretty important to keep a real good touch on the heritage and the roots of what motocross is now, and be sure that we can look right at and see how it began. And to be able to ride these bikes and lure back some of the riders who rode them, I think is pretty important.
The best of the vintage class was BSA-mounted number 2N Barry Higgins from Marietta, Georgia. Higgins, a retired pro motocrosser, showed the crowd how to ride whoops with 3 inches of suspension and what happens when you ride whoops with 3 inches of suspension. Despite that get-off, Higgins was the winner of both motos. Dick Mann finished 3rd overall. ATVs were also part of the amateur invasion. For some riders, it was an opportunity to become better acquainted. For others, though, it was serious business, racing business. Mike Holbert from Mount Morris, Pennsylvania, and around there they call him the Quad God, proved to be the best businessman on the track and won the ATV championship. It's almost Supercross main event time, but before the gate drops, let's take a few minutes to recap the heat races held earlier today. Team Honda's Mickey Diamond, number 43 from Yorba Linda, California, grabbed an early lead in heat race number 1 and held it to the finish. The other 6 qualifying positions went to Alan King, Larry Brooks, Jeff Hicks, Billy Frank, George Holland, and Andy Stacy. In the second heat, number 12, Team Yamaha's Jim Holly had the start wired. With an inside line, Holly grabbed the hole shot and never looked back. Behind Holly at the finish line and qualifying for the main event was Rick Ryan, Billy Lyles, Ali Simar, Canadian Arnaud Bernard, Mickey Kessler, and Dave Hollis. The first big factory confrontation took place in heat race number 3 with Team Honda's O-Show, Johnny O'Mara, going up against Yamaha's Keith Bones Bowen and rider number 4, Brock Glover. Check the smiles from the Yamaha camp and you'll know the story. Brock Glover took the lead on the opening lap and cruised to an easy win. Glover was followed by teammate Keith Bowen, Canadian Ross Peterson, Mike Healy, Johnny O'Mara, Doug Hoover, another Canadian, and in the final transfer spot, Guy Cooper. Tom Mueller, our pit reporter, talked to Glover after the win.
Well, Brocky more or less dominated this heat race by the second lap, had almost a half-lap lead. Must have things figured out today.
Well, I feel a lot better today, that's for sure. I got a good start out of there, and I just rode my comfortable pace and didn't make too many mistakes and got to try some new lines out there, so at least in the main event, I'll be familiar with the whole track.
The top 3 riders in the Supercross standings were all in heat race number 4. Defending Supercross champion Jeff Ward was ranked 3rd. Former champion David Bailey 2nd, and would-be champion Rick Johnson with 3 1986 Supercross wins was in 1st. Pit reporter Tom Mueller talked to Johnson and Bailey prior to the race.
How's your concentration today? You pretty confident?
Yeah, I was having a little bit of trouble getting going in practice because there was so many slower riders out there, but I feel comfortable now, and I think I'll do good.
You won in 84, and the thing went just out of reach in 85. Are you hungry to win it again this season?
I'm definitely hungry. I didn't eat anything all day.
A starvation diet, though, was not quite enough. Johnson led throughout the heat, followed by teammate David Bailey. In the late stages of the race, Bailey closed on Johnson, but his charge came up short. Ward finished third, followed by JoJo Keller, Danny Storbeck, A.J. Whiting, and Scott Manley.
You're on a big roll this year with a bunch of Supercross wins. Can you do it again for the main event here?
I sure hope so. I feel good. I've been working a lot with my mechanic, Brian, and you know, the people from Team Honda are really supportive of me. You know, I really don't feel like an outcast. You know, as soon as I've got over in that camp, they've really treated me good. They made me feel at home, and I think that's part of my reason for my success.
Rick Johnson, winner of heat race number 4.
Joining the top 7 riders from each heat race in the main event are the top 4 finishers from 2 semifinals and a last chance qualifier. And that sets the stage. 40 riders are at the gate for the 12-lap main event.
I wish I was one of them. I've got a good seat up here, but I'd love to be out on that track.
I know you would. I could see you just chomping at the bit. But the gate is about to drop, and there it goes. The 1986 Daytona Supercross is underway. One of the most prestigious.
Oh, there's a pile up and a couple guys down. I think a couple of them are cutting the course. Johnny O, maybe.
The 2 riders that were down, one of them is Jeff Hicks. Looks like Mike Healy. They're up. Brock Glover takes the whole shot. He's followed by teammate.
Whoa, Bailey's trying to go under. Holly gets stuck. Everybody's going by him.
At least 15 to 20 riders have gone by David Bailey. What a mistake he's made so early in the race. What was he thinking of?
Boy, I don't know. It's too early in the race to be making a move like that, though.
Bob, the 2 riders that you saw cutting the track, what are the consequences there?
Well, they should have went back and went around and went right on and where they exited the track. If they don't, they cut the course like that, they could be docked a lap and be put right out of the race.
The leader on this Gary Bailey designed racetrack, and he's heading now for one of the toughest parts of the track, is rider number 4, the golden boy of motocross from El Cajon, California, Brock Glover for Team Yamaha. Behind him is teammate number 12, that's Jim Holly. Running in third, 43 is Mickey Diamond, then Rick Johnson, Keith Bowen, and Jeff Ward. Bob, let's take another look at that first corner crash. Almost to the first corner, and everything looks fine.
Well, it looks like Healy's bumped somebody, run about 5 of them off, gone straight, and has fallen himself, and O'Mara's off the track.
You're right, O'Mara cut about 30 feet off the track. He ran around the jump, and he'll have a problem if he's caught. Here's the second corner incident, Bob, that involved Holly and Bailey. It looks like Holly has the inside line.
Well, he did have the inside. Bailey tried to go underneath, throw him out, intimidate him, and get him out of there. Holly's just too big a boy to pull at him.
He paid the penalty for that, and that's costly this early in the race.
Yes, I don't think I would have done that on the opening lap. He should have saved that for later in the race.
Back to the action, and it's still Brock Glover, rider number 4, Team Yamaha in front, and he's followed by Mickey Diamond, number 43 for Team Honda, has gone down. Bob, this is a tough section.
Yeah, the whoops in that section are staggered, and they're very difficult to establish a rhythm.
And look at this. David Bailey, rider number 6, has worked his way through the pack. He's putting on an incredible drive.
I think that first corner crash, second corner crash has made him mad, and I think he's riding like a wild man right now.
Bob, you've been in situations like this. Can a crash actually affect you that way? I would think it would take something out of you.
No, I think it puts something in you. I think you know he had a chance to win this race coming into it. That crash has hurt his chance, but he knows if he tries 110, he may have one more shot at it.
Well, it's a short race. It's only 12 laps long. This is an extremely rough track. I suppose, though, anything could happen. We're watching Brock Glover, rider number 4, running in the number 2 position is Jim Holly. There you see him coming into the screen. In third, Rick Johnson. Johnson is the man that's under the gun. He's the rider that everyone expected to win this race. And now here goes Brock Glover in the roughest section of the track. Look at the line that Glover's taking. I don't understand this.
I don't understand why he's taking that left line. It seems like he's been taking it in practice, and Holly definitely took the right line, and the right side of the track is a lot smoother, a lot faster.
Off that finish line jump, Holly got a tremendous amount of air as the riders worked their way around this racetrack. Is all that air necessary?
Well, Larry, some jumps it is, and on that particular jump it is. They have a pit on the other side of it. If you don't clear the pit, you hit the wall, lose a second or two every time you do it.
Brock Glover, an experienced Supercross rider. He's won his share. He's never won at Daytona. That could fire the guy up.
Yeah, I'm sure he's feeling the pressure out there. He's got to set the pace. He knows everybody's hot on his heels, and you can tell he's feeling the pressure.
Rick Johnson just biding his time back in the number 3 position. There's your leader, Brock Glover. Welcome back. Up over the... Bowen gets sideways, and look at that. Bowen went down hard. Bobby got sideways off the top of that jump. When he came down, he just nosedived into the ground and smashed his face, and now he's got a problem. He's sitting at the bottom, and in fact, it looks like he may be hurt.
Yes, I believe his adrenaline was running. He tried to get back on his bike and get going. Now I think he knows he's shaken up, and he's having second thoughts about it.
Well, the important thing is, apparently he is not seriously injured, and that is good news. They're dragging his bike off the track. The riders coming off the top of the jump now have a clear landing field. Back with the leaders, and what a battle we've got out in front. Rick Johnson, in the number 2 position, has been putting the pressure on Brock Glover since he inherited that number 2 spot from Jim Holly. Now here comes the battle. It's Glover, Johnson, and Jeff Ward, a 3-way battle for the number 1 spot.
Larry, you better make that a 4-way battle. Bailey's going faster than anybody on the track.
He definitely is doing that. Bailey, since that opening lap crash, has really been on the gas. Bailey is riding an unbelievable race. Out in front, it's Rick Johnson. He's rider number 5 out of your screen. That's Brock Glover that you're looking at, number 4. And Jeff Ward, number 1, the defending champ, right in his rear wheel. Ward has been trying for almost a full lap to get around Glover, but no dice. Glover has been the effective roadblock that Johnson was looking for. But Bob Hanna, they're coming to that section of the track where Glover has persisted, and he's doing it again. Bob.
I didn't think he'd take this line again, Larry, but he is, and Wardy's has a smooth line, and it's all over for Brock.
So Jeff Ward, the defending Supercross champion, has moved into the number 2 position. That'll put Brock Glover 3rd. And the question in my mind now, Bob Hanna, is, will Jeff Ward catch Johnson before David Bailey catches Ward?
There's no telling. They've got a dice going here, but Johnson, as you can see, is in complete control of the race at the moment. He's riding smooth and aggressive, and he's got the clean line.
But not a clean track. In front of him, Bob, there are several riders that he's going to have to lap, and traffic could be a factor in the outcome of this race.
Yes, it could. Daytona is the only place where we run a full field of 40 riders, and it can get pretty messy out there. They don't always go where you think they will.
Well, what can you do about it?
Well, you watch them close, you go where your instincts tell you, and you pray a lot with them.
Well, evidently, Rick Johnson spent the morning in church, and he did his praying. He's moving through traffic with absolutely no problem. You're looking at the leader of the Daytona Supercross, the most prestigious race in the world. Rick Johnson, coming into this Supercross event, had won 3 of the 6 races run in the series, and he would like to use this Daytona race as race number 4. But Jeff Ward, rider number 1 on a Kawasaki, has other ideas. He's setting in the number 2 position, and he has started to close on Johnson. But here is the story in the race, Bob. The battle for 3rd, Brock Glover and David Bailey.
Oh, Bailey's been coming from the back, as you said, 15th, 20th place, and just getting them one at a time. He's right on Brock here, and he is moving in hard.
If Brock makes one little slip, Bailey is going to have him for lunch, and they're coming upon traffic.
Yeah, this traffic could mean anything, you know. It could be help out Brock or help out David, so there's no telling what can happen.
And Brock Glover put himself behind a couple of lap riders. Bailey has an outside line.
Well, that did it. Bailey got him. And this traffic really hurt Brock there. He must have picked a bad one, followed the traffic into that corner. Bailey went around the outside, and now it's gone.
Bob, when you're riding a race like a Supercross or an outdoor for that matter, you have to consider the traffic ahead of you when you're being pushed from behind.
That's the most important time. If you're by yourself, Larry, it's not that big a deal. But when somebody's right behind you, it's kind of like a guess. You guess as you're going right or left, and you just got to go from there.
And in this case, Brock Glover guessed wrong, and David Bailey guessed right. As a reward, he moves into the number 3 position. He'll immediately set out to close as much of the gap as he possibly can on Jeff Ward in the time remaining. Ward running up in the number 2 position, and Bailey has really closed. Bob, Bailey can see the back of Ward's jersey.
Yeah, he sees him, and he's hot after him. He's taking some good lines here. He's really even got...
And look at that! Well, Bailey knocked Ward off the track. I don't believe it. He took an inside line. It looked to me like Ward was already there, Bob, and they collided. Jeff Ward is down.
Larry, I'm not so sure that was David's fault.
Let's take another look, and we'll see.
Jeff Ward went to the outside and squared it off. David went for the inside. They both met in the berm at the same time. I don't think it was anybody's fault.
Rick Johnson from Team Honda, rider number 5, is the leader. He took over the lead approximately midway through this race, and he's not had a challenge since that point. However, teammate David Bailey is coming up behind Johnson. He's come from out of the pack, but time is on Johnson's side, and Bailey has to be tired, Bob.
Yeah, I think he should be a little tired by now. He is riding fast, maybe faster than anybody on the track, but Johnson has his lines. He has a clear shot at the lead, and I just don't think Bailey's going to be able to catch him.
Well, Bailey probably at this point is thinking otherwise. He's not about to give up now after the incredible ride that this young man has put in. Earlier this week, we asked David Bailey what it would take for him to put the package together and beat Rick Johnson.
It's going to be tough to beat Rick. He seems to have a formula this year where he just concentrates really hard on what he's got to do. He practices a lot of starts when he's practicing. He's been getting off the line super every race. He's been top 3, and that's been one of the keys to his success so far because he's right up front. And if you can't catch Rick normally, you'll never be able to catch him with a bad start. So I think the only way I'm going to be able to beat him is to beat him off the line.
You're watching David Bailey, currently running in the number 2 position. Ahead of him, Honda teammate Rick Johnson. When Johnson crosses the finish line this next time around, he'll receive the white flag. That signifies just 1 lap to go. Bob, if you're going to win one race a year, it's got to be Daytona.
Oh, for sure. Daytona's always been the one for me, and David just about went down. David Bailey knows this is the race to win, and Ricky Johnson in a couple laps looks like he's going to know it too.
Earlier this week, we had the opportunity to visit with Ricky Johnson about Daytona and what it would mean for him to win this Daytona Supercross.
Well, I haven't won Daytona yet, and it would definitely be something special to win. It's probably the biggest race on the circuit, and it would mean a lot for me to win it, but I'm not really going at it as if a do-or-die situation. I have the points lead in the Supercross Series, so I'm considering that, so I don't want to blow all my chances for the championship on one race. So I'm going at it as I'd like to win it. I'm going to do whatever I can to win it, but I'm not going to ride over my head.
For the past 3 years, Rick Johnson's mechanic, Brian Lunas, worked with Bob Hanna. We couldn't help but ask Brian to compare the 2 riders.
There's a lot of similarities between Bob Hanna and Rick Johnson. They both want to win very bad, and they're willing to work at it. And they're aggressive, and they're not afraid to be a little outspoken about it, and I think that helps motivate them.
Well, Brian says the 2 of you are a lot alike, so Bob, put yourself on Rick Johnson's motorcycle. You have a big lead. It's the last lap. How do you ride it?
Well, I would do the same thing I've done about the last 10 laps, Larry. I wouldn't do anything crazy, and I wouldn't do any of those cross-ups. That shows you how young he is and how old I am. Just try to get through without any bad incidents.
I'm sure that has to be the foremost thing on Rick Johnson's mind. He's heading now off the top of that double jump, that camelback, down through the roughest area of the racetrack where he put the pass on Brock Glover to take over the number 1 position. He's headed toward the finish line, and in just one more jump with hands off the handlebars, Rick Johnson has won the 1986 Daytona Supercross. A sweep for Honda of first and second as David Bailey with a cross-up takes that number 2 position.
It feels so good to win here. All the people, the weather's nice. Got a little cloudy today, but, you know, Florida, I've sort of made it my home away from home, and I finally won here. I'm really happy.
So victory in the Daytona Supercross to Rock and Ricky Johnson over David Bailey, with Brock Glover taking 3rd. More bikes later in the show with the French Grand Prix from the Paul Ricard circuit. But after this break, it's off to Amaroo Park for the Group E Stakes for showroom makes.
And a big welcome live now to Sydney's Amaroo Park for the Better Breaks 300 first round of the Australian Endurance Championship. Well, that's the highlight event on the program. There are plenty of other races as well, and we'll be getting to that very shortly. I hope you've enjoyed that hour of great action from the United States. In fact, I've got a little bit more of that up my sleeve, and we're going to have a look at it in just a moment. But first, let's talk about the Better Breaks 300 this afternoon. The defending title holder in this race, Jim Richards for BMW, has pole position again, and he shares the front row of the grid with Colin Bond in the Alpha. Jim Richards' pole winning time was 53.10. Second row of the grid, Glenn Seaton in the Nissan shares it with Peter McLeod in a Commodore, followed by Tony Longhurst and Mike Bergman, BMW and Commodore respectively, and then another pair of Commodores with Brian Callahan and Gerald Kay on the fourth row of the grid. So Brock and Gracie and the other guys might be over there doing it for the Commodores in Europe, but there's still a pretty fair Commodore representation here at Amaroo Park this afternoon. Excellent stuff indeed. And for our telecast this afternoon, we're being joined by a couple of very special guests. First of all, John Bower. This is a transformation. You're usually a little hot and sweaty and just climbed out of a race car when I'm talking to you.
Yeah, that's right, Gary. I'm pleased that really 150 laps around here I think probably would have killed me, so I thought this would be easier, but it's not. Watching behind the scenes, this is much harder than driving.
Well, it's in fact 155 laps, and some drivers are electing to do it alone. That's tough.
It is. It's a very difficult circuit. It doesn't give you any rest at all, and you know, I don't envy them at all. It's very hot in the cars, and they'll be earning their money, that's for sure.
Okay, John, look forward to your comments through the afternoon. And Peter McKay is also joining us, renowned motorsports rider. Peter, you looking forward to today's race?
I am. I think it's going to be a great race. Alpha, BMW, the Nissan, Commodores, plenty of action there.
Certainly will be. And talking about action, we've got cars about to come up and grid up for the first event in our telecast from Amaroo Park this afternoon. And we'll be going to Neil Crompton very shortly. But first of all, as I promised you, we've got some further great action from the USA.
For the Talladega 500 last weekend, the NASCAR boys copped 110-degree roasting. First to be well done was Richard Petty. His engine overheated and went to lunch. Spinning in his own oil, Petty reversed out of the race, onto the grassy infield and nailed the wall. He wasn't hurt, but his race was well and truly over. Next casualty was one of the 26 leaders in this race, Dale Earnhardt. Just when you thought it was safe to go back into pit lane, Earnhardt forgets his pit bay location. He brakes, taps the wall, and his crew learn how to rap dance in one easy lesson. Then on lap 160, the leader, Harry Gant, proves anything Petty and Earnhardt can do, he can do better. He taps the wall, spins and eliminates Benny Parsons, Cale Yarborough, Jeff Bodine, Darrell Waltrip and Buddy Baker. Capping off a bad day for the big names, Bobby Allison and Rick Wilson try to waltz at 200 miles an hour. And another chain reaction. This left the 23-year-old Bobby Hillen to easily beat the rest of the tattered field after 188 laps to become NASCAR's youngest ever winner.
Great stuff, isn't it? And I see they've got Formula Mondial cars about to come out onto the track here at Amaroo Park. We'll be back for the action after this.
And as the siren sounds, cars on the grid for round 7 of the Altos Computers Australian Drivers' Championship. It will be held over 10 laps of the 1.94 kilometre circuit. There's Terry Ryan, car number 36. He's up on what is effectively the front row of the grid alongside Ken Smith in car number 8. And further behind him, we've got Peter Boylan in there as well. 74 is Chris Hocking. Boylan in the black car number 7. Less than 10 seconds to go. The national flag raised. There's Peter McCrow, Peter Lana. A depleted field, we'll tell you why in a few moments' time, but they get away. This is the final round of the Australian Drivers' Championship, and Ken Smith from New Zealand goes straight to the lead. Terry Ryan up into second place. I think Hocking got away pretty well. He's into third as they crest the top of the hill for the first time, and it is Smith. Standing in for Matt Romano, hurt here at Amaroo Park 2 meetings ago. And the man who probably knows the most about these cars in Australia at the moment is the outgoing reigning Australian driving champion, John Bower. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Neil.
So this is an interesting situation with the older model Rolt RT4 being driven by Terry Ryan chasing Ken Smith in the new 86 Series car.
That's right. Ken's is a very late model car, and it's quite more advanced than Terry's, although Terry's doing a very good job. It's just unfortunate that Graham Watson and Peter Hopwood aren't in the event.
I guess we ought to mention at this point, John, that they did attempt to make a start on this race a little earlier, and there was a crash involving both Hopwood and Graham Watson. Peter Hopwood is okay. Graham Watson has been injured and has been taken to hospital. The more unfortunate aspect of it was that Peter Hopwood's car left the track and landed among a crowd of spectators on the hill at the top of Bitchapave Hill here at Amaroo Park, and a number of spectators did suffer some minor injuries, and we understand that one spectator has been quite seriously hurt. How seriously, we are still trying to ascertain.
That's right, Gary. It was a very nasty accident. The two cars touched going up the hill, and in these open-wheeler cars, you can't really afford to touch wheels because
that's the spot.
They climb over each other, and Graham's car flipped over the Armco and rolled along the top of it, very similar to Bill Brown did at Bathurst years ago in the Falcon. And he was very lucky, I thought, to escape serious injury. It took my breath away, I can tell you.
There's your old car 74, being driven by Chris Hocking. Behind him, Peter Lana. He's up into third place. Missed a couple of rounds of the Australian Drivers' Championship whilst out with, I think he had a broken leg or a broken hip. He fell off a ladder at home, of all things, which is a funny thing for a Formula One driver to be out of action for.
Motor racing's supposed to be dangerous, but I think housework's more dangerous.
Behind him, Peter Lana, then Peter Boyle in car 7. As Ken Smith extends his lead, you see him going off to the Bitchapave Hill section of the track. This is the battle for 3rd, 4th and 5th. Most of these chassis are the popular Rolt RT4s, built in England by expatriate Australian Ron Turanak, former partner of Jack Brabham, and all powered by 1600cc 4-valve double overhead cam Ford engines.
Chris Hocking's running a fairly down on power engine today. The best engine that he had, which is one I had last year, had a failure earlier in the year, and he's still waiting on parts for it.
Yes, I think that let go at Amaroo Park very early in the season.
And he's also a bit stiff and rusty around the hip area because he fell from about 20 foot up. He's doing quite a good job, though.
It's no fun, I can tell you. I've never been the same since I fell out the back of a truck in Perth when we were over there for the touring car round at Wanneroo.
Peter Boyle in car number 7. He's back in 6th placing in the Australian Drivers' Championship with only 6 points. The leader is Graham Watson with 33. Peter Hopwood has 27. Bapramano 3rd with 21 points, but hasn't scored any points for some time, as you'd all realise. Then Ken Smith, this man here, with 18 points in 4th position. A great performance, really. His 2 drives so far netting him 2 wins, which is a maximum of 9 points, and therefore his 18 points tallies from those 2 wins. Brian Sampson not here with 8 points, Peter Boylan 6, and he shares that point score with Bob Creasy from Western Australia. Terry Ryan making a return as well. We saw him at Oran Park just a few weeks ago, but he's been out of the saddle for some time. You may recall in our coverage of the Gold Star back in the Adelaide round, he blew his engine in practice on the Saturday and without funding was unable to continue for the remaining rounds of the championship, but is back once again. This is one of the earlier series cars. It's the ex-Andrew Vidicki car, although it's been uprated in the suspension front and rear. Very wide track on this car too, John.
Well, it's the sort of modifications Andrew did to it 2 or 3 years ago, and it brought it more in line with the later cars, but there really is no substitute for a newer car because as they get older, they get more flexible in the chassis and the rivets get a bit loose. So he's doing a pretty fair job with it, but
keeping them together costs bucks, though, doesn't it, when they get to that stage?
Right. It's very hard for these guys to attract the sort of sponsorship required to run them at a professional level. And whilst Kenny Smith's car has backing from Pye, Terry really is unsponsored, as is Chris Hocking.
Well, the bucks are hard enough to find, and when you get your hands on them, they're only worth 62 cents anyway.
If that. These cars qualifying in yesterday's practice session at around the 43 and 44 second mark gives them a lap average of around about 100 miles an hour, 160 kilometres an hour here at Amaroo Park. These cars are very, very quick here, John.
These cars are very difficult to drive around this circuit because there isn't any rest on it anywhere. It's also got I mean, the main straight has a curve, so with the G-forces they generate, you're always turning, and it's quite physically tiring, although now they've shortened the race to 10 laps, it won't be a problem.
7 laps have been completed, 3 to go. Originally scheduled to be 25 laps as round 7 of the Drivers' Championship. Would have been an interesting final. Only a handful of points.
Surprises me, Neil, that Peter Hopwood didn't make a start, try and borrow somebody's car or hire somebody else's car or something, because all he really had to do was run a place in this race, because Graham is out of action, unfortunately, and he could have won the Gold Star Championship. But I don't know whether it's perhaps the medical staff at the circuit have advised him not to, because he took a fair
Yes, bump.
I reckon I'd be shaking at the knees.
Not only that, I spoke to him just a few more minutes before we went on air, and he was pretty distraught about having the car go into the crowd. I think anybody would be, so that would take your mind away from the job. And in these cars, you have to be absolutely sharp. Terry Ryan, car 36, closing the gap a little on Ken Smith at the moment.
I think Ken's really controlling the race, so he's a very old hand at this sort of racing. And he's, I mean, Kenny Smith's been racing open wheelers since I was a boy, and I'm not a boy anymore.
Glad you said that.
Which is a pity.
Oh, smoke, there's been...
car 54, Gordon Davey, that's your old car, John.
That's another one of my old cars, yes.
Yeah. Well, they're not going to see the finish, but there's no doubt that Smith and Ryan will, with 1 lap to go.
Terry Ryan is really making a charge at him now, but I think he's left his run a bit late.
Ken Smith, one of the older competitors in the field, in his early 40s. Done a lot of open wheel racing in New Zealand. Oh, and he's in trouble.
Oh,
stuck it into the fence, taken the side off the car. Gee, that crept up very quickly.
I think he might have had a flat tyre or something, Neil. It just seemed to snap sideways and climb the tyre wall.
Well, didn't that unfold rapidly? Ken Smith out of the car and okay. Terry Ryan inherits the lead. Quarter of a lap to go in car 36. And I think Terry Ryan will win his first ever round of an Australian Driving Championship by default, but nevertheless it's a win.
Well, a win's a win. That's right. A bad day for Rolled Australia, though. 2 damaged cars and a damaged driver. It's a terrible day.
Checkered flag out. Terry Ryan, the winner of round 7. Now, the battle for second is yet to be resolved. At this stage, it's Chris Hocking in 74 from Peter Lana in car number 83. And I think Chris is going to hang on, although it'll be very close to the checker. Although...
he's going to
just holding my words back. I thought Lana was going to get him. No, Hocking in second place, 74, and third placing went to Lana. Let's have a look at the Castrol scoreboard, and the win goes to Terry Ryan. Second placing goes to Chris Hocking, and third placing to Peter Lana in car number 83.
Ken Smith's car, well, Bap Romano's car, actually, but Ken Smith will be thanking his lucky stars that he got out of that as well as he did, John Bowe.
Well, that's right, Gary. I think I still maintain that he had a tyre deflate on him and it just pitched him into the tyre wall and it peeled a couple of wheels off by the look of it, although I don't think it's really done any structural damage to the car.
Take a look at the replay here. And it really just went straight offline, John,
yes,
up onto the ripple strips.
He really didn't have a lot of hope of hanging on to it. And it's just peeled the wheels off like a banana skin. Although they're very strong cars, I wouldn't imagine it's hurt the chassis.
I bet you Ryan had his heart in his mouth there for a moment as he went by.
I had a similar situation last year in the Nissan Pulsar Series where I ended up on a roof, so it's not a nice part of the track.
There is no roof in these cars.
No, that's right. That's why you don't want to be on it.
Well, the marshals quickly on the scene. Not that there was too much danger in that situation. Not as there was, as we mentioned earlier, in the incident involving the 2 drivers earlier, Graham Watson and Peter Hopwood. That really was a nasty one, and we'll bring you some further reports on that as the afternoon progresses and as we receive the information. Right now, though, I think we might check up on the doings of Wayne Gardner. You might recall that last weekend he won the big Suzuka race in Japan for the 2nd time and his 9th straight victory on that track up there. It must be almost hometown for him. But, of course, what we really are anxiously looking at is his progress in the World 500cc motorcycling championships in Europe. And with an update on that, here's Neil Crompton.
Well, thanks, Wilco. It's a big night overseas tonight in motor racing with Brock & Co at Spa in Belgium and Wayne Gardner in Britain tonight for the Grand Prix at Silverstone. But in today's telecast, we take you back to France for round 8 in the World Motorcycle Championships as we follow the progress of Wayne Gardner.
Thank you, Neil Crompton. Back live now at Amaroo Park as the cars grid up for what is the final of the Stallion Stable 2WS Group E production car series here at Amaroo Park. And let's check the grid, because on the front row we've got on pole position in car 50 Mark Gibbs in a Commodore, alongside him Peter Fitzgerald in a Starion. Second row is car 25 Roland Hill, sharing the second row with car 4 Leo Gagan. On the third row, Ron Eisen in a Commodore and Gary Cook in a Mazda RX-7. On the fourth row, Greg East in a Commodore, John Burke in the Toyota Supra. The next row, Tony Gregg and Rocky Canto, followed by Peter Granger and Ken Grindrod. Big field of 22 cars. Who's Rocky Canto?
He's a panel beater from Blacktown.
Thank you very much, Peter McKay. This must be his first drive, is it?
I don't recall his name.
It's a televised series, yeah?
I think you're right, Wilco.
Goodness.
Flag raised, 10 seconds away from a start in this final heat of the production car series here at Amaroo Park. And Fitzgerald gets away well in the Stallion. I think he's going to lead Mark Gibbs up to the top of the hill, but then the V8 power should shine through, and it does indeed. Roland Hill gives Mark Gibbs a little tap for comfort. Up to Skyline for the first time. 6 laps the journey. Mark Gibbs, Car 50 Series leader, in the lead. Fitzgerald back into 3rd place. Leo Gagan up there as well in 4th. A long way back in the field is Bradley Jones, who lies 2nd in this series because on Thursday of this week his brother Kim was unfortunately involved in an incident whilst testing the car, and he rolled it at the top of the mountain. So they've borrowed a car from the Sutherland team, and Bradley a fair way down in the field at the moment. Through the left-hander, Greg East in the Commodore, Ron Ison. And there is Brad Jones, by the look of it, in car number 9.
Or Tony Gregg, is it?
Try and sort those guys out as they come through to end lap number 1. It is Mark Gibbs from Roland Hill, Peter Fitzgerald in 3rd position. There's plenty of action in these production car races.
Fitzgerald.
Behind that bunch we've got Gagan, and the confirmation comes through that it was Brad Jones in car 9 that was in strife. Tony Gregg driving car 6. Roland Hill's made a good jump here in the 2nd of the Commodores and got right in underneath Mark Gibbs. He leads the championship with 111 points from Brad Jones, 97. Peter Fitzgerald, who is 3rd in this race, has 94 points. Brian Potts has 83. He's in 4th place, although Rocky Canto driving that car today. There's Leo, former Australian Formula 2 champion and veteran of Australian motor racing in the modern motor Sutherland Mitsubishi entry.
And the shorter 6-lap distance should suit the Commodores. Anything longer than that and the tyres start to go off.
Pete, you've done plenty of Group E production car racing. These cars are very, very difficult to drive because they're on basically stock radial tyres and stock types of brakes, so you've really got to sharpen up your skills.
They slide around a lot, and the idea to go quick is to go very smoothly.
Mark Gibbs, great shot from the back of the car as he climbs to the top of the Amaroo Park Hill. You hear the roar of the V8 Holdens, the 5-litre V8, so it's a real turbo versus V8 grunt battle at the moment, and Fitzgerald still in 3rd position.
Gibbs on line to record a win in the series. Something dreadful would have to happen to him. Fitzgerald needs to win, and Gibbs would, I think, have to finish well back.
Fitzy at the moment's got his hands full. 2 big V8s in front. Leo Gagan's been a big improver this year. When he first started the season in the front-wheel drive Cordia, it seemed to take him a little time to come to terms with the job at hand, but he's well and truly into the groove now and matching it with the best of them. And these fellas, bear in mind, have been driving these types of cars for the last couple of seasons, particularly Fitzgerald. And, of course, Mark Gibbs was a star in the Ford Lasers.
I think there's a few tricks that Leo could teach them.
Still some life in the old dog yet. Coming through to end lap number 3.
And Mark Gibbs is putting a Commodore into the winner's circle a few times this year. The Commodore hasn't had a lot of success in Group A racing, but that's not the case here in Group E.
Performances so far in this season, Pete, have included a win in the 1st round. He picked up a 4th placing in the 2nd round and then has backed up with 2 more wins in rounds 3 and 4, and on target at the moment for his 4th win of the season.
A spirited driver is Mark. He doesn't mind giving a bit.
No, he does very well. He really manhandles the car when he needs to, but can be fairly gentle when that's required. One of the things that I'm impressed about is with his driving is in qualifying, the guy goes out, he does his 5 or 6 laps, he puts it away, and he's always happy. He's not a fiddler. He seems to have the thing well and truly organised. Oh, and one of the cars, Greg East, I think that was, getting out of shape in the Commodore. The Tony Packard Holden entry gave the fence a tap. Familiar territory to me.
In relation to Mark Gibbs, I mean, why mess with success? He's doing it all right, isn't it?
A great car prepared by Ron Gillard. And look who's in 4th spot and pressing on. Leo.
Peter Fitzgerald with his hands full that time over the top of the hill. The car getting sideways. The cars get very light in that part of the circuit.
Yes, that's true. It's very easy to have an off up there. Of course, Fitzgerald now faces the problem of having a guy in his mirrors. It's all right when you're looking at passing somebody and there's nobody pressing hard right behind you. But now Leo's right there, and Peter will have an eye on the mirror as well as looking for a way past the Commodore.
Yes, it's one thing to qualify well and run well on your own. It's another when there's plenty of traffic around, isn't it?
That's right. Racing's a different ball game.
Peter Fitzgerald lining up for what looks like it could be a move in the near future. This time through, there'll be 1 lap to go. So what does Fitz do in a situation like this?
I think he'll try to hang on to the Commodore up over the hill and have a dive under at the loop. The Commodore's brakes and tyres would be just starting to go off a little, whereas the Stallion's probably a better balanced car.
See what happens. Hill covers his ground very nicely, takes a very tight entry into the right-hander at Dunlop. Fitzgerald just probing, but the gap closes up pretty rapidly. There's a little mistake from Hill, but that's not a position you can get around. This is a brave part of the circuit, though, isn't it?
Yeah, you have a minor lift here, but it's... you're right, it's a brave part of the circuit.
Fitzgerald with an opportunity to perhaps outbrake into the left-hander at Honda. It's very close. He locks up, goes through on the inside. It pushes Hill wide, but he'll have the line as they come through this right-hand part of the course. And Fitzgerald back to third, but wants to continue the argument. Meanwhile, Mark Gibbs, car 50, coming through the stop corner for the last time. They have, in fact, closed up a little on Gibbs, but it's all too late. The battle for second continues. Fitzgerald up on the inside. This will be very close. Gibbs is home with the checkered flag. Fitzgerald, though, I think is going to hang on. And Peter Fitzgerald gets second. Leo Gagan comes up into third. And I think Roland Hill, the short back and sides, ended up fourth in that one. That was a great manoeuvre from Fitzgerald, and an even better one from Leo.
Yeah, and of course the first 2 cars are the cars that finished first and second in this series.
Great performance from Mark Gibbs. Let's take a look at the Castrol scoreboard. Mark Gibbs, the winner in car number 50 from Peter Fitzgerald in the Mitsubishi Starion, and third goes to Leo Gagan.
Well, Mark Gibbs has spaced them again in the ultimate round of the Stallion Stables 2WS production car series at Amaroo Park. You can't do much more than win, and win them as easy as that one.
Thank you very much. Well, I've got a very good car. I've got a couple of guys that look after my car, the Gillard brothers, that make sure it's going well for me. It makes it my job a lot easier.
Tell me, from a future standpoint, now that this series has been concluded, where do you go from here? We've seen you come up through a couple of different categories of racing. What about the ambitions?
Well, mate, I'd love to go Group A. I suppose we all would, but the old pocket says no. So
yes, exactly.
Unless you want to help me out, I'd love to go.
Robert Goldman is here from 2WS to make the presentation.
Congratulations again, Mark, and from 2WS and Stallion Stables. Congratulations on winning this race and winning the Group Series. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank 2WS and Stallion Stables for their support this year, and I hope they're back next year. And a big thanks to my sponsors, Sutton's at Chilora. I'm going to forget this one again. Waggett camshafts and Black Flash brake pads. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's nice to have so many sponsors. You have trouble remembering the name of one or two. Congratulations also to Peter Fitzgerald on finishing second today and second in the series overall. And I think Brad Jones finished up third as far as the series was concerned. Right now, though, here's Neil Crompton.
Thank you, Gary Wilkinson. A shot from on top of the hill looking back over Amaroo Park. And it's a lovely day here in Sydney today. Beautiful sunshine, probably getting around about the 20-degree mark, and a big crowd in attendance for the Better Breaks 300 round 1 of the Australian Endurance Championship, which kicks off this afternoon. And of course, we're in the countdown to the James Hardy 1000, the premier touring car race in Australia. But for the moment, it's Formula Ford action. It's the final round of the Coca-Cola Bottlers Formula Ford Series. And it's also a round of the Motorcraft Formula Ford Driver to Europe Series. In fact, the second last round with the final coming up at the Australian Grand Prix a little later on this year. A huge field of cars. In fact, it's been restricted to a maximum of 25. And we've seen some great racing throughout the year from the Formula Ford boys. Warwick Brooklyn, in fact, leads both series at the moment. There's 18 points in the Coca-Cola Bottlers Series. And he's struggling along there nicely in the Motorcraft Series with 64 points, 3 points clear of Alan Bissett. So as the cars come out on their warm-up lap, let's take this time out now to have a look at the top 12 as they've qualified. And David Brabham has taken pole position in a time of 52.44 from Dave Stanley in the L1, 52.48. On the second row of the grid, Roger Martin from Victoria in the Crisp, and he'll share that row with the man that turned it on for us at the last meeting, Richard Carter, in car number 8. Row 3 sees car 76, Warwick Brooklyn, the Sailor, and he'll share that row with Glenn Clark from New Zealand, who'll team up with Peter McLeod later this afternoon in a touring car. Row 4, position 7, Andrew Burden from Australia's Capital Territory in the Lola, and he'll share row 4 with Gary Jones, car 77, who has been carrying race cam. The fifth row of the grid, Jeff Walters in car number 2, and Alan Bissett, car number 27, and rounding out the top 12, Peter Verheyen and Mark Poole. So that's the situation. cars come back round now and just warm their tyres up and get ready for a start. It'll be 8 laps around 1.94 kilometres. What a glorious sight that is with the big Coke balloon and the field sorting themselves out. John Bowe, you've done a lot of open wheel driving. This race, I think, is going to be very interesting.
It certainly is, Neil. It's really a training ground for any aspiring world champions that we may have in Australia. And I think really it's probably the only training ground, because they all get into it when they're quite young. And young David Brabham really does impress me with his dedication and his pace, considering that he's quite a novice in terms of race experience, and he's on pole position, so it'll be interesting to see if he can stay there.
It's David Stanley, the Bartrans entry. David Brabham has done a wonderful job this year in that new Van Diemen, a lovely little Formula Ford. There's David in car number 48, the latest high-tech Formula Ford, very narrow chassis, the youngest of the racing Brabhams. Brother Gary in England at the moment, brother Jeff running in the US, and Father Jack flat out trying to keep up with the 3 boys. Roger Martin, HFC Finance car number 4, and he's alongside car number 8, Richard Carter. Carried race cam on a couple of occasions, and at the last meeting here was involved in rather an amazing battle with Jeffrey Walters.
Well, that car of Carter's is a very old car, so he does a marvellous job. It's about 10 years old, I think.
Talking about the difficulties of getting sponsorship sometimes, I think it underscores the merit of Formula Ford racing in this past season or two. A number of cars that are now appearing with substantial sponsor signs on them.
Well, they've been turning on some great racing. Any prospective sponsor would get good value out of this racing because they really turn it on. Now just 10 seconds away from the start as the national flag is raised. Stanley and Brabham on the front row, Crisp and Carter on the second row. They're away. And Stanley makes a very good jump in car number 9 and leads the field to the top of the hill. Brabham not away as cleanly as he'd like. Richard Carter hard in behind him. Alan Bissett moving through the field from Melbourne in the yellow car. So it's a pretty clean start from the Formula Ford boys, and it'll be David Stanley in the Bartrans car. Brabham, Carter on the outside, not a good spot. There's the series leader, Warwick Brooklyn in car 76. He's back in around about 5th or 6th placing in the Triple M entry. And already Stanley and Brabham opening a gap over car number 4, Roger Martin in the Crisp. In fact, that's a very healthy gap with only half a lap down. Carter, then Brooklyn, Andrew Burden there as well in car 3. Look at the traffic. Certainly be unnerving when you're at the back of the field. They all stream down towards the right-hander at Winfield on lap 1.
Series leader Brooklyn has already dropped 2 spots since coming off the grid, and you'll remember he had a shocker at the last meeting here at Amaroo. I don't know what the problem is, but he needs to get a wriggle on, because if he wants to come out on top in this series, he's going to have to protect a very narrow lead over Richard Carter and Jeff Walters.
He had a broken wrist at that last round of the Formula Ford Driver Europe Series at Amaroo Park, so that wasn't helping his cause at all. But he's fired up again this weekend. He's up into 5th, as you quite rightly pointed out, behind Richard Carter there in car 8.
Neil, you'll notice these 2 guys in front, they really race from the drop of the flag, which is the sign of a very good driver. And if you go to Europe and if you have any ambition to be a world champion, that's what you have to do. You
get killed in the stampede if you don't.
That's exactly right. You've really got to have the red mist descend as the as the flag drops, and off you go.
The driver right in behind Warwick Brooklyn at the moment in car 3 is Andrew Burden from Canberra. You may recall him a commentary from the last round of this championship at Amaroo Park. He had a big bout of glandular fever. He's apparently over that now and back into fighting spirit. Jeff Walters there in the green car. He's back in about 7th or 8th. He's had some problems with his car in the last few meetings, and yesterday put John Smith in the car to try and dial out some of the problems. They had some gearbox housing breakages and also some braking dramas.
Roger Martin looks to be in quite a strong position too. That's a PRS, which is an English car, but not all that successful in England, but it seems to be going quite well here.
Interesting battle in the Driver to Europe Series, with Brooklyn leading with 64 points from Bissett, 61. Dave Stanley, who leads this race at the moment, 3rd in that championship with 50 points. Then Roger Martin, Andrew Burden and David Brabham. So 2 races within a race here at the moment, deciding the Coke Championship at Amaroo Park. And as the drivers continue their trail for the Driver to Europe Series. Car number 28 in trouble. That's David Brosnan in the Liztech. Very pretty little car, John. A revolutionary design in Formula Ford.
Yes, it is, Neil. Paul Liston, who is actually an engineer, not a pretend engineer, he's designed it, and it's wonderfully constructed and very updated, but at the moment it hasn't had a lot of success. I think it's all a bit new at the moment.
interesting situation here at the moment with David Brabham really probing at the back of Stanley. Stanley covers his ground well as they go down towards the right-hander at Mazda.
He's a hard little charger, that Brabham, though. I mean, he's really only a kid, and he really impresses me because he's
got his father's tenacity, hasn't he?
Yes, he's very gritty. He gets the head down like his father used to, and goes for it.
Well, he really thinks it out, and he seems to do it smoothly, and that's the way you go motor racing. Look at Martin closing under brakes in the right-hander. Richard Carter in there as well. He wants his 2 bobs worth.
He got his 2 bobs worth at that corner last
Didn't he ever? He came up heads. Across the line. Stanley from Brabham, then Martin, then Carter. Behind him we've got Warwick Brooklyn defending from a bunch of cars, so some great racing here.
This is why Formula Ford's such a good class, because it teaches you racing. It also teaches you how to set up your car, because they're quite complex little cars. And you have to learn how to fight wheel to wheel and learn how to outthink that guy in front of you.
We should explain that they all run the same brand and type of tyre, which evens out tyre performances in the car. Nobody has a special kind of rubber that's ultra expensive. Let's have a look at a replay of the incident on a previous lap. Oh, and there's Brosnan, car 28, spins off at Honda and neatly backs his way without doing any damage to the car off the side of the circuit.
Stanley's opened a bit of a gap.
Roger Martin with pressure on him from Richard Carter. These cars are 1600cc Ford pushrod engines, single camshaft. And they're all, I guess, supposedly, anyway, relatively equally matched in the way they're prepared, John?
Well, they should be, yes. There's always obvious little tweaks that the better teams know, but most of the front runners all look to be pretty evenly matched. It seems that Brabham can get up onto Stanley's tail almost at will, but getting past is another thing, and Stanley's driving a very good race.
2.5 laps remaining as Brabham again tacks on to the rear of Stanley's car, and they've broken away from the other pair now. Looks like a race in 2 at the head of the field. The minor placings a long way from being sorted out as Brooklyn continues his move forward. He really does need to finish high in the placings here to protect the lead he has in the overall series.
Stanley's car seems to have a bit more pace up the hill, and then Brabham catches him over the top. But Amaroo's a very difficult place to pass, and they've just gone past one of the spots.
Half a gap opened up there for Brabham. Stanley closed it very quickly, and Brabham continues to search, to probe. He won't find too many weaknesses in Stanley, I don't think.
I think if anything, David's a fraction quicker at the moment. David Brabham in 48.
When you're in the front like Stanley, and you have to cover your tracks a bit, you generally go slower, so everybody banks up behind you. But the name of the game is to be in front at the end of the race, and Stanley's doing it well.
Behind these 4 drivers, the battle continues with Warwick Brooklyn leading Andrew Burden. There they are in the 2 white cars, but they've now pulled well away from their challengers.
Last lap.
This is going to be very interesting as David Brabham thinks about feinting a move on the outside.
Stanley's got him covered everywhere, though.
Yeah, he's really thinking about it.
Driving well.
In fact, David, if anything, might just leave the gap open for Martin to dive through there if he's not too careful.
Notice how Stanley places his car on the road very well, right where Brabham wants to be.
Half a lap to go before we decide round 7 in the Driver to Europe Series and the final round of the Coke Series here at Amaroo Park. And they're bunching right up as they go down to the stop corner for the last time. Can Brabham do anything about this? Martin plunges in under brakes to try and argue for second placing.
Stanley can breathe a sigh of relief, I think.
I think he's got his tracks covered. David Brabham gets his car very sideways entering the main straight, but the checkered flag is out. And Stanley will take it in car number 9 from David Brabham, and then Roger Martin third in car number 4. Richard Carter next, followed by Warwick Brooklyn and Andrew Burden. Well, a great Formula Ford race. And just exactly what that does to the point score is going to be rather interesting. We'll try and work that out during the break. Meantime, let's look at the Castrol scoreboard and confirm that Dave Stanley won the race from David Brabham in car 48 and third, Roger Martin, car number 4.
I've never seen a bloke close so many gates in such a short space of time in all my life. You had to work hard to keep young Dave Brabham behind you.
You're not wrong. I had to work very, very hard. He's very good.
excellent win in the final round of the Coke Bottlers Series here at Amaroo Park. And, of course, there's still a battle going on between Warwick Brooklyn and yourself in terms of the Driver to Europe Series, isn't there?
Certainly is. It's down to him with a 2-point lead going to the wire at the Australian Grand Prix meeting.
Mike Waller is here from Coke to do the honours as regards the Amaroo Park Series.
Thanks, Gary. On behalf of Coca-Cola Bottlers, congratulations, Dave, on an excellent performance today and a great effort there in taking out the Coca-Cola Formula Ford Series. Well done.
Thank you very much indeed. And I'd like to thank Coke for sponsoring the series for so long.
And as Mike Waller steps out, we're going to have Richard Power step in from Motorcraft. As I said, this is the second last round of the Motorcraft Formula Ford Driver to Europe Series, and it's picked up valuable points for you, old son.
I really needed those points, I can tell you. We've had some bad luck, but...
Congratulations. Well done.
Thank you, Richard.
Thanks for keeping the series open until the Grand Prix in Adelaide. Anyway, it's just Motorcraft Series.
Thank you very much. I didn't keep it open on purpose, I can assure you.
I bet you did.
Thanks very much. Top effort, Dave Stanley, to win here at Amaroo Park today. More racing coming up right now. Here's Neil Crompton.
Thank you, Gary. And cars being cleared off the circuit now from that previous Formula Ford event. And what a great culmination in the series it'll be when they get to Adelaide, the Grand Prix for the Formula Fords. And there's been plenty of action at Amaroo Park here this afternoon, particularly in the open wheel ranks. And car number 42 being loaded up onto the back of the truck there is Steve Giuliana. Didn't see what happened to him, but there was plenty of action. But there'll be more in a few moments because the Ford Lasers are in the dummy grid area. That's young Mark Scaife. Cast your minds back 2 weeks ago to Oran Park and remember the sort of dust-up that he had with Peter Dane as they came up onto the main straight. It's the kind of action we'll probably get in this race. In fact, while they're sitting in the dummy grid area and waiting to come out, we might take a look at the way they'll line up for this 6-lap race. And starting from pole position will be Mark Scaife in car number 2. He'll share the front row with Steve Williams. The second row of the grid, Peter Dane and Shane Press. The third row of the grid, Andrew Harris and Ben Ruggles. The fourth row of the grid, Jamie McHugh from Queensland and David Morton. The fifth row of the grid, Richard Gardner and Graham Blanche. And positions 11 and 12 for the sixth row, Dennis Rogers and Tony Nicastri. Peter McKay joins us once again. And Peter, you're a supposed expert in these kinds of cars with radial tyres and no brakes and plenty of lurch. And who's your favourite in this one?
Well, the guy on pole's been doing a pretty incredible job this year. Young fellow Mark Scaife from the North Coast. He's come back from a bad crash at Oran Park with a brand new car, rebuilt in 2 weeks, and snared pole, followed it up with a good win in the earlier heat race.
Peter Dane, car number 41. He was the second part of the party that was involved in that little dust-up at Oran Park. There's Shane Press, car 5. Shane's back in 5th place in the series at the moment with 119 points, trailing Peter Dane at 189, Mark Scaife 171, Steve Williams 156, Andrew Harris, this driver here, he's in 4th place, 123 points. Behind Shane Press in 5th, Barron Robertson. He's got 110 points. Richard Gardner 109. There's Ben Ruggles, car number 90, and young Jamie McHugh from Queensland in the Ford Laser, car number 3. John Bauer said to me whilst we were in the commercial break that he believes this young fellow is perhaps one of the most promising young drivers on the Australian circuit today. He is a very talented young man, finished second last weekend in the Formula V Nationals up at Lakeside. And there's somebody from my home turf back down in Victoria, Gavin James from Ballarat in car number 6. He's come up to Sydney this weekend to compete in this last round of the Goodyear Car Owners Club Ford Laser Series, and there's big money up for grabs. $80,000 the total prize pool, $7,000 in prize money being allocated for this round, and to the outstanding find of the series, which last year was Mark Scaife, $2,000. Pete, it's almost worth pulling a helmet on for this.
I think some of the touring car guys would be very envious.
Peter Dane in car number 41. He's the man who leads the series at this stage, and unless he really has a dreadful run in this race, is pretty well backed, and that'll be 2 years in a row.
Yes, Peter's a very steady, very consistent driver. Shows signs of aggression when it's needed. But then I think Mark Scaife, guys like Steve Williams are all in there. Williams is a guy that's come out of the Appendix J ranks, but has shown some skills in the more modern cars. Has tried his hand at touring cars in an old Escort and did very well. But generally, this category has brought a few young fellows through. Jamie McHugh from Queensland showed a lot of promise. Richard Gardner, Shane Press. I like the look of that fellow.
He's been doing very well throughout the series. There's just a portion of the crowd lining up in readiness for the Better Breaks 300 later this afternoon in our live 7 Sport telecast. 300-kilometre enduro as we count down our way to the James Hardy 1000. This series is also being supported by Chevy at Alloy Wheels, Valvoline Oil and Century Batteries, along with, of course, the Goodyear Car Owners Club. That was right on cue. And, of course, we thank those people for their magnificent support. $80,000 in total prize money. Mark Scaife, best find in last year's series, second in the championship at the moment with a smile on, and that smile was wiped from his face pretty quickly at Amaroo Park just a few weeks ago. But he told me during the week that it's a brand new body on the car. They worked flat out on the thing in the last 10 or 14 days, and it is as sharp as it's ever been. So we should get a good race out of this one. I think it's the first time for a while that we've seen Steve Williams up on the front row, and it's the first time for a while indeed that we've seen Peter Dane back on the second row. So we're in for a good one here. 6 laps the journey, slightly reduced with 30 seconds now to go because of the unfortunate incident just prior to our telecast in the Formula Mondial race. There's Peter Dane. Plenty to think about at the moment. He's clear on points from Mark Scaife, but he must go on with the job. Ten seconds before the start. Good field of lasers. National flag now raised. Williams concentrating intently on that flag, and they get away quite cleanly. And Steve Williams, a very good jump in car number 11, and it looks like he'll lead Mark Scaife to the top of the hill. Shane Press up into third. Peter Dane on the inside arguing all the way. So Dane tucked right in behind Scaife, got nowhere to go.
Nothing between these cars.
And it'll be Williams who leads the field across the top for the first time. Scaife to second. Dane punching his way through to third. Shane Press on the outside, not the place to be in the Dunlop Loop. Then Andrew Harris. Listen to the tyre squeal. Those Goodyear radials are working overtime as they come round through this long right-hand section of the course. And Williams a pretty good break into the left-hander. Shane Press defending from Peter Dane, so in fact Shane managed to round him up on the outside through the loop, and that's a very strong and healthy manoeuvre from the man who's now in third. This is our leader, Williams in car number 11, with half a car length over Mark Scaife, 2 car lengths then back to Shane Press, and he's got Peter Dane tucked right in behind, then Andrew Harris, I think it's Ben Ruggles, Jamie McHugh. Plenty of action for the minor placings as they come through to end lap number 1, 5 to go. Williams the leader.
A large gap between second and third by laser standards.
Yes, you don't really see that too often because these cars are very evenly matched. They're allowed to modify the front suspension struts, and other than that, it's basically Group E regulations. You can change brake pads to the material that you prefer, install a roll cage, install a harness, carry a fire extinguisher, and go motor racing.
And use it for shopping on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday to Friday.
Does anybody actually do that?
I have seen it. In fact, recently in Sydney, I saw somebody whistle past me down the freeway in one of these cars with number plates on it.
Yes, I've seen a red Cordia getting around.
Jamie McHugh locks a brake getting into the left-hander at Honda. It's a fair way back at the moment in car number 3. He's got a bit of work to do. Steve Williams, a moment of glory in front of Mark Scaife as they come out of the stop corner. Coming through to end lap number 2. Williams in car number 11. 1 car length back to Mark Scaife. Pretty healthy gap then back to Shane Press.
He's got troubles of his own.
And I think Peter Dane would be getting very anxious. I think he would like to grab a couple of places to secure the series win.
Well, the gap between them at the moment, 189 versus 171. So they can't afford to drop too far back through the field. Points are allocated for the first 20 placings in this race, from 30 right down to 2 points. So he's going to have to drop a fair way further back at this stage. There was some conjecture after that last round of the series at Amaroo Park about the point score, but it's now been resolved. Press statement issued this morning by the Goodyear Car Owners Club, and clearly stating the point score. Peter Dane, the one at the moment who's having to really draw on all of his experience, because he's back in 4th place. I think that's as far back as we've seen him throughout the season. He's got Andrew Harris right behind him. Mark Scaife doing some good work all the time, pulling away from Peter Dane. And Steve Williams still leads as they cross the line to end lap number 3. Half race distance. Andrew Harris now attacks Peter Dane.
Trouble for Dane.
I think he might get him here. Dane, though, has a much nicer line entering the right-hand portion of this corner.
Nice doesn't count, huh?
No. Harris has managed to get him. So Peter didn't cover his tracks too well at all. And what you were saying before, Peter, about having to drive with one eye in the mirror in this class is very true.
Doing a rough calculation here, and I think it's nip and tuck at the front.
Yes, if he drops another place or two, he could be in very serious danger as far as the series is concerned, and he's going to be under all sorts of pressure to try and get a place or two back, because Harris certainly isn't going to let him. And up front, they go side by side into the corner. Oh, look, on the outside, Scaife.
Is there enough road?
There's plenty of road, but it's the long way around. And look at Press trying to sandwich in between them. Scaife's been wide all the way for the last 600 metres.
Well, I don't think his budget could stand any more panel damage.
And up the hill they go, still side by side, this pair, Scaife and Williams.
They finish in the order they're in at the moment. Peter Dane who have 209 points and Scaife 198. Look at this with Mark Scaife on the outside.
This is the longest outside run I've ever seen. Almost a full circuit. Oh, gee.
Inside rear of Williams' car comes off the deck for one fleeting moment. I thought he may have upended the car. Scaife, though, on the outside. What can he do about this man on the inside of him? Well, he can't do anything. He's going to do the David Brabham trick and do some rallycross.
He's still got it. He's got the line through here. Well, gives him a nudge as he goes through.
You can just keep
great stuff.
Cash
persistence pays off.
Great stuff from Mark Scaife, a good driver, and he showed his bravery, hung on for a lap, and is now up front.
One full lap on the outside. That's incredible.
Of course, you'd never do anything like that, Pete.
No, not for the last 10 years.
And now Williams has dropped back to third as Shane Press comes through to put the pressure on Scaife. The race is not over yet.
Well, you could just ring up the cash register, then it was sort of $500 a pop. Bang, goes another guard on Mark Scaife's car. It's an expensive little class of racing if you're going to do it that way, but Mark Scaife has the lead now. That's what he needs. He needs all the points he can get. Shane Press behind him. Andrew Harris into third. Peter Dane scratching his head. And look at Harris. He's actually got a laser to oversteer. Oh, and one man off into the rough. Car number 90. And that's Ben Ruggles.
Stay alive.
Well, that's an appropriate sponsor, isn't it? Actually, our other guest commentator today, John Bowes, had one race in these cars down in Tasmania. And I don't know how he survived it. These boys really play for keeps.
I believe John won.
It's even better, isn't it? There's still some fire in that old dog. Mark Scaife, the leader in car number 2. Shane Press second. The gap now starting to open up just a little.
Harris up to third. The fire's gone out of Williams. Back to fourth spot. 2 laps to go. So still plenty of time for things to change. Peter McKay doing his mental arithmetic here with a pencil and 3 sheets of paper.
Takes a long time too when you're that old. You get the abacus out in the middle. Andrew Harris from Williams right behind him and looking for a way through on the inside. He's got to try and recover some ground. Of course, he was a little faster. He qualified better. He finished better in the first heat. Now he has the inside running for Mazda. Oh, and Harris drops out 1. Pete, I guess this is a little bit like last year's Pulsar Series. To some extent, you have to throw technique out the window.
Well, some of the other drivers don't allow you to use technique. You can only do what other drivers allow you to do, and it's a bit like that in the laser race, although the object always is to be smooth. Mark shows, now that he's out in front, how he can put a bit of a gap into these guys because he's driving very smoothly and he can pace himself. He's done everything he had to do today. He had to win the race, but Peter Dane looks to have taken out the series if he stays in 5th spot. I think he grabs it by a handful of points.
Last lap board. And I don't think it's going to change too drastically. Certainly not where Dane is concerned. I don't think he's going to lose a spot. There's a fair gap on the track behind him, so he's safe in that respect. All he's got to do is hang on to 5th spot to take the series, but they certainly can't take away the win today. Although don't let's get premature, but I think you'll find Mark Scaife is going to hold out to the checkered flag. Shane Press pressing as best he can, but really not fully in touch with the leader.
Scaife now with 2 right-handers to go before the checkered flag greets him. And now he has put a very handy gap between himself and Shane Press. Steve Williams, a fine job to get back up into third placing. That's a good drive from him. Seeing he really got bustled out before 2 laps ago. Now coming through the final right-hander at Camalco Wonderlic turn. And Mark Scaife will take the checkered flag in car number 2 and win from Shane Press. And behind him, Steve Williams, then Andrew Harris and Peter Dane, followed then by Jamie McHugh. Well, that was a great conclusion to this year's series. There's been some fine racing, but Peter Dane hangs on. And let's go to the Castrol scoreboard. Compliments of digital and confirm that Mark Scaife has won the race from Shane Press, and in third placing, Steve Williams.
This motorsport feature is proudly brought to you by your mobile team and Holden, Australia's driving future.
Let me tell you, the scene here at Spa in Belgium is quite hectic at the moment as we're preparing for the final 30 minutes before the start of the 24-hour Classic. The big news, of course, is that the Scot, Tom Walkinshaw, has won pole position. He's almost half a second clear of the Gerhard Berger BMW entry. Then Walkinshaw's second rover, driven by Armin Hahner. I guess the big news from last night surrounds Sydney driver Alan Grice. We've always known that Gricey is a charger, and he was back there around about 12th or 13th on the grid. Everyone had put their race setup in for today's race. Grice put his race setup in and went quicker.
Yes, we were the quickest last night, in the middle of the night. We put our race engine in, and all along we've been saying that that's our strongest engine, and we haven't been practicing on it because we obviously wanted to keep it for 24 hours. So I put a set of tyres on it, did one quick lap last night, which moved us up about 5 spots and put us our customary position as in front of all the rest of the works cars.
Honestly, you can sit here and park in the pits, I reckon, for 30 seconds, let them all go and say, OK, they've sorted themselves out in the first corner. We'll now get out there and drive around and enjoy ourselves, because the interesting thing about it, and our guys have been through this at Caller Raceway when we ran a test there, is that you almost feel like giving up hope sometimes because something's gone wrong, like an alternator or a battery's gone flat or whatever, and 5 minutes later you fixed it, the car's back out there. And the significance of that, when it's broad daylight the next day, is just minimal. I mean, you look at that and say, well, that was nothing.
So Peter Brock is confident, Alan Grice is confident, and the great Scot Tom Walkinshaw is also confident. Let's take a look how they'll line up as the cars come out onto the grid. From position number 1, we have Tom Walkinshaw, the great Scot in the Bastos Rover. From 2 is the Schnitzer BMW of Gerhard Berger, Ravalia and Pirro. Position 3, the Texaco Rover of Hahn, Holm and Allen. From 4, the first of the Volvos with Thomas Lindstrom and Ulf Gramberg. From position 5 will be the second Nordica Volvo of Johnny Cicotto and Anders Olofsson. From 6, the Eggenberger Ford Sierra of De Doyne and Siggy Muller. Position 7, the Roadways Commodore with Alan Grice and Michel Delcourt. From 8 is Harold Gross and Winkelhock in the Ford Sierra. Position 9 is the BMW 635 with Dieter Quester. From 10, the second Eggenberger Turbo Sierra with Soper, Niedelwitz and Mike Thackwell. Position 11 is the surprisingly fast Danny Snowbeck 190 Mercedes. 12 is the BMW 635 of Giro and Malcher. And lucky 13, of course, is the number 5 Mobile Commodore of Peter Brock, Alan Moffat and John Harvey. Coming in for the start now of the Spa 24-hour Classic, and on the inside, Pirro putting a lot of pressure on Walkinshaw, but Walkinshaw moves him up the track to take over the lead. Moving in very quickly behind them is Anders Olofsson, but it's Uncle Tom in front. They're being hounded away here by the BMW 635, the surprise qualifier, on the front row. Peter Brock starting out at position number 13, and Alan Grice already making a move down here on the outside as they come up to the first of the right-handers. But it'll be Walkinshaw in first, followed by Armin Hahner. And then slipping up on the inside is Pirro in the BMW, looking for Alan Grice on the inside up to about 4th or 5th at this stage. Look at the gap that the Rovers are starting to put on the BMW 635 as they come through Bastos corner. And they've probably got about 150 metres clear of the BMW, and Grice making a lightning start, already up from 7th to 4th at this stage of the race, and Brocky in touch with the leaders. Walkinshaw running at the head of the pack and being covered beautifully here by Armin Hahner, and Pirro in the BMW, followed by Grice. Siggy Muller, the next one up on the inside, and another of the Sierras finding his way past Peter Brock. But there's the gap. Tom Walkinshaw, Armin Hahner doing this ever so nicely, the way they did it 1 year ago in the 1985 Spa 24 Hours. The rest of the field, there's the gap. Gricey through, running in 3rd place, and he's dislodged the BMW, so Grice is definitely the man on the move in the Spa 24-hour Classic. Ronnie Dixon going through, already up into the top 10. And 26 laps into the race. Problems for Alan Grice. We believe the car has thrown a front wheel off going down the back straight. And Grice is now trying to steer the car back to the pit area, but using the grass verge. Otherwise, the marshals will stop him. So woes already for Alan Grice. A beautiful start up to third, but still with a lot of work to do in the race. Car number 8, Tom Walkingshaw, the race leader, still stretching that lead with Armand Harner sitting right in behind him. They're opening up that huge gap at this stage over the BMW 635 as they head round onto the back straight. So over 3.5 hours into the Spa 24-hour Classic, and it hasn't been the best of races for Australia. As I pointed out earlier, Alan Grice had a wheel come off. He had to drive the car around the entire circuit on the grass to limp back to the pits. He's lost just over an hour repairing the car. Almost at the same time, a head gasket blew in the Peter Brock Mobile Commodore. They took the car behind the pits. It's now back in the race. The second Mobile dealer team car has come up to 13th position, so it's worth watching. At the moment, though, it's Jeff Allen in the Bastos Rover who continues to lead the Spa 24-hour Classic. And at least now with 2 Commodores back in the race, John Harvey looks like he might even get a start. Wasn't looking too good there for a while, John.
Yes, you're right, Mike, but what I think we've got to remember here, we're in Europe at the premier car race in the world, up against the stiffest opposition in the world. Dramatically since we were here last, and unfortunately our cars are just not fast enough. However, we're back in the race, and I think it would be a great achievement just to finish this race and win it.
This motorsport feature was proudly presented by your mobile team and Holden, Australia's driving future.
Back at Amaroo Park, Jim Richards in the #1 BMW on the first of 2 warm-up laps in preparation for today's Better Brakes 300, first round of the Australian Endurance Championship. And by gee, what a race this is going to be. The conditions are very, very hot, and in fact, I think it's going to be a factor as they get on towards the end of the race. 155 laps of Amaroo Park. Every part of the circuit is demanding, no chance to let up at all. And these fellows, John Bowe, are going to be working real hard.
Well, they certainly are, Wilco. I remember several years ago, Dick Johnson said it's like having a race around your lounge room, and it's really right. It's very tight. You don't get any break at all. You're working the car and working your arms and working your legs, and it's... I've only driven a touring car here for 20 laps, and that was bad enough, so I don't envy these guys at all. I think probably the easier cars to drive will be the light ones, such as Colin Bond's Alpha and Tony Longhurst's BMW. But although I think if I was a betting man, my money would be on Glenn Seaton's Nissan, which I'm not a betting man.
With the warmth in the track, John, is that likely to carve tyres up a little earlier than everybody anticipated? Because yesterday it was fairly cool.
Well, it is, yes, but they've done they've all run a fairly conservative choice because they're all going to do about 70, 75 laps before they stop.
All right, as they line up, let's check the grid. As I said before, Jim Richards on pole position for BMW, sharing the front row with Colin Bond in the Ignis Alpha. Second row, Glenn Seaton in the Nissan, Peter McLeod in a Commodore. Row 3, Tony Longhurst in the BMW 325 and Mike Bergman in a Commodore. Then a pair of Commodores, Brian Callahan and Gerald Kay, followed by Brad Jones in the Starion and Tony Mulvihill in a Commodore. Then Murray Carter in a private entered Nissan Skyline and John Smith in the Toyota Corolla. And rounding out the field, Mike Quinn, the Toyota Sprinter, Ken Davis in the Mustang, John Giddings in a Nissan Gazelle, Brian Bolwell in a BMW, Trevor Ashby's Commodore, David Ratcliffe in a Toyota Levin, Andrew Bagnall an Escort, Kevin Clark a Mustang, and that completes the field.
Big field of cars with less than 30 seconds to go before the start of round 1 of the Australian Endurance Championship. There's young Glenn Seaton, car number 15. Potentially being backed up today by George Fury. Peter McLeod, car 4, the national flag raised. They're racing in the Better Brakes 300 for 1986, and Colin Bond gets away very well, but Peter McLeod splits the field. The reigning Australian touring car champion from last year, Jim Richards, up into second place in car 1. And across the top for the first time, it was Bondy that got away very well, but McLeod, the horsepower of the Commodore coming to its own. McLeod will lead from Richards. Seaton up into third, then Bond. Callahan, the next driver through, Tony Longhurst, and then Barry Jones in the Commodore.
By gee, what power in that Commodore. Never been more obvious as they went up the hill. McLeod just split the other pair. Bondi got shuffled back very quickly after making a good start. And Richards, well, he's been known to make a slow start or two before.
He's so good, isn't he, though? He picked me off there a few meetings ago, and he only did it once because I woke up to myself after that.
McLeod looks like he might have run his race in the first lap.
Well, Seaton through on the inside to second placing. Jim Richards, the winner of this race last year, will lead the field as they come through to end lap number 1. 154 to go. Richards from Seaton, then McLeod, then Bond, Longhurst, Callahan's
Jones making a big charge up the hill too.
But a good start from Peter McLeod nonetheless, a former Australian endurance champion, and was confident that his car would last the distance and would run at a very healthy race pace.
Well, the Nissan's ultra reliable, as they proved in the Touring Car Championship, but they were sprint races, remember, although Fred Gibson, team manager's confident they're going to show just as much consistency in the endurance events.
This is the first endurance race they've actually been in, isn't it?
Yep. So it's a real test for them. They've put a pretty big load on Glenn Seaton's shoulders today.
They certainly have, but he's matured immensely the last 6 or 8 months since he's been running the Skyline. And as I said before, I raced against him the last meeting here, and he drove very, very well. It's almost he's got an old head on young shoulders.
He's had a pretty good teacher.
Well, he has, hasn't he? He's been racing since he was a boy. So.
Richards goes through. Seaton in second place still. McLeod clinging on to third spot ahead of Callahan, who's bypassed Colin Bond and moved up to fourth place.
I think you'll notice as the tyres on the Nissan start to warm up, they're a Dunlop 06 compound, they're an endurance tyre. As they start to warm up, he should start to reel Jim in, because I think personally the Nissan is capable of lapping quicker than the BMW.
A bit more weight in the BMW too, isn't it?
Yes, there is, but the Nissan's got the grunt out of the corners. It puts its power down on the road very well.
Richards leads. Seaton coming down to the late corner for the third time. Callahan's got past McLeod and moved up into third spot, although he's a fair gap behind the leading two.
McLeod's coming into the pits, I think.
Yeah, Bond has got by him, so's Tony Longhurst.
How's Callahan going, though? He operates on a budget that wouldn't keep the Holden dealer team in chewing gum, and there he is up in third place.
Oh, speedway peddler, and I tell you what, he knows how to do it and do it tough and still come up with the goods, and he's certainly proving that at Amaroo Park this afternoon. Can he close the gap on these two? Seaton hounding Richards, not letting him get away at all.
It's the first time this year that we're going to see pit stops in a race, so an all-new problem to contend with. These cars expected to come in around about half race distance between laps 75 and 80. They'll take on potentially 4 tyres and 3 churns of fuel, 40 litres per churn. These 2 lead cars, 120-litre fuel tanks. They're topped right up at the moment, and they are in endurance trim.
This is a good situation for Glenn to be in, to be behind Jim. Jim's a very smooth driver. I consider him to be the best driver in the touring car field. And he's just sitting there and cooling it, and it's an awful long race. So I know I keep talking about the Nissans winning, but I don't want to lose my money.
Brian Callahan coming up the hill here, and both Bond and Longhurst are getting onto his tail now. He caught them all napping in the lap or two after the start with that big move up into third place. McLeod out of the action at the moment.
They dropped a valve in this car last Wednesday, and they've had to put a new engine in, completely rebuilt another engine from various components that they had back at the workshop. Qualified the car pretty well yesterday, up at a 7th position on the grid for the 4th row. They're expecting to make 2 stops in this car. Callahan doing the first stint. Barry Graham will step in for the middle stint, and then Callahan should take it through to the checkered flag. There's Colin Bond in the 75 Alpha.
The problem Callahan's going to have really is he's running on cross-ply tyres, which do not last as long as the radial ply tyres. They're quicker to start with, and then they lose the ultimate grip.
Race cam from Tony Longhurst's BMW 325. You can see him there trying to close up on the tail of Colin Bond's Alpha, and up ahead of them, Callahan, we've just been talking about.
Longhurst is the driver to watch in this race. Last year was unfortunate. He was doing very well, but received a puncture around about 2/3 race distance. But I would expect this little car and the car in front of him, Colin Bond, to be a real nightmare for the bigger cars from around about laps 90 onwards. Callahan with pressure on him from Colin Bond, a former Australian Rally champion, Australian Touring Car champion, and former winner of the James Hardy 1000.
Bondy would be looking in his mirror and waiting for the hit.
last meeting here, I went unfortunately on record as saying, "Oh, these guys are doing a great job not rubbing panels," and then Tony managed to give Colin a big serve. But a great shot from Seven's race cam as Longhurst plunges into the right-hander at the stop corner. 1 car length down on Colin Bond.
This is the battle for third place. Up front, Jim Richards continues to lead from Glenn Seaton. Then this trio, Callahan, Bond and Longhurst, and in behind them we've got car 51, Tony Mulverhill's Commodore, and also car 36, Murray Carter in the Nissan. Race cam again as they come up to the top of Bitchapave Hill.
They're so evenly matched, those two cars, aren't they?
And they're so well suited to this circuit, as you mentioned before, and so as this race unfolds, one slip on the part of the front runners and they're going to have to answer to this pair. Jim Richards is the race leader in the 635 BMW. There he is. He hasn't got any further away from Glenn Seaton at this stage, and Neil Crompton's got the stopwatch on them. We'll get a lap time as they come around on this circuit.
I don't think you need a stopwatch for that gap.
Not the gap on timing, it's the lap time of Jim's, because it'll be interesting to see just what sort of a pace they'll run this race in. The experts were tipping low 55s, and there's Peter McLeod in the pits in car number 4. And the Commodore not sounding too good, the bonnet up. And Jim Richards, meanwhile, leads the race. Still plenty of pressure on him. Seaton up into second. Seaton, I would think, at this stage now quite content to be in this spot. He can watch what Jim's up to, provided he's comfortable in that position and maintain that lap speed. He can be there anytime he wants to make a move.
Well, if he believes in the reliability of the Nissan as much as Fred Gibson and the rest of the guys do, I'm sure he's pretty happy to be where he is.
Well, it's really a reflection on Group A, isn't it? We've got a normally aspirated 3.5-litre six-cylinder in front, running on Pirelli tyres, and a 2-litre turbo behind on Dunlop tyres, and they're so evenly matched. Nobody seems to be able to make any impression on the other at the moment.
Well, I tell you one surprise, chaps. The lap time then for Jim Richards was 54.07. He qualified yesterday in a time of 53.1, so considering the car is in race trim with a full load of gas, he's really flying.
That's 120 litres he's carrying. It's a lot of weight in the back.
You'll notice on the back of the BMW they have a bias on the fuel tank as well. There's a little tank just off to the right-hand side, and the car hangs out underneath the bottom right-hand side. Try and balance the car better on these circuits. So in other words, it compensates for the weight distribution of having Jim Richards on the left-hand side of the car.
One car we haven't seen much of is 33 Mike Bergman. I've had an eye out for his Commodore, but he's got troubles as well as Peter McLeod, and has gone to the pits, so the race stands at the moment with Jim Richards leading. Glenn Seaton in second place in the Nissan, and third spot being held down by the Commodore of Brian Callahan. 11 laps gone in the Better Breaks 300 at Amaroo Park. Jim Richards leads from Glenn Seaton. This is the battle for third. Brian Callahan holds it at the moment, and you might notice behind him there's been a small change of positions. Tony Longhurst is now in fourth spot ahead of Murray Carter, and Colin Bond has been slipped back 2 positions. One of those passing incidents transpired during the break, and it was Tony Longhurst who managed to get by Colin Bond. Look at this battle, will you? This is really intense. Longhurst getting underneath Callahan as they come into the corner. Callahan persisting on the outside. He's got the power, but he's not going to get past on this very short straight, I don't think, as they take another sharp right-hander, and Longhurst takes over third spot. Bondy poking up there on the Murray Carter, but Carter now flashes by Callahan as well. And Bondy finds himself snookered behind the Commodore.
This is a fantastic dice. It's been going now for about the last 3 or 4 laps. Longhurst threading his way through the field.
This is the best Murray Carter's driven for an awful long time. You know, he seems to come good at the endurance time of year, doesn't he?
Well, he's been around a long time. I guess he figures he's a stayer.
Well, I watched him race at Longford in 1960, and he's been racing ever since.
Barry Jones goes through on Callahan as well. In the Jones Mulverhill entry, Tony Longhurst locks a break into the left-hander. Colin Bond, the meat and the sandwich in this battle. There's car 51. Tony Mulverhill, Barry Jones, Commodore in the hot pink and white colours. Incidentally, I noticed the lap before, Graham Moore pulling into the pits in his Holden Commodore, car number 21, and joining Peter McLeod. In fact, we have Peter McKay down there in the pits for us today. So throughout the afternoon, Peter will be updating all of the action in the pits for us. Callahan now. Look what can happen in about 3 kilometres. All of a sudden he was in third, now dropped back to 6th.
What's the saying you guys say? 0 to 0?
That's it.
That's right. Through they go. There's Colin Bond, and behind him 51, the Jones Mulverhill Commodore.
Colin this weekend with the high horsepower engine in the car. Been experimenting with that for some time. There's Graham Moore's car. This is the original Group A Commodore built by Peter Brock and the Mobile Holden dealer team for early 1985. It was used as the T car last year in the James Hardy 1000. And Graham's crew looking a little puzzled at the moment. There's Graham at the wheel of the car. Bob Stevens was due to share that drive with him, but it looks as though they're going to be in there for some time. Meantime,
feel a bit sorry for Graham too. He had a substantial sponsor sign for this car. The day the buck dropped through the floor, so did the sponsor.
It's a problem with motor racing, isn't it? You have to have good sponsors.
Well, it looks like Graham getting out of the car. He just unlatched himself from the safety harness, so they're going to be in there for some time. As we look at Murray Carter in car number 36, closing the gap a little at the moment on Tony Longhurst in car number 25. This is the Nissan Turbo Skyline in identical trim to the Seaton car. It was built by Fred Gibson and the Nissan team at their Dandenong workshops in Melbourne, being co-driven today by Bill O'Brien from Canberra. Qualified in a time of 54.92, which was 11th on the grid, and I think this is probably the performance of the race so far to have come up as far as he has.
He'd be lapping as quickly or quicker than he qualified, I would say.
I would say he is. In fact, I might just check that the next time through. He's right in behind Tony at the moment. Colin Bond has freed himself up a little now from some of the traffic, and he can get on with the job chasing Tony Longhurst. We'll get the clocks on them and see just how quickly they are getting around.
Carter's anxious to go quicker.
Is it Murray driving the car or Bill O'Brien?
We might have a closer look when they come over the top. It's that ever familiar light blue open face helmet of Murray Carter.
Sorry.
Through the loop. Loses a little ground to Longhurst there. The smaller car pretty nimble. Big things happening next year for the JPS BMW team when they go to their 4-cylinder 4-valve engine, which is likely to churn out considerably more horsepower than this car. In fact, up around the 300 mark, up from about 220 as it is at the moment. Murray Carter.
That'll be an outright contender next year. It's called an M3, and whilst the 325 is a outright contender around this circuit, I'm sure that on the longer circuits next year that Tony will be competitive.
Well, Tony Longhurst is very competitive anywhere, and he's having a bit of difficulty trying to stave off Murray Carter at the moment, but I think easy does it is going to have to be the formula for Tony Longhurst. He's got that giant killer reputation, but in these kind of races, I think he's going to need to show a bit of early restraint.
Already had a good chat to me and told me to settle down the first 20 or 30 laps. 155 laps here, you've obviously got to be very, very consistent. And as long as I get through the first 20 or 30 laps without any bumps or dramas, I'm sure it'll go very, very well. It's a very tight circuit, and you're continually working, whereas at Bathurst or other tracks that have got good long straights, you can have a bit of a rest. You know, there's no rest here. You're either changing gears or going around the corner. So I'll be interested to see how I feel after 155 laps today.
Tony Longhurst busy at the wheel at the moment at the 325 BMW, and Murray Carter in hot pursuit.
He survived 17 laps.
Good performance from him so far. Teamed up last year with Jim Richards for a 4th placing in the James Hardy 1000. Great performance in the Castrol 500 preceding that race. And at one stage early in this year's Touring Car Championship, it looked as though Tony was going to be up around 2nd or 3rd. There's his team manager, Frank Gardner. Still no smile from Frank.
Early days, yeah.
Early days, that's right. Long way to go in this race. 155 laps the total journey.
Jim Richards has opened up a bit of a gap. Glenn Seaton got tied up in some back markers, and Jim's got a bit of breathing space.
Might go back and re-roll McClock on Murray Carter this time through as he goes past our commentary point, get some idea of how quickly he is lapping. Meanwhile, of course, Jim Richards still doing comfortably at the head of the field. He's opened up a gap of around about half a lap over these two drivers as they go to the top of the circuit. He's coming through the left-hander down at Honda. Through the right-hander in the Dunlop loop, we're looking at Murray Carter in car number 36. But as you saw very early in the race, Peter McLeod, one of the early casualties in car number 4, the auto part entry, and I believe at the moment Peter is with Peter McKay. Sounds as though we've got a little problem down there at the moment. We'll come back to the two Peters very shortly. Go back to this dice between Tony Longhurst and Murray Carter. Still got the clock on Murray Carter in the Nissan Skyline. As I said before, this one built by the Works team. Fred assures me that it's every bit as competitive as the two lead cars. And as they come past our commentary point, Murray Carter clocking a time of 55.2 seconds. So that's just a little outside his qualifying pace, but that was done at a 54.9. So he's only 3/10 slower than yesterday's qualifying. And I believe at this stage that Peter McKay is ready for us once more.
Thanks, Neil. A brief moment of glory for Peter McLeod in the first lap, then into the pits with overheating problems, and now it looks like it's something terminal.
Yeah, the car boiled on the warm-up lap for some reason, and we were losing quite a degree of water out of the side of the engine, or from under the bonnet. And I can't quite explain why that happened. Obviously, it blew a head gasket, I would assume. Just one of those things that can happen without any provocation. But when I left the line, it was certainly losing a lot of water, and we tried to fix it by reducing the amount of the number of laps, number of revs, I mean, and just drive a little bit slower.
This time it's no go, mate.
It looks now like it's not going to be back on.
Better luck at Bathurst. Peter McLeod, one of the early retirements in the 1986 Better Breaks 300.
Thank you, Peter McKay, as we come back to our race leader, Jim Richards, car number 1. Winner of this race last year, as I said before, and that really concluded a roll of sensational drives from him last year. He was the winner of the touring car title. He was the champion driver in the long distance races. He gave BMW the Endurance Championship of Makes. And he also took out the Nissan Pulsar Series and the swag of prize money that went with that. There is John Smith in car number 16. At last count, I had Smithy up as high as around about 10th position. He's now, in fact, up into 8th. That's a fine performance from a Class A car. Little 1600cc Corolla. John Smith, former Formula Ford ace, and John Bowe has competed against you on many occasions in Formula Mondial for the Australian Gold Star.
John Smith is an excellent driver. He's, if he was in an outright car, he would be, no doubt, a very front runner. But he does a mighty job with this little car. It's got about 180 horsepower, little tyres that wouldn't look out of place on a bicycle. And towards the end of the race, he'll be giving some of the bigger cars some hurry up. I think I've lost my money, though, Neil. I think Glenn Seaton's out of the race or in the...
No, he's not out of the race. We're just checking, and he has, in fact, made one very lightning pit stop. He's back out again in 7th place on the track. Not all that far off the pace. I don't know what the problem was, but it's left Jim Richards with a fairly substantial lead.
Well, we might get Peter McKay to go and check that with Fred Gibson, the Nissan team manager, but it was certainly a lightning stop. He came in and out in a flash and went back out in front of our commentary point. Didn't lose an awful lot of space on the road. But we look here at John Smith. Expects to make a pit stop around about lap 75 and will probably only replace the 2 outside tyres. This little car is an amazing performer. Churns out about 190 brake horsepower. Gives it the big rev up to about 9,000, and when it goes past, it sounds absolutely glorious.
And he really enjoys throwing around too.
There's Glenn Seaton back on the road in car number 15. We're still checking on the problem with the Nissan Skyline.
All that hard work to do all over again.
Yep, he's right behind Bergman.
And Callahan.
It's a good thing about endurance races, though, because you can have a bit of a hiccup like that and you've still got 130 or so laps to go to try and get back up there again.
23 laps completed in the Better Breaks 300 of 1986. And Glenn Seaton on the march once more, trying to pick off Mike Bergman in car number 33 with a new sponsor this weekend in Life Portrait.
Well, Bergman was, in fact, a lap or 2 down anyway, so this effectively puts Seaton into 7th. He just passes Bergman. He moves in, passes Callahan, rather, and moves into 6th spot on the racetrack.
I saw Bergman with problems in the opening couple of laps. It looked to me as though there was some fluid coming out from underneath the car, and I'd speculate that it was fuel. Seaton climbing his way back through the field at the moment, but he's got some pretty tough competitors to deal with after he gets through these guys, because he's got to get through people like Tony Longhurst, Colin Bond and co, and they will not let him through without a fight, that is for sure. Glenn Seaton, 21 years of age. Big season for him this year in the Nissan Peter Jackson team. And if he gets tired or they need to really turn the pace up on this car, George Fury, as we've mentioned, will be standing by in the pits and will readily jump in there. Bigger brakes on the car at the moment as well. It stops very nicely into Winfield. Let's have a look at the Castrol scoreboard. Jim Richards, the leader, from Tony Longhurst, and in 3rd place, Colin Bond.
Seaton coming over the top of Bishopave Hill here at Amaroo Park, and in pursuit of car 51, Tony Mulvihill. Barry Jones, Commodore, trying to make up ground now on the leaders after having been forced to make one lightning pit stop. There's the Commodore going through the brightly coloured white and orange car, and he's got a big job to pull these people back now. Let's find out, if we can, from Peter McKay just what that pit stop was all about for Seaton.
Fred Gibson, the Nissan Skyline, was running very well, pushing Jim Richards for the lead, then suddenly into the pits.
Yes, Peter, we had a left rear tyre blister on us. I don't know why. It's not over pressure. We've done quite a few miles, and those tyres are touring car round, so whether it's a bad batch of tyres, I don't know. But it's got left rear blistered, so we'll change to a harder compound anyway on the next session, refuel, and hope to go right through there. So we might make a driver change now, depending on what we do with the plan now. So we're looking at sort of one full stop for some tyres next time and go right through if we can.
So instead of being right there, you're now playing a game of catch-up.
Well, we'll drive the car fast and hard all day, and that's what we wanted to do anyway. And it's a matter if the tyres will hang in, and we'll see what happens with it.
There you have it, the Nissan Skyline still well in the 1986 Better Brakes 300.
Thanks, Pete. Certainly is. In fact, in fifth place and closing is Glenn Seaton. Here's a man that I thought we might have seen a lot more of, Neil Crompton, Brad Jones.
Up into 8th position at the moment, lap 28 of the Better Brakes 300. Brad Jones from Albury, New South Wales, bringing Mitsubishi back to the touring car fray in the Turbo Starion. Had problems in yesterday's second session of qualifying when, as he came down to this particular section of the track, made a big run up onto the straight and in fact tapped the rear left-hand guard on the fence, which spun the car out and really slammed it quite firmly into the fence. They had to work on the car last night. They've got 2 cars here this weekend in their transporter. They worked very hard last night and got it back in shape, only to go out in this morning's warm-up and completely destroy a turbo housing when the rotor came loose, went straight through the side of the housing, so they've replaced that. One of the problems that Bradley was having in yesterday's qualifying, and indeed in the warm-up to this race in the last few days, having done around about 120-odd laps, was they couldn't get their adhesion right. For some reason, the car was more taily than they would have liked to have been. John, any ideas what that would be?
Well, it looks very taily now, Neil. He's having quite a battle on his hands. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to be like everybody else and blame tyres, but he is running on Yokohama. He is the only Yokohama runner in the race, and they are quite experimental. And Yokohama haven't had a major presence in Australian touring car racing as yet. And although he was very happy with the tyres, I think they've probably got a little way to go before they catch up to Pirelli and Dunlop.
Well, he's about to be lapped by race leader Jim Richards in car number 1. Gerald Kay is the Commodore in between, sharing today with Brian Thompson. We normally see Brian in the big Chev Monza.
Jim Richards looks like he's doing the same as he did last year. He's driving a fantastic race. He's got about half a lap lead on Longhurst at the moment.
Carter, by the way, has made a quick pit stop and has dropped from 5th to 9th position. He wasn't in there very long.
I thought it was too good to be true.
Bradley Jones indicating there to Jim Richards that he'd like him to pass on the outside. He'll stay well out of his way. Brad, of course, is the superstar of Group B racing, particularly here at Amaroo Park, and it's been some time since we've seen the Group A Starion. We saw it back, in fact, in the Adelaide round of the Touring Car Championship, but we thought we'd ask Brad a little earlier this weekend just exactly why Mitsubishi have come back to racing.
Well, we're being helped this time by the Japanese side of Mitsubishi and Yokohama and Shell. It's a development type deal with Yokohama bringing the tyres out here for the first time for this type of car. And we're running them, and we're going to do this race, Surface Paradise and Bathurst. With the Japanese side of things, I'm going over there to do 2 or 3 races with them, and hopefully we'll find the car reasonably competitive and be able to put together some sort of deal to race next year. It's the long-term type thing.
Brad Jones, confident about the long-term aspirations for the Mitsubishi team and the Starion. He's off to Japan very shortly, and next year we understand could have a very big and busy program with Mitsubishi. So it'll be interesting to see how this car goes as they go to Bathurst, but Gerald Kay makes every post a winner in car number 24 and improves 1 position to 8, so Bradley drops back to 9th. And again, the back of the Starion, John Bow, very, very dicey.
Yes, it's quite unstable in the rear end, and he's really working hard. I mean, I wouldn't like to be in his shoes on lap 155. They'll probably have to take him to hospital and give him a blood transfusion.
Well, the only thing is, it's a possibility, I suppose, that they've gone for a very hard compound tyre in the hope that it does last the race. Is that likely to be a plan?
I wouldn't think so. I would imagine that they've as they're experimenting, they've probably gone for the softer alternative to start with, and when he makes his stop and refuels, they'll probably put a harder compound on then.
One of the interesting things about this little car is that they've extracted now something like 270 brake horsepower out of a 2-litre engine. Runs about 1.5 bar boost, and from the book of Neil Crompton Useless Information, the turbo speeds in this little car at 130,000 RPM. And
that's why they fall apart sometimes.
Exactly. And you're talking about an exhaust manifold temperature of 1,000 degrees Celsius. There's Gerald Kay, car number 24, the Jag Parts Commodore, teaming up with Brian Thompson.
Already done one loop-the-loop, those guys, down in the late corner, so that cost them valuable time. The car's been running pretty well otherwise, and they're one of the few second-rank contenders, if I can classify them as such, that hasn't had to make a quick pit stop so far.
Yes, there's been some early drama in the pits, no question of that. I have a feeling that last year this combination did quite well.
This car's prepared by Peter Fowler from Shepparton, who's very much an old hand of motor racing in Australia, and he always prepares a good car, so they could be in amongst it at the finish as well.
Gerald Kay and Don Brentland last year brought this car home to 10th position in the Better Brakes 300. So a consistent drive netted them some result. Just ahead of them in car number 19, the yellow Commodore of Trevor Ashby and Steve Reed. You'll recall Trevor's name on occasions in our 7 Sport telecast, driving a pretty ferocious little Escort sports sedan. So he's gone Group A racing in his preparation for the long distance racing this year. Of course, the Castrol 500 coming up at Sandown, also the endurance race up in Service Paradise in 2 weeks' time, and then the James Hardy 1000.
Ashby's car's the ex-Ken Matthews car, which was constructed by Terry Finnegan from Sydney, who builds a pretty good car, but Ashby is fairly new to it, feeling his way at the moment.
Yes, it'd certainly be radically different to the sports sedan that he's used to driving. Actually, I caught Ken Matthews heading out of the country a couple of weeks ago. He was heading off to the sunshine in Hawaii, and the last thing he wanted to think about was touring car racing this weekend.
I suppose you felt the same.
Brad Jones goes through car number 53, the Mitsubishi Starion.
Jim Richards, meantime, continues to lead. Just checking that the situation hasn't changed at the head of the field. He's in front of BMW teammate Tony Longhurst. Glenn Seaton in the Peter Jackson Nissan is now up to third and closing quite quickly on Longhurst, so that battle is going to develop over the next few laps. In behind them, Colin Bond in the Alpha, still holding down fourth in car 75, and the Commodore of Tony Mulvihill and Barry Jones, car 51, is in 5th place on the racetrack.
I think we should try and get a gap from Richards to Seaton. I would imagine that Seaton is probably eroding away Jim's lead.
It's pretty substantial at this stage, because Seaton is in behind Tony Longhurst. They're coming up onto the main straight just as Jimmy Richards goes down to the stop corner. So we're talking 3/4 of a lap. The leader at this stage coming out of the right-hander and up onto the main straight, and here he is.
Got the clock running on that gap as well.
And as he crosses the start-finish line, I can tell you that Glenn Seaton is just coming up to the exit area of the Dunlop Loop. So we are talking a genuine 3/4 of a lap. Wilco will have an exact time for me shortly.
It's a very long race.
Yep, we've seen stranger things happen. Richards in the number 1 JPS BMW. The car next year also gets a tickle in the horsepower department. They're likely to go, and we go to 7's race cam just in time to see Glenn Seaton go through on Tony Longhurst. Great bit of driving from Seaton. Look at the pace that he's got on as he lines himself up for a run down the straight, out from behind John Smith, and there is no substitute for horsepower, John Bauer.
That's for sure. And the engine in that Nissan is very strong.
Jim Richards, the race leader, has a gap of 38 seconds over Glenn Seaton. That's fairly substantial still. But Seaton really is charging, having dropped back to 7th place with that very, very quick pit stop. But obviously the car is still strong, running strongly. And with a lot of time left yet in the race, as you said, John Bauer, there's plenty of time for things to happen.
Always in these long-distance races, the strangest things happen. And although Jim looks to be doing it fairly easily at the moment, as Frank Gardner said, wait till the endurance races, and he appears to have been right on cue.
Jim Richards, the man. Driver from Melbourne, been around in the touring car scene for a long time. Of course, he partnered Peter Brock to some brilliant victories in the James Hardy 1000 in 1978, 79 and 80. third in this year's Touring Car Championship, the champion in 1985. He cleaned up the Better Break Series here last year and was the champion endurance driver in the BM last year. 38 years of age. And apart from all of that, last year, as I said before, also managed to take the AMSCAR Series, and what a winning year he had. In fact, John, I was talking to you yesterday about drivers as Gerald Kay makes a quick stop in car number 24, and you regarded Jim Richards as probably the technically best driver on the circuit in Australia today.
He really is. He's always clean, always fast, and unbelievably fair to drive against. He never runs into you. He drives if he has to drive defensively, he does, but he doesn't block you or shut the gate like some drivers do, and he really is a very complete driver, and I'm glad things are going well for him.
He first started his racing career in karts in New Zealand. He's done some speedway, done a little bit of rallying, well known to Australian motor racing enthusiasts early on as the campaigner of a pretty ferocious sports sedan, that Falcon GT, and earned a reputation in the mid-70s as being a web-foot driver, very, very good in the wet. Frank Gardner appreciates those talents and has had him as lead driver for the last 4 or 5 years.
Mulvihill's car going through as the leader Jim Richards comes over the hill and continues to lead the race on the Castrol scoreboard from Glenn Seaton and Tony Longhurst after 40 laps. Jim Richards continuing to lead the Better Breaks 300 at Amaroo Park and doing a tremendous job with 41 laps completed. A long way to go still as he comes down toward the lake corner, but doing a superlative job. And again, as John Bauer said, the right man for the job as well, with an absolutely fantastic record, particularly in endurance races. But the problem is going to be for Jim, as he gives the thumbs up there to Frank Gardner as he went by the pit, is concentration. Although I guess he's going to have his mirrors full of Glenn Seaton as the race gets down towards the concluding stages, the way Seaton's going. Richards goes through, and his car 51, in fact, he's only just got by 51. That's Barry Jones at the wheel of the Mulvihill Commodore. Now, he's in 5th place on the racetrack, so Richards has lapped all but the other 3 cars behind him.
He's setting quite a pace, isn't he?
The Mulvihill car coming down towards Honda Corner. Bergman tucked in behind him. Barry Jones, as I said, at the wheel. This car is the same vehicle that finished 10th outright in the James Hardy 1000 at Bathurst last year. In fact, I think it was the first Australian car to finish the race, which is quite an achievement. And it's the first appearance back on the racetrack for Barry Jones for quite some time, and a welcome return. He qualified the car, and
he also built the car.
Yeah, built the car as well. Qualified in 10th position on the grid. They qualified on hard compound Pirellis, and they're racing on those. So I guess they're intent on trying to do the race without a tyre change. Is that a practical?
Well, I would imagine that they'll put tyres on when they refuel it anyway, because it's just as a safety measure. But I was talking to him this morning, and he doesn't like the feel of the Pirellis at all, but they just last and last and last. Yeah. So as you can see, he's having a bit of a dance with it.
Well, Wilco was talking just a little earlier about car number 24, Gerald Kay, getting in strife early on. He's already made a pit stop. Let's take a look at a replay, in fact, of just exactly what happened to him. Up the top of the circuit on the loop, got dreadfully out of shape across the top, went every which way, lucky, in fact, not to take out those enormous tractor tyres, and neatly backed it around.
Well, if he had hit the tractor tyres nearly, he wouldn't have taken them out. Yeah. They would have taken him out.
I think you and Peter McKay spent some time tangoing up there last year, didn't you?
Well, Peter did. I sort of slipped away.
I got news for you. That's the second time he's done it, too. He went round on the lake corner as well. Jones and Mulvihill hope to contest all the rounds of the Endurance Championship if they can get the dreaded sponsor.
The dreaded sponsor.
But of course, Barry Jones has a terrific record, and going back to the dying days of Group C racing, of course, when the RX-7s
well, he won this race, didn't he?
He won it with Alan Jones.
With Alan Jones, yeah.
Yeah.
Quite a good co-driver.
Exactly, but even without Alan Jones in his own right,
he's a very good driver.
Terrific driver.
That's right, and that same year that he won the CRC as Mike Bergman goes through in car 33 in a big way, gets the Commodore sideways and spins neatly out of business.
I think he forgot to put the brakes on.
Well, that was well timed, wasn't it?
It's good for the sponsor, though.
So that was pretty amazing. We were talking about Barry Jones, just in time to see Bergman sneak through on the inside, neatly spin for us. Callahan goes through on the field, car number 47. I was about to say that that year that he won the CRC, he also finished second in the Better Breaks Series here at Amaroo Park.
He's quite an Amaroo expert, living in Sydney. He does most of his testing out here, and he's done a pretty fair job. He built the car as well, so...
Let's have a look at that replay as Mike Bergman went diving through on the inside, about 50 kilometres an hour too fast.
No hope in the world of stopping.
Missed the apex by a country mile, then realises all too late that it's turned to mud.
Well, I think he was a lap or two down anyway. He'd probably just give it a go for the hell of it.
He could be in brake problems. It's a pretty hard corner on the brakes over there, but I wouldn't think so.
And Barry Jones survives quite neatly and continues. There's Bergman in car number 33. He was due to team up today with Mel Rose. And Mel's
Mel Rose is only a young guy.
Exactly.
It's good to see some new faces getting into Group A racing.
They had some problems with this car getting it right for this weekend. In the last few race meetings that we've seen Mike at, he's had fuel pickup dramas. They've been changing pumps. We were discussing it with him yesterday, John. They've been fiddling around with electric pumps and diaphragm pumps, and they finally got it right. Bob Stevens...
That was all a bit technical for me.
Yes, over the top, was it, for a works driver?
Yeah, for sure.
Bob Stevens is the driver that built this car. He was to team up with Graham Moore in this race. You may recall, in fact, the last time that Seven Sport was here at Amaroo Park, Callahan and Bergman tangled as they came along this next part of the course on this very short straight, and Bergman's car ended up pretty second-hand out of the whole deal. They had to put the chassis on a straightener for 3 days before they could stretch it back out to shape and replace a lot of panels. They're expecting at this stage to pit it around about lap 80, and then Mel Rose gets in for his first ever Group A touring car drive. He's using Avon tyres today, the Crossply A18 tyres, and they're also the same tyres that he qualified on. In fact, he's going pretty well.
Looks
because
like Seaton's in a bit of trouble there.
Coasting along on the outside of the circuit. Well, I wonder what is going on.
Well, he's trying to get rolling again after another. He has, in fact, been to the pits again.
Has he?
Yeah. Again, just a lightning stop in and out.
I wonder if I can get Peter McKay to find out of Fred Gibson what compound tyres they're using for future reference.
Yes, and then avoid them like the plague.
That's right.
Mike Bergman technically shouldn't be ahead of Glenn Seaton. I don't say that with any disrespect, but Seaton has been quicker all year and out-qualified him, but at the moment he's holding him at bay. Seaton appears to have regained his momentum, though. Blue flag out, stationary. That tells the driver in front that he's got another car right behind, and when it's waving, it tells the driver that there's a passing manoeuvre being effected.
I think the Nissan has lost some pace somewhere along the line, whether it's a mechanical problem or a tyre problem. It's
something very strange.
Difficult to say at the moment.
Well, he didn't lose... he's not a lap down, despite those 2 quick stops. He's a minute... Oh, he's a lap down, a minute 23, sorry.
So he's a lap and a half.
Yeah, a lap and a half down on Jim Richards, but still in 4th place. So he's been forgiven a few sins. Well, not his fault, I guess, but there's still time.
It's what's known as character building, I think, isn't it, this sort of thing?
Well, he's got plenty of time to build character between now and the end of the race. He's had to do it 3 times now.
This weekend, the Nissan supposedly enjoying a new front end. New front brakes, which are 1 inch bigger in diameter than the existing brake, takes them up to 13 inches in total diameter.
It's the same size as the Volvo, 13 inch.
Slightly different brake caliper on this as well.
Glenn Seaton, a Gazelle car 60, with John Giddings at the wheel, going down through the loop. Seaton endeavouring to get by there. Bergman's too in the foreground. And the Nissan does not seem to be moving just quite as nicely as it was in the early stage of the race.
Well, with Seaton working his way back through the field at the moment in 5th position, we thought we might take an opportunity a little earlier on this weekend to talk to his team manager, Fred Gibson, and find out just exactly what it is that Gibson looks for in a racing driver.
Well, the first thing is they've got to be quick,
You need to win races, so they'll be a quick motor driver sort of thing. And we look at our drivers as being fairly quick. And then secondly, you've got to look after the motor car. And in the racing we're going to be doing now anyway, it's long distance racing, and they really have to look after the car and look after the tyres. So as long as the driver is a quick driver, easy to get in with a team, to fit into the team, and also, as I say, like he can sort of look after the car when the long races come due. And I think with our drivers this year, we've got that with the three drivers we've got now. And hopefully with the fourth driver, when we announce that, he'll be the same sort of driver as we've got now.
Fred Gibson, team manager for the Peter Jackson Nissan team, talking on what he looks for in a driver. He's certainly got some good ones. John Bowe, Gary Scott, Glenn Seaton, George Fury, and they're about to name their fourth driver within a week or so.
It's a fairly strong combination with the car, which is a very good car, and the driver lineup they've got for Sandown and Bathurst. But we in the Valvoline Volvo team hope that we can beat them, because I think if you can beat the Nissan, you're looking fairly good for a victory.
Well, can I see if anybody disagrees with my understanding of the way things are? Jim Richards is in front, obviously. Tony Longhurst is running second. They're the only two cars on the front running lap. The gap between the two is 46 seconds, Richards to Longhurst. And then a lap down, we've got in third place car 75, Colin Bond in the Alpha, followed by 51. That's the Commodore of Mulvihill and Jones, and then 15, the Peter Jackson Nissan of Glenn Seaton.
No arguments here, Wilco.
And it's not going too well. In fact, gee, I don't know.
He's definitely got a problem there somewhere.
Absolutely has.
Could be a gearbox problem. Last time in Amaroo here, they had a problem.
Jim Richards leads. Longhurst second. Bond is third. Back with the Better Breaks 300 from Amaroo Park. First round of the Australian Endurance Championship with 55 laps gone, 100 remaining. Tony Longhurst has obviously observed the advice from Frank Gardner. He's survived the first 55 laps.
He hasn't missed a beat, has he? He's done a very good job. Still keeping it on the track and driving nice and smoothly, which is what you have to do in an endurance race.
And he's only around about 7 or 8 seconds ahead of his teammate Jim Richards in car number 1. So at this stage, Tony Longhurst, as Wilco said before, the sole remaining driver yet to be lapped. So it's been a good performance from Tony so far.
Jim's performance is reminiscent of last year, though, isn't it?
It isn't.
He doesn't seem to be doing anything wrong at all.
Just coasting along very comfortably. The car lurking around out there at the moment in low 55s, which is a very comfortable race pace for the leader, and not a lot of pressure on him.
What did you notice in the Spa thing? The BMW's all of a sudden more competitive in Europe as well.
Absolutely. Surprised a lot of people in recent months in the European Touring Car Championship. In our coverage this year, exclusive to 7 Sport, we've noticed all of a sudden the cars of Revalia and company have really shot to the head of the grid, which I guess augurs well for people like Jim Richards and Tony Longhurst, Frank Gardner, of course, for the James Hardy 1000, and also people like Greg Siddle, who intends running the Bob Jane T-Mart's BMW 635 again this year at the James Hardy. Remembering last year that Johnny Cicotto and Roberto Revalia finished second, and Jim Richards and Tony Longhurst finished fourth in these cars, and they really are ultra reliable and are particularly well built and set up for long distance racing. Easy on their tyres, nice weight distribution. They're a car that you've got to drive pretty hard, though, I believe. I've never driven one, but those that have say that you've got to wind them up and keep them mobile.
I don't think they've got a lot of torque, but they've got quite reasonable power now with their new homologation that they obtained about 3 months ago.
In fact, Peter McKay drove this car only a week ago out here at Amaroo Park and said it was a delightful little car to drive. Very smooth and forgiving.
He also drove the Nissan now and was very impressed by the horsepower.
As he said, it was a real shock. It was reminiscent of the Group C Falcons that he drove in the James Hardy some years ago. As we take a look through 7's race cam, Tony Longhurst up towards the hill, and you just got a glimpse then of the sort of problems they'll confront late in the race when the sun gets low in the horizon. That's going to be a problem for drivers.
He's got a problem before that. Jim Richards is only 4 seconds behind him and about to lap him.
It's a nice problem to have, though, when you're in the same team. A 1-2 at this stage. Only 1/3 race distance, though, a long way to go. Longhurst has been an Amaroo Park specialist here for quite some time. He took out the Alpha Sud Series in 1984. Some memorable battles with Alan Grice. There's Callahan with his hand out the window in car 47. Maybe a problem with the Commodore. Third here last year in the Better Breaks Series. And incidentally, this Better Breaks 300 today sees the final of the series, which has been running here all year. And I think, John Bow, you got a few points up in that.
Well, we did 2 meetings with the Valvoline Volvo, just purely as a testing exercise, and we had a victory at each meeting, which was nice. But the main thing about it was we learned a few things, and the old story is that if you can get your car to handle well around Amaroo, it'll handle well at Bathurst.
Brian Callahan coming into the pits. Peter McKay is down there. Let's find out what it's all about.
Yes, Gary, it's a full stop driver change. Looks like 4 tyres going on, and they'll top it up with fuel. Fuel, of course, is often the governing factor. It takes around about 8 seconds for a turn to go in, and they'll be probably using a couple here, I'd say. Harry Graham into the car, buckling up. And there's Brian Callahan up front, helping out there. This is a real do-it-yourself team. Perhaps a suggestion of some overheating problems. Brian's forcing some cold air into the radiator.
And plenty of cold water in there as well, Pete.
Plenty of cold water, Neil, yes. A 50-second stop. Maybe we'll grab Brian and just see how things have been out on the track.
While you do that, Pete, we're looking at Jim Richards in car number 1, so he's still comfortably well on his way. And that wasn't a particularly good stop for the Callahan-Graham combination. So Richards comes out of the loop, and Pete, I believe you've now got Brian ready to talk to us.
I wanted to cool it down a bit there. That's the best we can do, I guess.
Right, you led early, but then slowed quite dramatically after a handful of laps. What was the problem? The tyres going off?
Yeah, the tyres, once 10 laps are up, they started to go off a bit, but I had to save them to 55 laps, so that's why I backed off a bit.
There was a suggestion there that the engine was overheating. You're throwing plenty of cold water over the radiator.
Yeah, the motor's running pretty hot, 115 today.
Okay, mate.
It's too hot.
Go and have a drink.
All right, thanks, Peter.
Thank you, Peter McKay and Brian Callahan. Back to race leader Jim Richards, car number 1. And with a country mile over his nearest rival, which is incidentally his teammate.
Closing rapidly on Longhurst.
Getting up to about the 50-second mark, and as you say, about to put a lap on him. Jim Richards only has to keep it on the island and coast in comfortably now for the next hour or so. We dispatched Peter McKay a little earlier to find out what was going on with the Nissan, and came back and told us that the official word from the team is that they don't believe there is a problem with the car. Now, I find that very difficult to understand and believe.
I think they must be playing a bit cagey there, because he's dropped well down the field.
.62 laps, so they haven't reached half distance yet.
It is a good race to find any weak links in the chain for the James Hardy, though, because it's a pretty tough race on this track.
A few people have found some weak links here today, I'll tell you.
That's for sure.
Just ahead of Jim Richards there, we had a glimpse of the Nissan Gazelle being run by John Giddings. He's just fractionally ahead of Tony Longhurst.
Momentarily.
He's up into 10th place at the moment. It's not bad for a Class A car. Jim Richards using 17-inch rims on the BMW again this weekend, John, and they're running on a Pirelli radial tyre, a D4 compound, a fairly firm and hard compound as we take a look at Seven's race cam.
I think they've got D3s on the left-hand side, the working side, and D4s on the right. And earlier in the year they had a few problems with their 17-inch tyres, but you couldn't complain about the performance of them at the moment. It is running like clockwork, and the tyres look to be still nice and stable.
Tony Longhurst now getting a mirror full of Jim Richards in car number 1. What will he do?
So the leading car here is in fact running second. The second car in fact is running first.
If you understand all that.
run that past me again.
Tony's certainly not driving deliberately out of the way, is he? Jim will go through here on the inside, though, I think, without too many dramas. We'll have a look at it on race cam. There goes Richards. Notice how neat and tidy the 635 is in the back end. You'd watch a lot of the big horsepower cars there, John. They come out and they're fighting the things are crabbing sideways. And
well, it's an independent rear suspension, so it does put his power down very well, but Jim is a very smooth driver. It doesn't matter what he drives it smoothly.
I mentioned at Amaroo Park, and something that really surprised me, I'd never bothered to check with the JPS team and Pip and Frank and the lads that look after it, but up until recently, they run something like 2,000-pound springs in each corner of the car. It's got to be the most firmly sprung car in the race. It must be an absolute shocker to ride in and shake your teeth out.
Well, it depends on the mechanical advantage that the suspension has over the spring, but even so, it's still a very heavy spring.
Absolutely. I think you're talking around about 500, 600, 700 pounds, depending on competitors and the way they like their cars to react in things like Mustangs and Commodores and so on. So that's radically different. The BM also runs a very low ride height as Trevor Ashby comes to the pits.
It's almost a ground effects Formula One type spring, isn't it?
This looks to be just a scheduled stop for them. Lap 65 in the race. Perhaps just a fraction earlier than some of the competitors would have liked, but I would attribute that to a warmer day than everybody probably anticipated early on, maybe inducing a little more tyre wear than originally anticipated. Notice the 40-litre churn dry brake system being dropped into the back of the car and the vent bottle on the other side to try and avoid spillage. You'll recall some years ago in Seven's coverage of the James Hardy 1000, that nasty incident in the pit lane at Bathurst where Alan Moffat's crew were burnt. And from that point on, which I think was back in around about late 70s, Confederation of Australian Motorsport insisted that refueling be done via that dry brake method. Centre hub blocking nuts on touring cars, the big air guns.
It's not a very rapid stop, this one either, really.
This is sort of the egg timer job, isn't it?
Back on the racetrack, and while Jim Richards continues to lead events, here's Glenn Seaton still holding down fourth position rather, and that leaves George Fury free for the day, of course, to fill the very unusual role of spectator.
Well, there was a chance that I was going to have a drive today. Glenn was probably a bit tired, and you know, he had a fairly good lead, so they thought they'd give me a bit of a steer, and I don't mind that. You know, that's why I was here in the first place.
It's an easy circuit to get tired on.
It's a very long circuit, very long race, and very tight. You haven't got any straights to catch your breath back.
You certainly haven't, and Glenn Seaton knows that very, very well out there at the moment. And
Colin Bond just showed it. Did you see?
Yeah. And it's
veered off the road.
Very possible, as George was saying there, that he may yet get a drive in the car today.
I wonder what on earth Colin Bond was doing in car 75. He really had things hanging out. Let's take a look at the Castrol scoreboard and update the top three placings in the Better Brakes 300. Jim Richards leads from Tony Longhurst, and in third placing is Colin Bond.
Glenn Seaton, and we're on lap 70 in the Better Brakes 300 at Amaroo Park. So we still, John Bowe, haven't got to half distance, and Seaton is doing it all over again for the third time.
Yeah, he's really earning his money this weekend. He made a couple of quick pit stops, and it looked like he was in trouble there for a while, and now it's all going flat out again, and he looks to be lapping equally as quickly as Jim Richards, but he's got a fairly hard job ahead of him now.
I've got the clock on him at the moment, John, and very shortly we'll be able to give you some sort of a lap time. But Seaton working his way back through. We saw him before getting Colin Bond. And he's back up to third.
The lap time may not be that quickly. I saw an oil flag up the main straight a little while ago. I don't know what happened there, but it's very difficult to see oil because the sun shines in your eye.
54.6 seconds is the lap time for Glenn Seaton.
It's not a bad time for laps of the race.
It appears as though he's back on the charge again. I saw that oil flag myself. They're holding it out just in the pit straight. And whilst in the break, just having a look at Tony Longhurst, and he was treating it very carefully in a couple of places around the track, so somebody must have had an engine let go in a big way.
The problem you have is going up the straight, you're driving into the sun, your windscreen's got oil and dirt and bugs and whatnot on it, and you cannot see the oil slick, so it takes you a couple of laps to find out where it is.
In the under 2 litre category in the race, Mike Quinn, by the way, is now the leader. Those smaller capacity cars are about 3 laps down on the outright lead of Jim Richards, and he's got by John Smith because of this incident. Here's Smithy. Oh,
waltzed by the fence and just gave it the merest scrape.
He's grabbed a gear and just planted it, and away he went again. He just gave a little neat tap with the rear of the car.
Well, as a result of that, Mike Quinn has got through in car 13 and is now...
Smithy's right up behind him, so that'll be a good dice. They're both fairly hard charges. Mike Quinn's done some racing in Europe over the years and partnered Willow at Bathurst, and he's a pretty hard nut to crack, and we all know how hard John Smith is to beat.
Well, this battle for the small cars being led by Mike Quinn, you'll see Smith in the background, and then further behind them is John Giddings. So those three cars, after 70-plus laps of racing, are still very evenly matched. And Smithy then onto the main straight, getting out of shape, pointed towards his pit area, so perhaps he'll come in.
I think Smithy's got a tyre problem because it's very unusual to see him spin.
Well, you'd also have a pretty monstrous flat spot on the tyre after carrying such a long slide as well.
Well, these guys are a lot more evenly matched than the bigger cars, aren't they?
Yeah, they certainly are.
At least there are three of them on the same lap.
Talking about Mike Quinn, he was third in the support race for the Formula One meeting at Brands Hatch, where they ran Formula 4 2000. Started from the rear of the grid. He's got plenty of international experience. And, of course, John Smith here in car 16 is a Formula 4 driver, Europe champion, and ace Formula 2 driver, Formula Mondial driver. I think the best drive I ever saw him put in was at the Australian Grand Prix at Calder a few years ago, and he had a great tussle with a shackle of feet. This is the Quinn's little Toyota Sprinter having a big rev. Watch what John Smith does this time as he comes up. He indicates again that he wants to come to the pits, so we can expect to see John Smith coming in a little earlier than originally anticipated. I think he was targeting for around about lap 85 when I spoke to him yesterday.
They are really working these little cars.
And their lap times are pretty remarkable. I'll just get the clocks going here. But for those of you that think these small capacity cars are way off the pace, I can correct you, because they're generally on this circuit only around about 1.5 seconds or maybe 2 seconds off the absolute fastest pace of the bigger cars. Only little what John describes as bicycle tyres on the Toyota, very narrow. He's got to be very careful he doesn't overdrive it and cook them up. But he can give it plenty of stick. A pretty little car. Scheduled to drive this car later in the season with Melbourne karting expert Drew Price. And he's working hard trying to close that gap on Mike Quinn. Now comes to the pits in car number 16. Peter McKay is standing by down there at the moment. We'll see what sort of a stop this is going to be for Smithy. Tony Niavani.
I noticed them yesterday practicing tyre stops in the pit lane, Neil, so we'll see how right they got the exercise.
While we're watching this, I can tell you there is a battle redeveloping on the racetrack for second spot between Tony Longhurst and Glenn Seaton. It's a little way off yet, but Seaton is closing the gap on Longhurst at the rate of about 1 second a lap, and is 13 seconds behind him at the moment. So we'll keep an eye on that. Seaton is not finished with yet.
Tony Niavani, team manager for the Toyota team, at the head of the car there, and Smithy rejoins the race. Actually, he's come in on lap 75, which is exactly what he told me yesterday. So, in fact, it was scheduled. He's probably just at the end of his tyre life.
I would imagine so.
Race leader Jim Richards, car 1 for the JPS team. The interesting thing about this car is that they didn't anticipate bringing it in until lap 100, which was quite surprising. It was the furthest into the race that anybody told me they were going to make their stop.
Well, it won't have any, it's very economical on fuel, and they must be very happy with the tyre performance. So, if that's the case, leave it out there. The car still looks so stable that he really doesn't look like he's trying, which he obviously is.
Isn't he always?
That's right.
They get around about 1.1 litres per lap fuel consumption out of this car, and about 0.09 of a litre for the Longhurst car, so that's pretty economical.
Could you tell me what that is in miles per gallon?
Don't start all that.
You like that too, are you?
I'm only just coming to terms with it.
I haven't worked out kilometres yet, so litres is...
Just put your suit on, put the helmet on and get in and drive out, and we'll look after the rest. Jim Richards still the race leader of the Better Breaks 300, quite comfortably by a lap from his teammate Tony Longhurst, and he's now going through some of the midfield drivers at the moment. Let's have a look at the Castrol scoreboard. Compliments of digital. Richards leads from Longhurst, and in third placing young Glenn Seaton in the Skyline. Back at at Amaroo Park, looking at car number 60, John Giddings in the new Nissan Gazelle, and he now leads the Class A cars in this lovely prepared little motor car. Michael Quinn and John Smith having been into the pits in the Toyota Sprinters, and he's up to 8th outright on the road. Great performance from him.
An interesting thing about this little car, Neil, it's got the same engine as the Skyline has, but it hasn't got a turbo.
That's
so
right.
It's a 2-litre, 4-valve per-cylinder twin overhead camshaft. It's quite a high-tech little car, and it was built by the Works Nissan team. So it should, with some more development, be a very competitive little Class A car.
Yes, Glenn Seaton did some test driving at Winton at the touring car round down there, and since then John drove it in the Amaroo Park round of the Touring Car Championship, but things were so frantic at the head of the field we didn't get a chance to look at it. But it's a lovely presented car, well built, as are all the cars that Fred Gibson and the rest of the boys put together. But it does carry that FJ20 engine, which is exactly the same as the turbo engines they use in the Skylines. Produces around about 200 brake horsepower, so it's got just a little bit more grunt than the Toyota.
It's quite a bit heavier, though. They cannot get it down to the class weight limit. 970
kilograms at the moment, and the class minimum is 880, whereas the Toyota is very much closer to its weight limitations. They had some problems getting diff ratios right for the car at the Amaroo Park round of the Touring Car Championship, but I think they're doing a pretty fine job in their second outing. They were only around about 100 metres behind Mike Quinn and John Smith in that dice before the other two Toyota drivers went to the pits.
Well, it's good to have another brand other than Toyota in the small car class.
Exactly.
All we need is a couple of Volkswagens and VW Golfs and some Mazdas and things now, and it'll be a good little class.
Giddings qualified 15th on the grid yesterday, time of 56.78. And that was only 1 second slower than John Smith, who qualified in a 55.4. And you'll remember before that I said that these Class A cars aren't miles an hour slower than the big cars like everybody imagines. We're only talking 1.2, 1.3 seconds behind the big cars, the fast cars.
Particularly around this circuit, because it's quite a flowy circuit. They can get them rolling and keep them rolling. Where on the big fast open circuits such as Sandown or Bathurst, they'll be much further than 1.5 seconds behind.
Right, well, as they head off into the sunset, let's pick up on Tony Longhurst, who's going to have his hands full in a minute, because Glenn Seaton is catching him at a rate of knots, about 1.5 seconds or a bit more per lap, and he's about 6 seconds behind at the moment. So in the next lap or two, unless Longhurst comes in and pits anyway, which he's going to have to do shortly, he's going to have to stave off a big challenge for second spot from Glenn Seaton in the Nissan.
Well, Longhurst was talking about around about a lap 80 pit stop.
Well, it's about...
well, we're on 83.
83.
For Jim Richards. I guess it's 82 for Tony Longhurst. They were expecting to put in maybe 1 churn of fuel, 40 litres of gas, and 4 tyres. And Frank was saying to me this morning they expected to do that in 16 seconds, which would be a pretty good stop.
That's the Mulver Hill Commodore, just went to the pits there off the left of screen. This is the Bergman Commodore, just ahead of Tony Longhurst. And this car is in 4th position, so Longhurst's about to put a lap on that car. I'm getting confused here. Richards leads, a lap up on Longhurst and Seaton, and it's shortly going to be a further lap to car 53, the Bergman Commodore. Tony Longhurst, of course, a man with a big future, has already established himself pretty well against the top drivers in the country. 28 years of age, from Queensland, well entrenched now with the BMW team, and you can see a pretty substantial list of credits there, including the Castrol 500 with Jim Richards at Sandown, and 4th in this year's Australian Touring Car Championship.
And he remains the 3rd fastest man in the world on water skis at 201 kilometres an hour when he was only 20 years of age.
If you think I'm trying that at Lakeside, you've got another thing coming.
You'd look good doing the opener on a ski at 200 k's, Wilco. He was the fastest ever rookie at Bathurst in 1984 with Jim Richards when he clocked a time at 2:21. And his first big touring car race was back here at Amaroo Park in 1983 when he teamed with Mike Bergman in the CRC 300, as it was known then, to finish 7th in the Camaro. We spoke before about his performances in the Alpha Suds, drives that Alan Grice will remember for a long while.
We just caught a glimpse there as the cars went through. There's Bergman, and there's Seaton, just flashed across the bottom corner of the screen, so he's not far astern of Longhurst now.
All those two started out their touring car careers, or certainly Longhurst, only 3 years ago together, and Tony's kicked on from there. And I thought he was feinting the move to go to the pits then. I was about to say he's about to dive in.
Well, get a pretty good idea. There's the gap. Yeah, get a pretty good idea as they come up the hill this time.
He signalled that time to the pits, so I would expect it to be fairly soon.
Oh, gee, that sun is vicious over the top of the hill too.
Have you ever had to deal with that, John, late in the afternoon?
Well, the last couple of meetings we did up here, the Valvoline Volvo team manager, John Shepherd, foresaw the problem, which is lucky for me, and put an extra couple of strips of tape across the top of the screen, so it was not a problem at all. But it's experience like that money can't buy, and I certainly wouldn't have thought of it.
Well, just as a matter of interest, as we come around on this next lap, we might take a look at the view as they come over the hill from race cam. You'll get an idea of exactly the way it appears to Tony Longhurst. The Nissan closing right up as they come down to the lake corner.
Yeah, so this is going to be very interesting. And Longhurst puts his hand up and decides to go to the pits. We take the shot from race cam, gives you the feeling the driver gets. It's a busy pit lane, and now Glenn Seaton has gone up into second position, remembering that he's already made his stop.
The fact that you have a problem early in the race, and it's very easy to get disillusioned, which he hasn't, and he's doing a mighty job.
Talk about mighty jobs. This pit stop looks like one too.
They're a very well-drilled team, aren't they?
Well, with Frank Gardner standing over you, wouldn't you be?
That's right.
16 seconds was their target time. The refuelers are ready. 4 tyres have gone on. That was a pretty sharp stop. And Glenn Seaton is heading down towards the stop corner, so they've only lost around about 3/4 of a lap. It's probably not even quite that, more like half a lap.
Well, you lose most of your time coming in and going out of the pits, as you've seen in the Formula 1 races.
Exactly. And in the background there, we saw Murray Carter pitting in car number 36. Glenn Seaton goes through in second placing, so it is a great drive from him. There's the back view of Fred Gibson, watching his driver disappear, and he's keeping a watchful eye on one of the cars that he built. Bill O'Brien gets in from Canberra. Murray Carter gets out, probably the oldest man in the race, a veteran of Australian touring car driving. Countless appearances at the James Hardy 1000 and its forerunners. You notice that the
not a good stop, though, is it?
No, it's not a good stop. You notice that the pit crews these days, John, all wearing their flame-resistant gear, balaclavas, teensy bit of fuel spillage, but that job's done. So we go back to Glenn Seaton, who maintains his second position as he goes to the stop corner.
John Bow, don't you reckon it'd be better for all concerned, the drivers and the pit crews, if they scheduled pit stops in the rounds of the Touring Car Championship through the year? Well, in terms of gearing up for these major long-distance races?
I don't think it'd be a bad thing, really, if say, they ran a touring car race for 75 or 80 minutes with a compulsory stop.
Yeah.
I think it'd be more interesting, probably, for the spectators as well.
Oh, well, you get here today, first round of the Endurance Championship, and all of a sudden you've got guys who've got to come out and do a task they haven't had to do since Bathurst last year, or since Bathurst last year.
That's true, but if you're well prepared, you really should be practicing those sort of things back in the workshop. The problem a lot of the teams have, of course, is being undercapitalised, and you can't always do that sort of thing, but you'll notice all the professional teams, the BMW and the Nissan and the Alpha team, they'll all make fairly slick pit stops, I'd say.
Flame as you get the overrun, the overlap from the turbo skyline. Glenn Seaton coming to the right-hander. This car makes a glorious sound. It's a real torquey, gutsy little engine.
A glorious sound for a turbo.
Yeah, because your thing sounds pretty crooked, you don't mind me saying.
No.
Well, the leader on the Castrol scoreboard, compliments of Digital. Richards continues to take the front from Seaton, and Colin Bond holding down third now in the Alpha. Welcome back to Amaroo Park. 91 laps gone as we look at Colin Bond in the Better Brakes 300. That leaves 55, 64 laps remaining. And Bondy's doing all right. He was up there and mixing it in the early stages, got shuffled back a bit. He's been in and out of the pits once. I would think he might have another stop to make, though, John Bow.
I think he may do, although yesterday he said he was going to try and get through with only one stop.
Well, if that's the case, he made a very early stop.
I didn't honestly notice.
Yeah, well, he was in and out very quickly, and I just wonder whether he'd have had time.
Well, last year he tried to go through without any stops at all.
Yeah.
So the car's probably capable of doing it on a very low amount of fuel compared to most of the cars.
Well, he's in third position in the race at the moment, behind Richards and Seaton. Longhurst running fourth. Richards has yet to make a pit stop, and we suspect that Seaton will have to make another in the Nissan.
I was talking to Paul Cross from Ignis, Bondi's sponsor, this morning, and they're really looking forward to the new Alpha 75 Turbo, and they're hopeful of getting it here for the James Hardy race, and I think that'll be a very competitive outright car, although it'll probably be a bit new to show up well at Bathurst.
Yeah, so that will potentially put Colin Bond and the Ignis Alpha team back into outright contention. Bondi was originally planning to stop around about lap 75 or 80, but made that early stop, so now we speculate whether or not he may be able to go through without taking another stop. But he started on the front row of the grid alongside Jim Richards, and he made a brilliant start. And earlier on I spoke to Colin Bond about the prospect of potentially having a small car win this race.
It's a long race, of course, and I think the littler cars do look after the tyres a bit better than the bigger cars, even though we've got to drive the cars harder. Our biggest problem actually is getting caught behind some of the slower big cars, and they can hold us up sometimes for 10, 20 laps. And in the meantime, you know, the car we're trying to catch is getting away, or the car that we're trying is catching us. So that's our biggest problems, and it's always been the same with a small motor car. But hopefully in the future we'll have something that will actually be able to stay with the bigger cars in a straight line when the 75 gets here, because the turbo was actually homologated, I think, yesterday, and there should be a couple of racing at Spa this weekend. We're interested, obviously, to see how they turn out, but if, you know, we've got high hopes for the car, but I know first time out it's always going to be difficult to do very well. But we've entered one for Bathurst, of course. As long as it gets here, it'll be a front runner, and I'm sure that that's going to be the car to beat next year.
Colin Bond with high hopes for the new Alpha 75 for the James Hardy 1000 this year and next year's Australian Touring Car Championship. Unusual tyre combination on this car today. On the active side of the car, the left-hand side of the car, they're using the harder compound Pirelli D3 radials. On the inside of the car, the closest to camera at the moment, they're using the D5s, which are a softer compound tyre. He's got Peter Fitzgerald standing by in the pit area at the moment, just in case he needs to do a driver change, but didn't really expect to have to put Peter in the car. He did some laps in practice, had a little lose earlier in the week, and still yet to really come to terms with the car. But the intention is to use Fitzgerald later in the season and build up his experience in the car.
Well, Bondi said he was trying to do the whole race, providing his age hadn't caught up with him.
Yes.
He said it with a laugh, though, so I think he'll probably go through to the finish.
2.5 hours and a little more than 2.5 hours of racing anticipated to see the conclusion of this race. It's a long way to go, and I guess it's fair to say that you have to be certainly car race fit, which is its own special kind of fitness in itself. And one man still working pretty hard out there at the moment is Bradley Jones in the Mitsubishi Starion as he comes across the top of the hill, still struggling around out there with a sliding Starion.
Quiet achiever. He's up to 5th place, thank you. Still hasn't made a pit stop. He's just plugging away out there and letting the others undo themselves.
I may have done his tyres a disservice before then, because the car looks the same now, so he's hanging in there.
Something I just noticed then from that shot as they came towards, or as the car came towards Mazda, is a little bit of mist, a little bit of blue mist on the right-hand side of the car. I don't know whether that guard is rubbing on the tyre or whether, in fact, there's another problem.
It doesn't appear to be showing any body damage,
no.
Neil, so it might be...
Did you also notice that? Just a wisp of smoke here and there, and it's not the usual commentators jumping to conclusions routine. It was definitely there.
Maybe a very slight oil work from the...
Ooh, she likes a slide. She likes a slide. Brad said yesterday he was having a bit of trouble coming to terms with being on the left-hand side of the car because it's radically different to the production car that he drives. Different feeling in the car, different points to look at for your apex.
It'll be very difficult because he goes from Group E right-hand drive to Group A left-hand drive, and I've done that, and it's much harder than it looks.
And talking about wisps of smoke, there were a few in the loop just a short time ago for Brian Callahan. The tyres starting to come into play as the race unwinds. The big slide.
Well, John Giddings, graceful. Oh, how lucky was he to miss that one? Callahan could have, in fact, it's Barry Graham in the car. Could have backed into him at a great rate of knots, but he survives to tell the tale. So we go back to Brad Jones, and again, I see a little bit of that mist. I don't really know what that could be, and I'm not going to speculate.
I would imagine it's probably an oil leak from the gearbox or the diff or something, but it's not very bad.
Yes. that's the point where Brad Jones nailed the fence yesterday.
Through the lake corner, and Jim Richards, by the way, has just got underneath Tony Longhurst. Richards, the race leader, there he is, and about to mount an attack on Colin Bond. So Bond is under siege from all quarters, because no sooner will he see Richards go by than I think Longhurst will probably reel him in. Although this could develop into a real battle between Longhurst and Bondi when Longhurst has another go at him.
Well, Longhurst's on fresh rubber, though, isn't he? And Bondi's not.
Sure.
So I think probably Longhurst would be circulating a fair bit quicker than Colin is at the moment.
Well, Jim's not on fresh rubber, but we understand he's about to be. He's going to pit the race leader. It'll be interesting to see how long it takes them.
Absolutely faultless performance, isn't it, though, from Jim?
Jim's on lap 98 and anticipated coming in around lap 100, so that's all according to plan for the JPS team. And the race that's really on here, I think, is the one between Bond and Longhurst. That'll be the one that focuses most interest in the closing stages of this race. Look at Jim's car now starting to slide once he's got a bit of wear up on those tyres.
Maybe one more lap.
Yep, lap 100 was the anticipated stop, so there's one to go. Here's a shot from race cam, gives you some idea of how glary the sun is up to the top of the Vitchepave Hill. And imagine that at 180, 190 kilometres an hour across the top, and then try and get through that right-hander.
Yeah, it's the readjustment that is the problem, I guess, when you come out of that glare and find somebody spinning in front of you.
Well, you go through a blind spot, and then all of a sudden you're in the clear again. It's a bit difficult.
Not only that, the loop at the very best of times is always very shadowy, so your eyes have to react very quickly.
The whole circuit's quite shadowy, really.
Is one of the real traps on this circuit. Not that by any stretch of the imagination I've got all the answers, but I know a couple of times that I've been around, as they come down here underneath these trees, particularly in winter, this can be very frosty and wet on the outside of the circuit. We've seen plenty of guys turn left instead of right.
Let's see if Jim takes the left-hand turn into the pit lane here. He does.
There he goes.
So race leader goes in. He'll be in and out without losing any really ground at all, I think.
Peter McKay's also down there, so we'll have a good look at this stop and check the length as he stops now.
See Russell Stuckey from Dunlop lurking in the background to see how the Pirelli tyres are going.
Got to keep an eye on the competition,
that's for sure.
Jim, you'll notice foot on the brake, keeps the engine running, just keeps it idling nicely. Hammerjack's working. Crew signal they're ready when they raise their hands. It's a pretty clean looking stop. And Richards away in 23.9 seconds.
That's a good stop.
And he just cruises out quite comfortably. He knows he's in good shape as we look at Colin Bond. And I believe at this stage that Peter McKay is down there in the pits, and very shortly we might go down to him and get a little bit of a story from him on exactly how things are working out of the JPS team with Frank Gardner and the boys. But look at Bondi battling here with John Smith. Rounds him up as he should do in a 2.5-litre V6 Alpha versus the 1.6-litre 4-cylinder Toyota Corolla.
Bondi's managed to drop off Tony Longhurst a bit here.
He's made me look a bit silly in what I said before, hasn't he?
No, I didn't mean to say he's made you look silly, but
it's okay.
But he's doing a job of it. But Peter McKay now is ready in the pits. Let's find out what the story is.
Frank Gardner's just checking the tyres that came off the leader's car. Happy with what you saw there, Frank?
Well, it's about what I expected for 100 laps. You know, you can't go motoring under those sorts of conditions and have plenty of rubber back.
So what's the plot now?
Plot now is not to come in again and hopefully see the checkered flag in the right place, although we're still getting a hard time with the Nissan. It's certainly hovering out there, and I don't know what fuel stops or pit stop it has to do.
With Tony hanging in there in second, you're looking at the double whammy.
Be nice, you never look at anything in this business until you see the checkered flag.
Okay, back to you, Neil.
Thank you, Peter McKay, with the usually talkative Frank Gardner. Getting down towards the left-hander at Honda Corner. And Jim Richards really now only has to circulate. He was fairly casual as he left the pit lane.
He wouldn't. The car's quite high geared, and it hasn't got a lot of torque, so he wouldn't drop the clutch and do a Formula One type start in case he did some damage to the clutch. So it's all part of keeping the car going and not putting any extra strain on it than is absolutely necessary.
Other thing that he's running this weekend, John, are those ventilators on the front wheels to try and extract some cool air through the middle of the wheel and therefore pull some cold air past the brakes and cool it off.
Well, you'll probably find most cars use those in the long distance races, Neil, because the brake temperature can be a bit of a problem if you're out there for 3 hours.
You were using them, I think, in the last round of the Touring Car Championship on the
We
Bond.
were, yes. We used them at Calder and they did their job extra well, and we tried them at Amaroo Park just to get some figures on the temperatures.
On the Castrol scoreboard, courtesy of Digital, you can see that Jim Richards continues to lead the race from Glen Seaton. Colin Bond third in the Better Brakes 300. Back to some exciting stuff here between Colin Bond and Tony Longhurst in the Better Brakes 300 at Amaroo Park. It's real wheels up Mother Brown.
Lap 106 for race leader Jimmy Richards. Behind him still Glen Seaton, but this battle here for third and fourth is a Butler, and Tony Longhurst on a newer set of tyres in hot pursuit of Colin Bond, still circulating out there, although he made that early stop that Gary spoke of. Question is whether or not Bondy can maintain this kind of pace through to the end now and not have to come in for more fuel and rubber. I think strategically Longhurst a little bit better placed in the race at the moment, John, with a fresher set of tyres.
I would think so, Neil. He's vindicated me somewhat now by catching up to Bondy, so I'm pleased. not really, because I'd like to see Bondy do well, but Longhurst's tyres would be in very good shape. He runs on Pirelli D3s, and they're a fairly bulletproof sort of tyre.
Interesting thing about the Alfa Romeo this weekend is that they're running their, what they call their good engine, not the old nail. They're now getting something like 290 brake horsepower out of it. This time last year, when we were looking in the Endurance Championship, it had about 245. But Colin was telling us yesterday, you may recall, that it develops more and more horsepower the more you rev it. Its maximum horsepower of 290 is up around 8.9, but when they use 8.9 all the time, there's a danger of breaking big end bolts. So more conservatively using about 8,000 RPM and about 265 odd brake horsepower.
You must remember with Group A cars, they have to use the standard components. So it has a standard crankshaft and a standard set of conrods. They're allowed to use special pistons, which they do. But 9,000 revs for a standard crankshaft and conrods is a fair bit.
Yeah.
But I think it does show an advantage slightly in power over Longhurst BMW, but it's not very much.
Well, prior to using their slightly higher lift camshafts that they're using now, he was comfortably getting away with about 7.5 or 8. So chasing that extra horsepower has on a couple of occasions cost him the race. So it's a bit of a problem for Bondy. He knows that if he drives it harder, the thing will go quicker, but will it last?
He's had such experience in these sort of races, though. He keeps his cool, and he's not likely to throw it away, and he drives flat out from the time the flag drops to the time he sees the checkered flag.
44 years of age, he's one of the veterans. First one, James Harney.
He doesn't seem 44, though, does he? He does. He seems 24.
Enjoys his motor racing 110%.
He loves it.
And he's had a few good spars with this fellow this year, right on that particular spot on the circuit as well.
Well, the only time I've ever seen him anything like wild or angry was the last meeting when Longhurst gave him a bit of a clip.
Yeah, the nostrils were flaring at the end of the day.
I've never ever seen him like that before.
Oh, when they got back here after the race, I thought I was going to have to abandon the interviews and be the referee. But after a couple of minutes, the initial heat of the moment passed, and they get on pretty well.
He was
together.
laughing like he normally does.
Like a drone.
Yeah.
Oh, dear me. But he is a terrific bloke, Colin Bond, and he's made a great contribution to motorsport in Australia over the years.
He's been in the sport for a long time. Have a look at Colin Bond's statistical information. He's 44 years of age, as I said, lives in Sydney's Hunters Hill district. Won the James Hardy back in '69, second in '76, '7 and '80, three times Australian Rally Champion, '71, '2 and '74. And when driving for the Holden dealer team was the Touring Car Champion back in '75. He's a fellow that probably could have gone on to a very big rally career had he wanted to pursue it. Time and again when racing the internationals when they either came to Australia or perhaps New Zealand for things like the Southern Cross or Castrol International Rallies, were trying to tempt him overseas.
Well, rally drivers seem to make quite good circuit drivers, don't they? Because George Fury started his motorsport career in rallies and was very successful, and you couldn't say he's not successful as a circuit racer.
No, he's doing very well.
Let's go to the pits with Peter McKay.
Thanks, Gary. Well, Barry Jones, the winner of this race back in 1982, is running very well this year. Has a Commodore up to fifth spot, I believe.
Well,
the plan was to be the first Commodore home. That plan's running to schedule. I can only hope that Tony can keep it running to the end. This being the shortest track in Australia, it's very difficult for a Commodore to get up trumps on the BMWs and the Nissan, but we're holding our own fairly well at this stage.
Generally, a Commodore is considered very tyre sensitive around this circuit, but you managed to get 80 laps out of the tyres, and just as importantly, 80 laps out of fuel.
Well, we took a punt. In practice, we ran Pirellis. We've been running Pirellis all the whole meeting. The idea was to qualify on our race tyres. We knew what we could do. We knew we could go halfway on the tyres, and we knew we could go halfway on fuel, and we hoped everybody else would make a run for it at the start. But as it turned out, we picked up 4 places on the first lap anyway. So I think our Pirellis have done a fairly good job.
OK, so the plan now is for Tony to stay out there and run till the end.
That's the plan.
OK, there you have it. Barry Jones, winner of this race in '82, first Commodore home at the James Hardy 1000 last year, and the first Commodore on the track today.
Thank you, Peter McKay, with Barry Jones in pit lane. And there's Tony Mulvihill in the hot orange and white Commodore coming up behind David Ratcliffe in the Toyota Sprinter. We just had some information through into our commentary point as well that told us that Glenn Seaton so far has been the fastest man on the circuit. A stunning time, John Bowe, 52.82 seconds.
Well, Neil, last time we were up here with a Valvoline Volvo, I set a new touring car lap record of 53.1 with Glenn Seaton behind me pushing me, and I think it's a bit unfair of him not to let me hang on to it for a while.
Right. You didn't get to live in that glory for too long.
One program, that's all.
Mulvihill doing a really fine job here in this Commodore at the moment, proving time and again that consistency and staying out of all the short-term sparring matches is probably worthwhile in these kinds of races. And if they can set up a program like this which launches them into the James Hardy 1000, then it's highly likely they'll be in the top 10 again in a month or so's time. Barry Jones is an excellent driver, as we were talking about earlier on in the telecast. He's come in and handed over to Mulvihill. Last year, late in the season, I saw Barry driving a 300-kilometre production race in Victoria and adapted himself very well even to a standard road car. Technically good driver, and he's given the car to Tony in good shape, obviously still with a good gearbox and good brakes. And John, you've had some co-driver experience on a couple of occasions last year. You partnered Robbie Francevic with the Castrol 500 and James Hardy 1000, and it's a tough task for a co-driver, isn't it? Because often you inherit a pretty ordinary motor car.
Well, you do. As you said, I've only had 2 goes at it, but at Sandown we had a problem which was manifested itself almost as soon as I got in the car. But at Bathurst I got in the car and the brakes were a bit second-hand, only because they glazed. Nothing really mechanically wrong with them.
Just explain what that means, Sir John.
Well, they were using very hard pads to try and get through the whole of the James Hardy without having to change pads. And they glazed over, which means they get a bit shiny and lose their retardation. And it really was very difficult to adapt to the car because the brakes were unstable. You put them on and they wouldn't work, and then they'd start locking, etc., etc. So a co-driver's job is more difficult than actually the lead driver's job, I think.
Well, the co-driver in this car at the moment is Brian Thompson. It's car 24, the Gerald K. Thompson Fowler Motorsport entry. There's Peter Fowler in the back left of the car, overseeing operations. And while they're in the pits, race leader Jim Richards continues on his merry way up at the loop. And with a new suit on this weekend as well, I notice. He's looking all spiffed up.
Resplendent in bright yellow.
Yeah. I think that at this stage of the game, the biggest problem that Jim Richards will be facing is just disciplining himself to go on with the job.
Well, yeah, but as we say, he's been able to go on with the job on previous occasions, and as far as the car is concerned, well, I guess Jim would have to agree. It's a case of BMW hitting form just at the right time.
Well, yes, our car has got progressively better as the season's gone by, and of course last year we won the Endurance Series, and hopefully with a bit of luck we can do it again this year. The car always performs really well around Amaroo, and we sort of treat it like a bit like a long sprint race where we go as hard as we possibly can for the whole 155 laps. And the car is capable of doing that. So with that in mind, I think that we should be able to pull it off.
Jim Richards, race leader, And incidentally, Glenn Seaton is having a little bit of strife again, just coming up onto the main straight. So he's had a topsy-turvy race.
He's earned his money, hasn't he? He's been in the pits, out of the pits, broken the lap record.
I think this is precisely what Fred Gibson wanted to do, though. He wanted to give Glenn a task, and the task was to have to cope with everything that goes on in 2.5 hours of touring car racing.
I think they've actually done pretty well to resist the temptation to put George Fury in the car.
That's right,
yeah. Because Glenn will be learning an awful lot from this race, and although he has done endurance races before, he is very young, and there's no substitute for experience at that age.
Well, he's certainly done quite a few touring car races, but in lesser types of cars and smaller class cars. But this last lap through in this particular part of the course, he miscued badly, which is what drew my attention to him originally. Wanted very wide, and I think, if anything, maybe even just kissed the fence a little. But he seems to be circulating okay again now. First started go-kart racing, young Glenn, when only 14 years of age. It's 7 years ago. So it's 1979, so he's been around a long time in the motor racing business.
He's grown up in a motorsport environment as well, hasn't he? So he's had a very good start, and he's going on with it.
Finished 10th in the Touring Car Championship this year. Didn't contest all rounds, of course. Shared the drive with Gary Scott. Coming up on the
problem with those open face helmets is everybody can see how tired you are.
That's right. His tongue is hanging out. It's been a long, hard day's work as he rounds up Brian Boll in the 323 BMW. Let's have a look on the Castrol scoreboard. Compliments of digital, where Jim Richards is leading from Glenn Seaton, and still in third place is Colin Bond in the Alfa Romeo.
At Amaroo Park, we're looking at Smoke and Brad Jones here with 121 laps gone in the Better Breaks 300. The smoke seems to be getting progressively worse, but it's still not bad enough to cause any real problems. Unless, of course, the clerk of the course decides that it's laying out a trail around the track and black flags him. But he's having the ride of his life. He's leaping over the curbs, and he's got a very severe shortage of grip.
Fifth placing on the road at the moment for Brad Jones.
It's a very good effort, really, because they haven't run this car other than at Adelaide at all this year, and the technology goes on and on and on. And if you don't run fairly consistently, you really do fall behind.
That's
so
right.
It's a good effort.
You have to keep a constant program going, and they've been saying all weekend, Brad and team manager John Grant, that they just feel as though they're a week behind in what they should have been for this weekend.
Let's get to the battle for third between Colin Bond and Tony Longhurst, because it's developing into a ripper. There's Bondy in the Alpha that we're looking through the eyes of race cam in Tony Longhurst's number 25 BMW as they pass the pit entry lane. I'm sure Bondy has nightmares about the nose of that black BMW.
It just lurks all the time, doesn't it?
For all our speculation, the word from the pit is that Bond will not be making another stop. So he caught people by surprise with that early stop. Obviously got the tyres he wanted, got enough fuel to take him through to the finish. Here's somebody that is making another stop.
That's Ashby and Steve Reed swapping again. That's their second stop that we've noted. And it looks like it's going to be fairly slow when there's no activity around the car like that. The battle continues between Longhurst and Bond, just as the Callahan-Graham Commodore comes back in. Barry Graham about to get out. Brian Callahan ready to get in. This was a scheduled stop. They anticipated making two.
You'll notice Neil's changed his driving suit because although it looks easy from the outside, you get very hot and very sweaty and feel most uncomfortable after a stint, so he's put another driving suit on to
that's
freshen
right.
up.
Some of the figures that drivers quote about the sort of weight they lose in a race are really quite scary. The fluid loss is quite immense.
6 or 7 pounds is not really unusual. If you're a fairly big person, I usually lose 3 or 4 pounds of weight. I was going to say, you lost 6 or 7, you'd blow away in the wind.
That's right, there'd be nothing left. Plenty of water being tipped on the front of the Commodore to try and keep it cool. Barry Graham, the man with the job at hand. You really earn your quids in this team as a driver and as a pit stop man.
You've got to get out and do your own pit work.
But that's a sensible thing to do because it can boil ultra quick.
It's done a marvellous job. If it's been running at 115 degrees Celsius all the race,
and in sixth position on the racetrack before this stop.
That's right. You would have expected it to die by now, but it's still hanging in there. So
remembering that they rebuilt that engine after Wednesday when they had problems.
Brian Callahan builds the engine as well, so it's a one-man band.
Colin Bond has now rounded up Brad Jones
and is defending himself stoutly against Tony Longhurst. They put a lap on Brad Jones, in fact.
And there go the two Commodores back out of the pit lane. Colin Bond clinging at the moment to his position, although I suppose that's not really a fair description because he's defending quite nicely. It's not so much a case of clinging, but driving quite well, but he can't afford to be balked too many times like that. Not really.
Well, he got a good run, and Tony got a bit of a hold-up, but they seem to be just circulating at the same pace. Neither seems to be able to do anything about the other.
Well, they'd both be driving pretty hard too, knowing these two when they get close together.
They don't know any other way, I don't think.
No. It's just locked into the system, isn't it?
That's right. Programmed.
What they're also fighting for is the Better Breaks Series, the AMSCAR Touring Car Series here at Amaroo Park, because that's a battle that's been raging all year, apart from this first round of the Australian Endurance Championship. Both of their respective sponsors would like to go out with a big result in that local championship.
The Better Breaks Series is a good series because you do, through most of the normal meetings, you do 3 races in a day, which is something you don't normally do.
It certainly sharpens your skills up.
Well, it teaches you how to start the races fast and go on with it, and you do a 5, a 10 and a 20 lapper in a day. It's the biggest problem, though, if you're not used to it, is you get 3 goes of butterflies and nervousness and all that sort of thing that goes...
Yeah, it's sort of triple the pressure, isn't it?
Goes through you before the start of a race.
Now, the situation in that series that we're speaking about sees Longhurst leading with 208 points. He's only 8 clear of Colin Bond, driver in front of him at the moment. Jim Richards has 198 points, and he could potentially get 25 points from today's race. John Bow, there you are, up in black and white in 4th place with 136 points, and that's not a bad effort for an old fellow in a Volvo.
It's not bad for just 2 races, is it, really?
It's not bad at all.
It's a credit to the Volvo more than me.
He's so modest. And then Gary Rogers next in the point score, so you can see why this is so important to these 2 drivers. And look at that sun right in the vision of Tony Longhurst. Doesn't the little 3 Series BMW sound fantastic?
Well, they sound fantastic as a road car too, Neil, as you know, and it's a nice stout little engine. It's really, he's ringing its neck.
Isn't he ever? It's giving it plenty. This is a part of the course that is a lot of fun if you enjoy fast, flat-out driving through that right-hander.
Bondi's holding his own though, isn't he?
Yep. An inside rear wheel of the Alfa Romeo just skips off the deck as he goes through Honda corner. But this car very nicely balanced. Little V6 Alfa with gearbox and diff up the rear, of course. Very even weight distribution. Alfa Romeo pride themselves on their car's balance, its handling traits, even weight distribution.
Well, the weight distribution is almost 50-50, which for a a road-going car is quite exceptional.
And this body shape that's been with Alfa Romeo for so many years has been so successful, and still today is a very successful little racing car, a slippery shape, and it's taken about 12 years to finally date it. So,
well, I find it attractive myself still. So they've got a lot of character, Alphas, haven't they? Just like Bondi.
Yeah, certainly have. Well, these guys are in 3rd and 4th positions on the racetrack, but let's check it from the top on the Castrol scoreboard. Richards continues to lead. Glenn Seaton 3rd, and Colin Bond defending 3rd place. Gentleman Jim has had it pretty much to himself up front in the Better Breaks 300 since the race started 130 laps ago. 25 laps remaining, and he continues to do it well. A lap clear of Glenn Seaton in the Peter Jackson Nissan, holding down 2nd place ahead of Colin Bond and then Tony Longhurst, and then a couple of laps down to Brad Jones in the in car 53, the Starion, followed in turn by the under 2-litre cars, the Toyotas of John Smith and Mike Quinn, doing a mighty job, those fellas. Car 24 going through the blue and white Commodore, followed by 51, the Tony Mulvihill Barry Jones entry, the blue car, Gerald Kay, and all sorts of problems. They've had 2 or 3 spins on the track, and the way they're going to have another one shortly because...
Brian Thompson's driving now, Gary, and he's a veteran of Australian motorsport. I don't think Brian will get into much trouble.
I don't know. He's got a few tyre problems out there, I think.
Car really gets a pretty bad lean up, doesn't it?
It does. Looks like a motorbike.
Yeah. They need to have a close look at shockers and springs and sway bars on that car. And the Ashby Commodore, I think that is, back into the pits.
Sure is. Everybody's got the overheating problem.
Water problems, and which is what Peter Brock suffered with at Spa, isn't it?
Yes.
Blown head gasket.
Blown head gasket.
Oh, on. John Smith, as I mentioned a moment ago, is leading the under 2 litre category. There he is, just ahead of Mike Quinn. The battle between these two has been ongoing from the minute the flag dropped at the start of the race. Smithy's had a small misadventure just about that spot, but has recovered well from that, regained the lead in the category from Mike Quinn.
He wouldn't have worked this hard for a long time, would he?
No, well, he's had it so easy for the last few years, really, which is not, he doesn't like. No, and he'd rather race. He's a down-and-out racer, so he'd be having a ball. He'd be realising what it's all about again.
So as we watch John Smith continue to try and fend off Mike Quinn, I believe that Peter McKay is doing some work for us again down in the pits. So, Peter, it's all yours.
Thanks, Neil. Trevor Ashby, we've had a few cars, particularly Commodores, come into the pits today with overheating problems. Yours looks to be another one.
That is the problem at this stage, yes.
So what are the crew up to? They're just trying to cool the engine down? You haven't done a head gasket as far as you know?
Not sure. We think it's just overheated, and I don't want to take it any further.
Pretty wise. I believe this is the first touring car effort for you guys?
That's right. We actually picked this car up on Wednesday last, and the first time we sat into the car was on Friday, and it was just a bed racing. That's all we did.
So how are you enjoying it apart from this little problem?
It's certainly different, but we are enjoying it, yes, very much so.
Do we see you at Bathurst?
Oh, no, certainly.
Yeah, great.
Thank you, Peter McKay, talking with drivers of Trevor Ashby and Steve Reed. There's Mike Quinn, car 13, behind John Smith, and really driving the pants off this little Toyota Sprinter, normally driven by Bob Holden.
He's got great car control, hasn't he? He slides it around but never looks out of control.
The owner of this car this weekend, Bob Holden, is away overseas at Belgium with Peter Brock and Alan Grice and John Harvey and Neil Lowe and all the rest of the boys. He's having a run in a private Toyota over there. So while the boss is away, Mike will play, and he's doing quite nicely at the moment.
It's a credit to Bob Holden's preparation, isn't it? Because he's competing against a full factory team in John Smith's Corolla, yes, and more than holding his own.
Yes, and I think it's also a credit to Mike's driving, because he doesn't do that much anymore. He concentrates most of the time with his business Formula Ford race hire, and he prepares Warwick Brooklands Triple MFM Ford and Seaton in the pits.
We're in trouble.
Well, that answers a few of the questions about the reliability of the Nissan for the endurance races. Yeah, Andrew Bartley, one of the chief mechanics at the back of the car, and Seaton now.
Very disappointing after such a great effort by Glenn, but this is, I suppose, what they want to learn.
Yeah, exactly. They should do it now, because come Sandown and Bathurst, they will not want these sorts of problems.
Well, encouraging words from Fred Gibson. Freddie doesn't look that unhappy about it, really, does he? Commiserations from George Fury.
He knows the sort of things that a driver feels at this moment, and one of them is thirst, so he's quick with a drink.
Yeah. All part of the exercise, I think, that designed to take the pressure off Seaton. I mean, they're not going to bake him, because he has, in fact, done a fantastic job.
That's right, he has. He's aged a couple of years by the look of it.
There's the leader, Jim Richards, and this does put him way out in front on his own. A lap and a half up on Colin Bond and the BMW teammate Tony Longhurst, and
this will give all the privateer BMW owners some hope, won't it? Because they've been getting their tails down a bit over the last 6 or 7 months in the Touring Car Championship.
Sure will, and we might even see Frank Gardner crack it for a smile, because obviously the longer they go, the better the BMWs like it.
Well, in the past, it has been the case. Yeah, we've done jolly well in long-distance races. Got a couple of fit drivers, and that's half the answer, but having to try and dine out on last year's record is certainly not the case this year. They've just walked away from us in the sprint races, although we did inherit one. But in the main, the long-distance races are our cup of tea, and has been the case overseas for BMW. So we can only hope that the black and gold will get up in the long-distance races. But I think we might be not too far away at the end of the day.
Not too far away. First and third on the track at the moment, and BMW certainly are looking good. Bondi's the only fly in the BMW Quinella at the moment. Let's get back to Peter McKay in the pits with Fred Gibson.
Thanks, Gary. Well, Fred Gibson, the first real test for the Skyline this season, not the result you really wanted.
Well, Peter, I think it's done a turbo in, so there's reasons for it. We've had a few troubles this weekend getting here and getting the car sort of to the specifications required for it. So there are reasons for the problem, more than likely. It's probably my fault. So, but the first time the car's done a long race, and I think only for the tyre problem, so it's gone quite well. Glenn said the car's, you know, nothing wrong with the car. So that's the main thing, is getting some miles in the car. It's the first long race we've been in with it.
You've learned some lessons on tyre wear and on tyres. What about the driving? Young Glenn hasn't really had a lot of time in the car, and I guess this exercise today was partly for him.
Well, this test was for him, really, Peter. It was for him to get some miles before the long endurance race like Sandown and Bathurst. And the whole thing is like he's done a good effort today. He's tired, and why shouldn't he be? He's driven pretty hard all day because the instructions were to drive the car as fast as to go, and regardless of what happened, and that's what we've been doing all day. So the thing is, at the finish today now, we can analyse and just see what's gone wrong.
Thanks, Fred Gibson.
And thank you, Peter McKay, as we go back to this great scrap between Tony Longhurst and Colin Bond.
They're in second and third positions on the racetrack and are a lap and a half down on Jim Richards at this stage of the race.
And notice Longhurst has his hand out the window. He's probably just trying to cool himself off. He'd be very hot in this car at the moment, and it's hard work as he closes up onto the back of Colin Bond.
I suspect, and I may not be 100% right, but I suspect that he could probably lap faster than Colin, but it is the hardest racetrack in Australia to pass on, and Bondi doesn't give him any opportunities, really.
Why should he? He's an old hand, Colin Bond, as we mentioned, and all the battles that he's had with up-and-comer Tony Longhurst. I say up-and-comer, Tony's 28, and he's been around a few years now, long enough to learn all the tricks, that's for sure. And so the pair of them really do put on a great show whenever they come head-to-head on the racetrack. Whether they're running at the front, midfield, well, they're never running at the rear. And they really are putting on a great show. The way things stack up here, though, with a 1, 2, 3 on the racetrack at the moment, courtesy of the Castrol scoreboard, it shows Jim Richards is leading after 140 laps from Colin Bond and Tony Longhurst. About 12 laps remaining in the Better Breaks 300, and the survivors are getting down to the knockdown, drag-out stage now. And this has been one of the features of the event. Colin Bond versus Tony Longhurst in the battle for second and third positions. Jim Richards continues to lead these two by a lap and a half. A very comfortable break for him as the laps unwind, and he seems certain to take the checkered flag, I would say, unless something goes amiss. Hello, there's the Bond Corporation airship parading over Sydney, and of course it will be acting as a camera platform for coverage of the America's Cup races in Fremantle in the new year. And of course 7 will be bringing you the absolute best, and that will form part of our coverage.
That time through, Tony Longhurst getting very sideways onto the short straight before going down the pit straight. He can't afford now to overdrive it too much, because that'll be the sort of break that Colin Bond needs. He has to tag him all the way, and then in the last 5 laps go for broke, John Bower.
I think so, Neil. Bondi's getting through the traffic very well, putting cars between him and Tony, and that's the sort of thing that will give him the little cushion he needs, although Longhurst right up on him again. So
Mike Quinn still chasing.
Anything could happen in this dice.
Still chasing John Smith, and you are right, anything could happen. And as I've mentioned a couple of times when we were here last meeting, talking about these two cars and how close they were, it was about 1/100th of a second later when they nailed one another quite nicely. Frank Gardner concentrating quite intensely on the action. He knows that Jim is pretty home and clean. In fact, not too far behind Longhurst at the moment is Jimmy Richards. There's the rest of the JPS crew. Their job is done for the day. They just have to cross their fingers and anything else they can now with, let me see, 10 laps to go.
Tell you what, there's a bank of cloud coming in from the west. It's got dark here all of a sudden.
The track would be getting very slippery now with the oil and the coolant from some of the overheating Commodores, and of course the rubber that goes down.
The disappearance of the sunlight, if anything, is probably going to help the drivers. It'll be a relief to go to the top of the hill and not have the sun in your eyes.
Jim Richards continuing to lead the race from this pair. Colin Bond in second. There's Tony Longhurst in third place, desperately trying to get by Bond and set up a BMW Quinella finish. fourth spot on the racetrack is still being held by car 53, Brad Jones and the Mitsubishi Starion. And then John Smith is in 5th place and leading the under 2 litre category from Mike Quinn, who is in 6th place outright. And then I think Brian Callahan and Tony Mulvihill in the Commodores would be next up. That's the way they stand, 1 through to about 9.
Yes, and Murray Carter in there as well, somewhere in the top 10, Gary, to around about 9th or 10th. So an interesting situation. These little under 2 litre cars holding on quite nicely.
Quite an effort from John Smith to be 5th place.
Yep.
He finished this race last year in 6th place, so he's one up on that.
He's actually holding Colin Bond and Tony Longhurst out quite well. They've been chasing him for that last 3 or 4 laps, and only now does Colin Bond get the opportunity to go through on the inside. Might take David Radcliffe as well. John decides to go with him.
This is how Bondy uses the traffic so well.
And that just comes through experience, and he's got plenty of it.
We'll be keeping a close eye on this pair as the final laps unwind here in the Better Breaks 300 at Amaroo Park. Jim Richards continues to lead. On the Castrol scoreboard, as you can see, Colin Bond in 2nd spot. Tony Longhurst still holding down 3rd. Back at Amaroo Park, 6 laps remaining in the Better Breaks 300 first round of the Australian Endurance Car Championship, and the top 3 cars in the race are on our screen at the moment. Jim Richards takes pride of place as he slips underneath Colin Bond going through the late corner. And the word is that Colin Bond may have spent a little more time in the pits when he took on that early stop for tyres and fuel than most of us anticipated. And apparently, the claim is that Tony Longhurst is, in fact, ahead of him. Almost by a full lap.
The board they just held up to Colin Bond then said P3, which indicates he's in position 3, so the Alpha team agree with that. So that is something that's unfolded towards the closing stages of the race and must have spent more time in there than we ever thought.
Yeah, so it is going to be a BMW Quinella finish.
Yeah. Jim Richards on lap 150, 5 to go. So Tony Longhurst, if anything, just unnerving Colin Bond a little, just nagging him, I guess, John, filling his mirrors.
I thought it was unusual for Tony not to be attacking more, really. He seemed to be just sitting back there and following him round, and which is most unlike Tony, so that's the explanation.
It also means that if they finish the way they are, then Tony Longhurst will become the Better Breaks AMSCAR Touring Car Champion for the year.
It's a lap scorer's nightmare, this race. A lap scorer's nightmare, this race, isn't it?
I'm glad I'm not doing it.
But I guess you wish you were out there in a car.
Well, I do now that it's nearly over.
Yeah, the last 5 laps would be quite nice, wouldn't they?
Jim's made it look pretty easy, hasn't he? Sails serenely onwards.
It adds more points to the board. He's already illustrious endurance championship history.
Yes, well, nobody's been able to live with him out there today after that hectic scramble on the first lap. Just a little slow off the start. Jim McLeod drove through in the Commodore, but didn't survive more than a couple of laps. And it wasn't long before Richards slipped through to assume the lead in the race and has never, ever looked back. The Peter Jackson Nissan entry with Glenn Seaton at the wheel, in and out of the pits a couple of times, had to claw his way back into 2nd spot on 3 occasions. And finally, on lap 136, had to pack it up and put it away for the day.
Well, they have the consolation of a new lap record anyway, which is a marvellous time of 52.8 seconds. To give an indication of how far these cars have progressed during the course of the year, the first round of the Australian Touring Car Championship at Amaroo, the qualifying time was 54.1 seconds on qualifying tyres. So Glenn said a 52.8 seconds on race tyres.
Race conditions, yeah, that is a fantastic effort.
I've just been doing some sums, and the point score should look like this. Unofficially, I'll get myself out from under in case I've made a mistake. Tony Longhurst will win the Better Breaks Series with a total of 235. Colin Bond second with 224. There's Frank Gardner and his chief transport driver, Desi. And Jim Richards will finish third with 224, just 1 point down on Colin Bond. So Longhurst, Bond, Richards in the Better Breaks AMSCAR Series for 86. But points on the board for Jim Richards. First blood for the Australian Endurance Championship. And I guess that will now make Frank Gardner and Jim Richards and the rest of the crew quite confident about the potential for another championship of makes for the BMW mark. We go to the second round in this championship in Surfers Paradise in a couple of weeks, then the Castrol 500 in September, backed up then by the James Hardy 1000 at Mount Panorama. The other thing is, John Bow, according to my calculations, you finished 4th in the series, and you've done it quite easily. You haven't even worked up a sweat.
No, not at all. This is harder than driving, though. At least I know what I'm doing when I'm driving. Up to a point, anyway.
And you don't have 2 passengers either side of you.
No, that's right. Digging me in the ribs.
Jim Richards now in the rundown for the Better Breaks 300 for 1986. Up behind the sole remaining Nissan Skyline Turbo, being shared today by Murray Carter and Bill O'Brien.
Let's see if I've got this worked out right. A lap and a half to go.
Well, I wasn't going to say it. I just said he was winding down. I can have an each-way bet when the checkered flag comes out.
Well, you wouldn't get on here at an each-way price. It'll be odds on because the last lap board is out for Richards. More than a full lap clear of teammate Tony Longhurst. And Colin Bond in 3rd place.
Having watched all this now, I'm getting itchy feet to get back in the Volvo again to Sandown.
And that is the next outing for the Valvoline Volvo team?
That's right. John Shepherd and the boys are frantically building a new car for me, which is fantastic, and I'm looking forward to it. And Sandown and Bathurst, of course, are the big events that we really want to do well at.
Half a lap to go now for Jim Richards in the Better Breaks 300 of 1986. We'll look forward to seeing you in that Volvo shortly, John, but at the moment it's BMW glory for Richards and the JPS team as he comes down to the right-hander at the stop corner for the last time. A comfortable victory over the rest of the field. His teammate Tony Longhurst will finish 2nd. Colin Bond will finish 3rd out of the last turn. And Jimmy Richards, the 1985 Australian Touring Car Champion, takes the checkered flag and the Better Breaks 300 in a fine performance. Tony Longhurst will finish 2nd in car number 25, the 325 BMW, and Colin Bond in car number 75, the Alfa Romeo GTV6, will finish in 3rd placing. Behind him, Brad Jones. Let's go to the Castrol scoreboard and look at the top 3 with Richards followed by Longhurst and in 3rd placing Bond.
Well, it's all happening here at Amaroo Park as we're getting set for the presentation following the conclusion of the Better Breaks 300. And Jim Richards, worthy champion, defending the title that he won in this race last year. Quinella finished for BMW with Tony Longhurst finishing in 2nd place. And, of course, Colin Bond 3rd. We'll be back for the presentation in a moment, but this is just the first stop on a long road to Mount Panorama.
Australia's great mountain race has undergone many changes over the past 2 decades, but none greater than last year's 1,000-kilometre edition. Gone were the local Commodore and Ford hot rods, Nissan's turbocharged Silent Screamer was missing, as was Mazda's controversial rotary Roadrunner. Local motorsports followers have been asked to change their diet early in the year with the introduction of the new International Group A touring car class. What the fans got as an alternative was this all-conquering package. A black BMW 635 with Jim Richards at the wheel, and this Volvo 240 Turbo with Robbie Francevic in charge. The change in category, we were told, was an investment in the future, but not everybody was convinced.
From the day I started racing, been against anything that smacked of homologation. To me, it's a farce. It's a total waste of time, and more to the point, it's a waste of manufacturers' time, money, and more to the point, money and energies that could be very well better spent on racing teams.
After some lean years against the Group C Tourers, BMW certainly appeared to have the new class wired from the start. The combination of Richards, astute team manager Frank Gardner, and the JPS BMW clean house. 7 wins from 10 starts in the Australian Touring Car Championship, besides wrapping up both the endurance title and the Better Breaks tournament at Sydney's Amaroo Park. Still, the hint of a comeback by a Commodore supercar could always produce a good knee-jerk reaction from JPS team chief Frank Gardner.
The beauty of Group A is it's a rule book written by professionals for professionals. If you make it in numbers, you can race it, and providing you have part numbers. And as all they're really saying with the Holden dealer team is you cannot jack up the windscreen wiper and put a brand new racing car under it. You must make it to race it.
By the time the James Hardy 1000 came around, BMW was equipped with some heavy artillery. The JPS team had picked up George Fury to back Richards in the Mountain Classic, while Greg Siddle signed European stars Johnny Cicotto and Roberto Ravaglia, whose Bob James sponsored 635. However, the numbers game was to be owned by European champ Tom Walkinshaw, who entered 3 JRA XJS Jaguars in the field. He had an affection for the Mount Panorama circuit, despite the unfortunate start line crunch there the previous year.
I like road circuits like the Nürburgring and Brno and the old Spa circuit. And for me, Bathurst was exactly like those circuits. You know, it's really, a lot of people talk about it being dangerous and it's bumpy and all the rest of it, but you know, you knew that before we went there, and it's that type of circuit, so you make up your mind whether you want to race on that type of circuit or not. And if you've decided you're going to race, then you should just go for it the same as everywhere else. And I find it was a really challenging place, and the drivers, the local drivers, were everybody as good as we expected. We knew, obviously, we knew the top names and we knew how good they were, but you know, there was a lot of guys down there who could pedal a car pretty quickly, so it was a big challenge.
Walkingshaw's 3-car effort reaped dividends at Bathurst. He snatched pole position on Saturday, while his TWR team looked to have the trifecta sewn up early in the race. Spectators were rewarded with some mountain magic from Peter Brock and the Mobile Commodore. His evolution package for the Aussie V8 wasn't rubber-stamped in time, and while the Holden felt the pinch in the horsepower stakes, Brocky gained 10 out of 10 for the way he charged at the leaders in the final stages. If 85 was a lean season for the locals, then everything the new Group A class promised to deliver in 86 is finally being realised. Commodore is back with a car that has taken Europe by storm this season, thanks largely to Brock, Moffat and Grace. BMW remains a big threat in the endurance races, and Volvo now has a 2-car Valvoline factory team based in Australia. Nissan is also back stronger than ever with its Turbo Skyline rocket ship, a car built and developed in Australia for the global motor racing market. The manufacturer's roll call will be complete in just a matter of months when Ford unveils its Cosworth version of this Turbo Sierra. 2 such units are earmarked for the Dick Johnson team. The fastest and most competitive field in history will tackle this year's James Hardy 1000 at Mount Panorama. A record number of manufacturers will be represented. The 1000k Sprint Classic is guaranteed a record field of internationals, and the Aussies appear to hold the upper hand. The Group A touring car class had its knockers 12 months ago, but the future couldn't be brighter. In 1987, the Tin Tops gained their first world championship. Bathurst is included. You know what? There's a good chance it will come down to a Ford versus Holden battle yet again.
And all the plaudits here at Amaroo Park for BMW and for Jim Richards. Congratulations, Jim.
Thank you, Gary.
Fantastic effort.
Yes. We had a pretty trouble-free run. The car's the best it's ever been, in fact. Boys did a great job, and I'm proud of them. Thanks, fellas. Frank.
It's a long way to think back, 155 laps, but off the start, just a fraction slow. Peter McLeod split you going up the hill, but it didn't take you long to reel them in and take up the running.
No, the clutch slipped a bit off the line, and I wasn't able to get off the way that I would have liked, but no, I managed to sneak past, and that was pretty good for me.
From here on out, strength to strength, I would say, because, I mean, Frank's even smiling.
Well, if he's smiling, we must be looking good.
A great effort, but of course this was also, apart from being the Better Brakes 300 first round of the Endurance Championship, the final round of the Better Brakes Series here at Amaroo Park for the season, and Tony Longhurst is the victor in the series, finishing second in the 300 this afternoon. And Norm Reinhardt from Better Brakes to make the presentation to Tony, and this is well-deserved, huh?
Good. Tony, you've never won a round of the Better Brakes Series, but on your driving performance this year, there's no doubt about it, you'll win some more. On behalf of the Better Brakes Auto Service Centres, congratulations on winning the rounds of the Better Brakes Series. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank Better Brakes for sponsoring the series. It's been a great series all year. There hasn't been any serious accidents. I'd like to... not serious accidents. Got to apologise to Bondi for giving him a whack at the last meeting. No one believes me, not even my wife. And, you know, it's just a great race. I'd like to thank BMW for having me as one of their drivers. The BMWs have performed fantastically this year. We've got a third and a fourth in the Touring Car Series. And finishing 1-2 today just shows what a remarkable job Frank Gardner and the team from JPS BMW do.
Congratulations, Tony Longhurst, winner of the Better Brakes Series and second place in the Better Brakes 300 here this afternoon. Colin Bond finishing in third place. And that was a mighty effort. That little car of yours really does go so well around here.
Well, it does, Gary. I must admit that when we got our qualifying tyres on, it feels fantastic, actually. The car set up on Pirellis today. It did stay in there, but I must admit that Tony and Jim had the legs on us, and they deserved to come first and second. But I really would like to thank the boys that put in so much effort on the car. They had to finish building a motor Friday night, and it's gone like a rocket all weekend. And, of course, to our major sponsors, Ignis Fridges and Agipoils, for all their support throughout the year.
OK, thanks very much, Colin. The winner in the under 2 litre category, John Smith. And what a mighty battle that was with Mike Quinn all the way through the race.
Thanks very much, Gary. Probably that's the hardest race I've driven in our little cars for the 2 years, I think. And congratulations to Quino and the Bob Holden team for putting on such a hard race. Also, too, obviously, the boys and the crew. We've worked very hard with our little cars, and we get the rough end of the pineapple at a lot of circuits, but at least we can catch up a little bit here. And my congratulations to Tony, Graham and Danny and everybody from Team Toyota for supplying with such a marvellous little car.
OK, thank you very much, John Smith. And Neil Crompton's going to join me. I think he might have some late information here from the 24-hour race in Spa, so we'll pass that on to you.
Yes, thanks, Wilco. The situation, as we understand it from just a few moments ago, sees Walkinshaw leading the Spa 24-hour race from Gerhard Berger in the BMW, then Armin Hahner. The news from the Mobile Holden dealer team is that the Neil Lowe Kent Bagent car is up into 14th position. No details at this stage on Peter Brock or Alan Grice.
OK, just time to have a quick word with Brad Jones, who drove the Mitsubishi Starion today and had a few problems out there at different stages. You were blowing a lot of smoke at one stage.
Yeah, the car felt good halfway stage, and I thought we might be able to give Bondi and Tony a bit of a run, but it was using oil and developed a bit of a vibration, and so we had to nurse it home. But for the first run, the car went really well.
I guess commiserations are due to Glenn Seaton and the Nissan guys. I don't see them in the immediate vicinity, but 136 laps for a young bloke like Glenn, I guess you can commiserate with him particularly.
I certainly can. It's good to get to the finish. It's a bit hard when you go that far and have to stop without anything.
Well, congratulations on a fine effort, and I guess you've got a lot of high hopes for the remainder of the endurance rounds coming up.
Yes, well, we're doing 2 others, Surface and Bathurst, and this is really our first decent run in the car, so to finish 4th, it's excellent.
OK, we'll look forward to seeing you there. We'll get Jim Richards back in just for one moment, if we can, talking about Bathurst, of course, the big event coming up on October 5th. Congratulations again, Jim. You've got Sandown to Surface and Sandown to contend with yet, and then Bathurst. But, of course, you know, those British people are talking about coming back with their Rovers and so on. How do you think you're going to stack up against that kind of opposition this year?
Well, I think that there's a BMW running second at Spa at the moment. It's probably reasonably close. I can't see why our car can't be running as fast as that one. So they're doing well over there, so I can't see why we can't do well against them on our home tracks.
Well, last year, the imported machinery, and I guess we've got to put yours in that category as well, really did show the Commodores the way to go at Bathurst. Do you think that's going to be the same case again this year?
Well, I hope so. But, no, realistically, I think we're probably lacking a little pace. But the longer the race, the better it is for us, because we can lap consistently fast all day, and nothing really slows us down. So at the end of the race, I think we won't be far away.
OK, we look forward to some great racing to come. Congratulations again, Jim Richards. A fantastic victory in the Better Brakes 300 here at Amaroo Park this afternoon. Don't forget, as I said, Bathurst, October 5, the James Hardy 1000. See you then.